Chapter 5288. But for the current Lin Yi, just adjusting his thoughts was useless, because he only had a little bit of star ink charcoal's consciousness left, and there was no place to replenish it. It was like training with one's body, but there was no energy in the world. How was he supposed to train? Fortunately, he learned about the divine knowledge grass from Duanmuyu in time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a timely help. Lin Yi looked at her and asked, "Do many people know about the divine knowledge grass?" "It's very rare because the divine sense grass is a secret that has been passed down from my master. Even the ancient books related to this ancient trial ground don't have any records of it. Besides me, I'm afraid none of the other trial disciples know about it." Duanmuyu suddenly paused and said thoughtfully, "Now that you know about it, suddenly asking this, is it because you have some kind of crooked idea?" "What crooked idea?" Lin Yi froze for a moment, then reacted and laughed. "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" Duanmuyu smiled. Of course, she knew that Lin Yi was not such a person, otherwise she would not have taken the initiative to say it. "So, only you and I know about the existence of the divine knowledge grass? Why are you telling me such an important thing?" Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. In the face of a rare heavenly material like the divine knowledge grass, it was normal for cultivators to fight to the death, and his relationship with Duanmuyu was far from inseparable. What was this woman thinking? No reason, just a whim. Duanmuyu's face showed a rare playfulness. Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame. He didn't know that this woman had such a playful side in addition to being a tomboy. Women were really fickle creatures. To be precise, it should be considered as returning a plum for a peach. "I think you're a pretty good partner. You're trustworthy and trustworthy. At the very least, you won't have evil thoughts and kill me to seize my treasure," Duanmuyu explained with a serious expression. This was not just a whim, but a decision made after careful consideration. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this ancient trial ground. There was the water lotus protector, the brain-eating insect envoy, and the ancient giant lizard. Each of them was an existence that was almost undefeatable. More importantly, there was a lord that was above them. Just thinking about it made one tremble in fear. Moreover, the divine knowledge grass was an extremely rare and precious heavenly treasure. Who knew what kind of terrifying spirit beast they would encounter? Even if he used his toes to think about the dangers involved, it would not be easy to collect the divine sense grass, so Duanmuyu had to find a reliable partner in any case, and Lin Yi was an excellent ready-made candidate. There aren't many people who can kill you. Why not find someone weaker than you to work with? This way you won't have anything to worry about. Lin Yi smiled. This was the truth. Although Duanmuyu was only at the Foundation establishment grade perfection, her Yi Ling sect martial arts techniques were extremely mysterious. If she really wanted to escape, even Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, who were at the gold core perfection, might not necessarily be able to kill her, let alone others. Then it's better not to find one. Duanmuyu rolled her eyes at him. Even her own strength was enough to protect herself at most. If she really encountered a terrifying spirit beast, it would be difficult for her to even protect herself. If she found someone weaker than her, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? That's true. How about this, after we find the divine knowledge grass, we split it in half? Lin Yi suggested. No problem. Duanmuyu had no objection to this. Although she was the one who provided the information about the divine knowledge grass, she did not know its specific location after all. She didn't even know if it really existed. Moreover, if they really encountered trouble, it would definitely be Lin Yi who would take the lead, so it was not a loss for her to take half. In that case, let's hurry up. Lin Yi immediately took the lead and walked forward, muttering faintly in his heart. Just now, Shui Jianfeng also hurried in this direction. Although it was not strange that everyone's destination was the river of divine knowledge, he always felt that things were not so simple. The two of them were not far from the location of the river of divine knowledge. In addition, Lin Yi could also pull out the water lotus doppelganger to show the way. Compared to others who could only follow the map, they could walk a lot less in vain. After only half a day, Lin Yi and Duanmuyu arrived at the legendary river of divine knowledge. When they saw the scene in front of them, both of them were shocked and could not say a word for a long time. In their previous expectations, since the river of divine knowledge was located in the deep mountains and dense forests, it would not be very big. At most, it would be an ordinary forest river, but they did not expect that it was not the case at all. The river of divine sense that was reflected in his eyes could only be described with a few words: magnificent and majestic. The surface of the river was shrouded in a faint layer of fog, and the other side could not be seen at a glance. Even Lin Yi's divine knowledge could not detect it. Even if the inexplicable fog interfered with the divine knowledge, It at least proved that the river of divine knowledge was more than several kilometers wide. No one has been here before. Lin Yi carefully looked around the coast and found no traces left by human cultivators. It could be seen that even if someone came to the river of divine knowledge, they would definitely not be in this area, but in another section of the river. But Duan Muyu paused and said doubtfully, "It is said that the river of divine knowledge can temper the divine knowledge, but I don't feel anything different about this river." In this primordial smelting trial, almost everyone had come for the river of knowledge. However, no one knew what mysteries the river of knowledge possessed or how to temper one's divine sense. Everything could only be figured out on the spot when they arrived. Maybe it's the effect of the river water? Lin Yi thought for a while and immediately dipped his hand in the river water. Not only did he carefully sniff it, but he also directly licked it with his tongue. This was a quite risky move. After all, no one knew what was wrong with the river of divine knowledge. What if the river water was poisonous? However, Lin Yi dared to try it rashly because he was a spirit body and had the holy water pearl in his hand. However, the result of the attempt made him speechless. This water was simply ordinary river water. There was nothing special about it. If he was an ordinary cultivator, it would not be surprising that he could not detect the mystery, but he was Lin Yi, and he was a spirit body that was most sensitive to divine knowledge energy. If this river water really had the effect of tempering the divine knowledge, how could he not feel it at all? Chapter 5289. Lin Yi glanced at her and immediately took out a wooden bowl from the jade pendant space, scooped a bowl full of river water and handed it to her. "Warrior, drink this bowl of spiritual knowledge river water." Duan Muyu rolled her eyes, took the wooden bowl and took a sip, smacking her lips while frowning. "Except for the slight bitterness, this is just ordinary river water. It can be seen that the key is definitely not in the river." Lin Yi concluded. "Then where is the key?" Duan Muyu asked. "In the river." Lin Yi was very sure. If this river of spiritual knowledge was just an ordinary river, he would definitely not think so, but this river was not only extremely wide, but it was also shrouded in a layer of inexplicable fog. No matter how he looked at it, it was unusual. If there was nothing strange about it, Lin Yi would feel strange instead. "Do you want to go down and have a look?" Duan Muyu asked. Although the river could not be seen at a glance, the nearby river water was still very clear, and even the bottom of the river could be seen at a glance. If they just explored near the shore, even if they encountered danger, they could escape in time. There should not be any big problems. It's best not to do this unless it's a last resort. Lin Yi shook his head decisively. Although he couldn't say why, his intuition told him that this river was definitely not simple. If they rashly went down the river, they might encounter a terrible crisis. "But besides going down the river, what else can we do?" Duan Muyu said helplessly. "Let's not worry about the river of spiritual knowledge for now. Let's find the spiritual knowledge grass first." "Didn't you say it was near the river of spiritual knowledge?" Lin Yi suggested. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge could be put aside for now. It would not be too late to figure out what to do next. In contrast, the spiritual knowledge grass was more important. If they could find the spiritual knowledge grass, it did not matter much whether the river of spiritual knowledge could temper the spiritual knowledge. "Not nearby but in the river," Duan Muyu said. "In the river?" Lin Yi was surprised when he heard this and could not help frowning. Is the so-called effect of the river of spiritual knowledge referring to the spiritual knowledge grass? "That's possible." Duan Muyu nodded. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge was only recorded in a very small number of ancient books, but there was no substantial conclusion that could be passed down. The so-called tempering of spiritual knowledge was only a very vague description. Maybe it was referring to the spiritual knowledge grass, but it was not clearly mentioned in the ancient books. "So we really have to go down there?" Lin Yi couldn't help but have a headache. His intuition was rarely wrong. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to go into the river. "That's not necessarily the case. We can wait for the river to ebb, then we can go down the river to find the spiritual knowledge grass, as long as we come up in time before the tide rises," Duan Muyu said. This was a method passed down by her master. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to find the divine sense grass growing in the river. "All right." Lin Yi's eyes lit up. Such a wide and boundless river would definitely have high and low tides. Even if it was still risky to wait until the tide was low, it was much less risky than entering the river rashly. This method was feasible. After the two agreed on the plan, they meditated and rested by the river, while conserving their energy and waiting for the tide to ebb. Not long after, the river slowly receded, and the bottom of the river near the shore was revealed to the two. Lin Yi and Duan Muyu got up at the same time, glanced at each other, and went down the river to look for the divine sense grass. However, although the tide was ebbing, the river was not completely drained, only a small part of the riverbed was exposed. Lin Yi and Duan Muyu could only hurry up and search this part of the riverbed. When the tide rose, they would have to hurry back to the shore and wait for the next ebb. What the two did not expect was that the bottom of the river of spiritual knowledge was unexpectedly green, with all kinds of water plants everywhere. It was not easy to find the divine sense grass that they had never seen before, even if Duan Muyu knew some of its general characteristics. It would not be easy. Let's take our time. There is no limit to the number of times we can search. This time we will first search a section and next time we will search another section. If there really is a divine sense grass, I believe we will find something. Linny said. And then let's start from the deepest riverbed and wait for the tide to rise before we go to the shore. This way we will have a little more time. Duan Muyu suggested. Okay. Linny nodded. The two immediately began to search the riverbed closest to the center of the river. This place was 3 or 4 miles from the shore, but even so, with Lin Yi's divine sense, he could not detect how wide the river was at the moment, let alone the boundary of the other side. This river of spiritual knowledge was really a bit wide. People who did not know might think it was a sea. This mud is a bit deep. Lin Yi frowned when he walked halfway. At this time, the mud had already reached his thigh. According to this, when they reached the farthest end, the mud would at least reach his chest. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to even move a step, let alone find the divine sense grass in this environment. Even if they waited until the tide rose, they would not be able to retreat, and even their lives would be lost in the river. However, this was only for ordinary people. For a master of the foundation establishment stage, it was nothing. At most, there would be some hindrance in their movements. Linny was still a soul body. Although all the parts in his body were still there, his weight was much lighter than his body. As long as he controlled it a little, even if he stood on the mud, he would not sink. Of course, Lin Yi actually had a more convenient method, which was to transform into a soul body. However, he always felt that this place gave him an inexplicable sense of crisis. If something happened to his soul body, he might not even have a chance to react, so he did not dare to do this rashly. On the other hand, Duan Muyu was also calm, walking on the mud as if she was walking on flat ground. She looked more elegant and neat than Lin Yi, and she was also silent. Seeing Lin Yi looking at her in surprise, she smiled and explained, "Silent leaf fall is a specialized light body martial technique of our Yiling sect." Very good. Lin Yi sincerely praised. This was not a compliment. With his insight, he could see the value of silent leaf fall. Using it to deal with the mud was really overkill. This kind of silent light body martial technique could only show its greatest value in actual combat. As the eldest senior sister of Yiling sect, Duan Muyu was indeed not simple. Duan Muyu smiled slightly, and then began to carefully search for the divine sense grass in the omnipresent pile of water plants. Lin Yi also did not neglect. This place was not suitable to stay for long and they had to move quickly. The two of them were very efficient, but even so they still found nothing. When the tide rose, they returned to the shore empty-handed and looked at each other. Chapter 5290. Well, it's getting dark now. Let's conserve our energy and wait for the tide to ebb tomorrow morning before going to the next riverbed to look for it. Lin Yi nodded. Although they had gained nothing today, at least there was no unexpected danger. It could be seen that the idea of going down the river to look for it when the tide ebbs should be right. It was nothing more than whether they could find the divine knowledge grass in the end. This matter not only depended on effort but also depended on luck. All the two of them could do was do their best. For safety reasons, the two did not stay on the shore for the night. Instead, they found a nearby big tree and made a medium-sized tree hole with their bare hands, so that they could rest in the hole with peace of mind. Lin Yi also deliberately summoned the water lily doppelganger to inquire about the whereabouts of Cold and the others. After confirming that everyone was not in danger for the time being and that they were all resting in a place not far from the river of divine knowledge, he was relieved. The night was quiet and there was no one around. A man and a woman alone in a tree hole. Most women would feel uncomfortable, but Duan Muyu did not have such concerns at all. While resting, she was also carefully looking at Lin Yi. "Why are you looking at me?" Lin Yi could not help but stop in surprise. Are you practicing withered leaf rejuvenation?" Duan Muyu asked with a strange expression. Her perception was far more sensitive than ordinary people, and the chi fluctuations on Lin Yi's body just now were too familiar to her. Although she only said a little bit of the essence and did not reveal any cultivation method, it was reasonable to say that there should be no way to practice it, but the problem was that the other party was Lin Yi. Since this guy could even imitate the unique skill of the evil cultivator, the soul hook hand, let alone withered leaf rejuvenation? Can't I? Linny looked at her and said. I don't care. Anyway, even if you really practice it, it's your own exploration. Duanmu shrugged. Although it was a little irresponsible to turn a blind eye, it was their business how they wanted to explore and research, and she really couldn't control it. Don't worry. Actually, I'm not really going to cultivate your leaf spirit sex spring rejuvenation. If I'm not wrong, your leaf spirit sex techniques complement each other. I'll have to cultivate them from the beginning. It's impossible for me to cultivate spring rejuvenation on my own, right? Linny speculated. You can even guess that? You're really a freak. Duanmu could not help saying in surprise. Just as Linny had said, the essence of all of leaf spirit sex techniques was a progressive progression from shallow to deep. It was a very complete system. If one didn't grasp the essence of the basic techniques, no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to cultivate an advanced technique like rejuvenation withered leaves. Of course, if one could even grasp the essence of rejuvenation withered leaves, then grasping the essence of the basic techniques would be a matter of course. They wouldn't need to cultivate it specifically. You flatter me. Linny chuckled. In fact, he was able to speculate this not just because he had extraordinary insight, but mainly because his real body's level was high enough and his horizons were broad enough. He had seen all kinds of mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques, so his judgment was naturally accurate. If you're not going to cultivate spring rejuvenation withered leaves, then what are you doing? Duanmu could not help asking. I vaguely feel that the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves is very useful to me, but I don't know how to use it specifically. I need to explore and study it carefully, Linny said honestly. To put it bluntly, the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves was to forcibly awaken hidden vitality. To a certain extent, it was somewhat similar to the super-physical skills and ultimate physical skills that he had previously mastered. However, there were also major differences. After all, the latter purely stimulated the physical body, allowing it to have a stronger reaction speed. It was impossible for it to be like spring rejuvenation withered leaves that could restore the vital chi in the body, let alone have the miraculous effect of self-healing. Comparing the two, it was obvious that spring rejuvenation withered leaves was much more exquisite. However, whether it was restoring vital chi or self-healing, these two miraculous effects of spring rejuvenation withered leaves were of little value to Lin Yi. This was because not only did he know them, but he also had no sequelae. If he used spring rejuvenation withered leaves, he would definitely be in a weak state for a long period of time. That would be really fucked up. Lin Yi would not do something so stupid as to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away. Of course, although it was of little value, Lin Yi still tried to figure it out. He wanted to master the trick and draw inferences. He did not need vital chi or healing, but if similar effects could be transferred to the primordial spirit, then it would be worth it. Don't forget that he was now a primordial spirit body. Duanmu silently looked at Lin Yi's various explorations and deductions. The profound mystery revealed from time to time really opened her eyes. This kind of feeling could be said to be unprecedented. Even her master had never made her unable to see through it. One had to know that her master was not an ordinary master of the Gold Core stage, but a real Yuanying stage old monster, standing at the top of the entire ancient small underworld. It was a pity that the top of the ancient small underworld was just like that. It was completely incomparable to the Heaven Stage Island. How could a mere Yuanying stage old monster be compared with a freak like Lin Yi who could even kill the giants of the mountain opening period? The two of them sat silently like this for a long time. Suddenly Duanmu opened her eyes. She felt that Lin Yi's aura had inexplicably soared a lot in a moment, but now that she looked at it, there was nothing strange about Lin Yi's body, and there was no difference from just now. She couldn't help muttering, "Is it my illusion?" Lin Yi did not pay attention to her. It seemed that he was still immersed in his own exploration and deduction and was unaware of the outside world. Duanmu even believed that even if she stabbed him at this time, Lin Yi would not have the slightest reaction. Is this guy really insensitive, or is he too confident in me? Duanmu couldn't help but shake her head speechlessly. While continuing to meditate and rest, she carefully watched the movements outside. Since Lin Yi did not care about the outside world, this kind of thing could only be borne by her. What Duanmu didn't expect was that Lin Yi's sitting time was much longer than she expected. Huh? The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Lin Yi finally opened his eyes slowly, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then he returned to normal. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Big brother, it has already ebbed 5 times. Duanmu said angrily. What? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He clearly just groped and deduced in his mind. It didn't take much time. Chapter 5291. Moreover, she did not dare to go down the river alone to find the divine sense grass. The key was Lin Yi's current state. Duanmuyu did not feel at ease leaving him alone, so she could only stay and accompany him patiently. In this kind of situation, anyone would be angry. 3 days. Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame and quickly apologized with a smile. I'm sorry, I accidentally fell into a trance. Forget it, there is no time limit for this matter anyway, I'll just take it as a rest. Duanmuyu waved her hand generously and then said with a bit of envy in her tone, but you are really amazing, you can casually enter a state of emptiness in this kind of place, your perception must be amazing, it's really enviable. After emptiness was an epiphany, and this state was a rare opportunity for every cultivator. Apart from a very small number of people, most people would only be able to enter a state of emptiness a few times in their lifetime. Even Duanmuyu had only experienced it once. It was during that moment of emptiness and epiphany that she was reborn, and she became the eldest senior sister who was the pillar of the entire Yiling sect in one go. In a place where danger lurked everywhere, Lin Yi was able to enter a state of emptiness so effortlessly. What was there to say about that? It's just a coincidence. Lin Yi said modestly, but his whole temperament was obviously much more brilliant than before. It could be seen that he must have gained something, and the harvest should not be small. If even a freak like you is so modest, how can we mortals live? Duanmuyu curled her lips and looked at the sky outside. According to the experience of the past 2 days, the tide should begin to ebb soon. Okay, then let's hurry up. Lin Yi nodded. Because of that sudden enlightenment, they had already missed 3 days of time. Neither of them wanted to waste any more time and immediately rushed towards the river of consciousness. Duanmuyu had already scouted the place 2 days ago, and had planned out the riverbed they would explore every day. Lin Yi only needed to follow her. After their first experience, the two of them were much more familiar with the path this time around. They had more or less learned about how to identify the aquatic plants, so their efficiency was clearly much higher. Last time, when the tide rose, the two of them had only explored less than 5 kilometers of the riverbed. Now there was still more than half the time before the tide rose, but the two of them had already explored 5 kilometers. Their progress was much faster than they had expected. When they found about 15 miles, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. In the dense pile of aquatic plants not far ahead, there was a plant that was completely different from the other aquatic plants. The whole body was dark black and had no leaves. It was just a slender and narrow branch. The surface of the branch was densely covered with thorns. Because it was covered by other aquatic plants and silt, it looked inconspicuous at first glance, but it exuded an inexplicable dangerous light. Something that could make a master like Lin Yi feel danger was definitely not an ordinary plant. Divine knowledge grass. Lin Yi suddenly rejoiced. The various characteristics of this plant were exactly the same as what Duanmuyu had described before. There was no doubt that this was the divine knowledge grass. Really? Duanmuyu, who was not far away, heard Lin Yi's voice and quickly rushed over. Following the direction pointed by Lin Yi, she carefully observed the unique plant and then showed a look of ecstasy. Yes. This is the divine knowledge grass. This is the divine knowledge grass. Lin Yi himself wasn't completely sure at first, but since even Duanmuyu said so, then it was for sure. He said excitedly, "Let's hurry up and dig it out, it looks like the tide's about to rise." Duanmuyu nodded heavily and quickly went up to carefully clean up the whole divine knowledge grass. She found that its roots were deeply buried under the riverbed silt. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull it out. She was a master of the foundation establishment great perfection. "You cut off the branches first, I will think of a way to get the roots," Lin Yi said when he saw this. If there was enough time, he could still think of a way. After all, a complete divine knowledge grass was better than a divine knowledge grass with broken roots. It was just that the high tide was imminent. No one knew what would happen after the high tide, so he could only act in a hurry. Duanmuyu did not hesitate. She immediately took out a simple knife and was about to cut off the divine knowledge grass. However, at this moment, a strange-looking figure suddenly descended from the sky. An unparalleled airwave instantly sent the two of them flying. At the same time, it was accompanied by a familiar voice. "I finally found you." Brain-eating insect. Lin Yi was shocked. It wasn't easy for him to find the spirit grass, and he didn't even have time to be happy about it. He didn't think that his old enemy would find it at the last moment. His luck was really too good. Duanmuyu was also shocked. The brain-eating insect was in existence at the same level as the water lotus protector. With her strength, she was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. How could she encounter this monster at this time? Duanmuyu looked at the divine knowledge grass under the other party's feet. It was so easy to get, but she had missed it. She was really unwilling. Linny was also extremely regretful. If he knew this would happen, he would not have avoided arousing suspicion. He should have put the divine knowledge grass directly into the jade pendant space when he found it. When the time came, he could have taken it out and split it with Duanmuyu. That way he would not have ended up in this situation. At this time, the divine knowledge grass was being stepped on by the brain-eating insect. There was no chance to take it back. I will find a way to stall it. You go first. Linny said immediately. Now was not the time to worry about the divine knowledge grass. If he missed the divine knowledge grass, he could find it again, but if he lost his life here, then there would be nothing left. But Duanmuyu hesitated for a moment. Although she was a tough woman, she was not as open-minded as Lin Yi. She felt unwilling to leave like this, but in the face of the power of the brain-eating insect, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and nod. Duanmuyu immediately retreated to the river bank, but before she could take 2 steps, a dozen tangible and invisible wind blades had already roared towards her. This was the innate skill of the ancient Gomang clan. Duanmuyu was shocked. The power of any wind blade here could easily kill a golden core stage master, let alone a mere foundation establishment stage cultivator like her. Even Lin Yi did not dare to take such a strong attack head-on. If she wanted to save her life, she could only rely on herself. At the critical moment, Duanmuyu's figure suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving only a leaf that slowly fell down. The fall of a leaf signified the arrival of autumn. Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Duanmuyu was also a genius. Otherwise he could only watch the other party die and he would really feel guilty. Chapter 5292. At this time it was completely in combat mode. Its entire body had transformed into an extremely hideous shape. It had the wings of the primordial Gomang, the body of the red-scaled serpent, the steel claws of the 8-armed mountain king, the stinger of the venomous queen bee, and a terrifying head that was armed to the teeth with unknown characteristics of many powerful spirit beasts. It was an out-and-out killing machine. Lin Yi frowned as he looked at this guy. Although the brain-eating bug and the water lotus protector were at the same level, if he could choose, Lin Yi would definitely choose the water lotus protector. Even if he could not directly store it in the space of the jade pendant, Lin Yi would rather choose the water lotus protector. This was because the water lotus protector was skilled, and even if it was a nearly unsolvable and complicated technique like the moon's reflection, with Lin Yi's vision and insight, he would always be able to find flaws and find a way to deal with it. However, the brain-eating bug was different. This guy was clearly an existence that relied on its body to survive. It was not an exaggeration to say that its body was the strongest at the same level. If it was only at the level of Foundation Establishment Great Perfection, Lin Yi's methods would be enough to crush it head-on. However, the problem was that it was at least at the level of Golden Core Great Perfection. Facing Lin Yi, it had an absolute level of suppression. In this case, it had the most tenacious vitality and the strongest defense. It was simply invulnerable. Last time, Lin Yi used 2 vital energy bombs to deal with it, but in the end he did not even hurt a single hair on it. This had already explained everything. With Lin Yi's current attack power, he could not even break through the brain-eating bug's defense. How could he fight it? Seeing Lin Yi's uncertain expression, the brain-eating bug suddenly laughed. Although it was a little interested in Duanmuyu who used falling leaves to predict autumn, it obviously valued Lin Yi more. Its focus had always been on Lin Yi. This time, don't even think of escaping from my palm. I will never make the same mistake twice. Is that so? Are you sure you can catch up to me? Lin Yi revealed a playful look when he heard this. Facing the brain-eating insect, he had no confidence in other aspects, but he had absolute confidence in speed. After all, it was faster than his own body. Even if the brain-eating insect was strong, it couldn't be compared to a profound ascending stage master, right? There's no need for that. As long as I catch that woman just now, you won't escape. The brain-eating worm had learned its lesson this time, so it was obviously much more cunning. If it had held Cold and the others as hostages previously, Lin Yi would not have dared to escape at all. It was only because of its carelessness that Lin Yi managed to take advantage of the situation. Hee, it's clearly just an insect. I didn't expect it to be so good at judging people. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. Hee, we don't look at people with our eyes but with our noses. Every one of you has a different smell. Different people have different smells. Human nature can be faked, but the smell in your bones cannot be faked. The brain-eating bug proudly showed off. Is that so? That's a good lesson. Linny nodded and learned. This time he was really caught by the brain-eating bug. If he didn't have much contact with Duan Muyu before this, it wouldn't matter much. He could just turn a blind eye to it. But now he couldn't ignore it. If Duan Muyu couldn't leave, he would definitely stay and fight to the end. You're welcome. Otherwise you should be more tactful. Don't worry, it's rare to meet such a unique human master like you. I won't let you disappear for no reason. I will take you as my main body. From now on you are me and I am you. We are one. The brain-eating bug said excitedly. You and I are one? Lin Yi listened with a strange face. If it really reached that step, it was uncertain who would swallow who. Even if the brain-eating bug had a powerful brain-eating talent, his Yuanshin was not just a decoration. It was hard to say. How about it? If you take the initiative to cooperate, I can save you a lot of unnecessary pain. The brain-eating bug was still persuading him patiently. It was not that it was bored and wasting its breath, but it was afraid that it would accidentally damage Lin Yi's brain when they fought. This kind of thing often happened. Once the brain was damaged, it couldn't eat the brain anymore. You can't really think that my brain is damaged, right? Lin Yi looked at it like it was an idiot. It wanted him to surrender and let it swallow his brain. Only it could think of such a thing. Not satisfied? Then I will take a step back and leave a little bit of your consciousness for you to share a main body with me. That should be fine, right? The brain-eating bug continued to bargain. It could be seen that it was determined to get Lin Yi's body. If it wasn't afraid of damaging Lin Yi, it would have already slapped him with its claws. It wouldn't be so long-winded. Let me ask you a question. Since your current body is so powerful, at least 1,000 times stronger than mine, why do you still insist on using me as your main body? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. In his opinion, the brain-eating bug was much more domineering than a human. Its entire body was full of killing weapons, and it would definitely have an advantage in a fight. If possible, he didn't even mind exchanging with the brain-eating bug. Of course, the main body had to be a human. He couldn't accept it if the main body turned into an insect. There's no harm in telling you. You humans may have weak bodies, but you are the spirit of all living things. No matter how powerful other species are, they are still limited by their racial talent. There is only one possibility. You humans may have a low starting point, but you have countless possibilities. If coupled with my brain-eating talent, you will be an invincible existence. Moreover, a high-level spirit beast will always need a human body to be on the stage. Otherwise, it will be laughed at by other spirit beasts, the brain-eating bug explained patiently. So that's how it is. Lin Yi suddenly understood. No wonder this guy wanted to catch him no matter what. It seemed like this guy's brain-eating talent was heaven-defying, but it also had a limit. There might be an upper limit to the species it could devour. Most spirit beasts only had one racial talent, and it was rare for them to have more than two. In this case, every time it devoured, it would only gain one more skill. However, humans were different. There were tens of thousands of cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. With the brain-eating bug's ability, it could even take all the cultivation methods and martial arts techniques as its own. Moreover, it didn't need to cultivate them from the beginning. Just the thought of it made people shudder. Chapter 5293. Okay, the nonsense that should be said and should not be said has been said. You can also obediently accept your fate. The brain-eating insect suddenly laughed extremely sinisterly. Its eyes flashed red, and an invisible force field suddenly spread out from its body. Wherever it passed, the riverbed silt suddenly sank a lot, as if it was being crushed by something heavy. Lin Yi also felt his body sink. Although it was not to the point where he could not bear it, with this inexplicable force field on his body, the speed and flexibility of his movement technique would be greatly affected. However, the brain-eating insect's target this time was obviously not Lin Yi, but Duan Muyu, who had just used knowledge of autumn to hide. Sure enough, Duan Muyu, who did not reveal any flaws before, suddenly exposed herself. Although she did not directly reveal herself, two suddenly sinking footprints appeared in the silt, just next to the divine knowledge grass. There was no doubt that it was Duan Muyu. Lin Yi could not help but be a little speechless. This woman was really brave. She knew the horror of the brain-eating insect, but she did not escape. She even dared to use knowledge of autumn to steal the divine knowledge grass. This courage was really unparalleled. Duan Muyu was about to take a knife to cut the divine knowledge grass at this time. After being caught off guard and revealing a flaw, she did not panic and still maintained the state of knowledge of autumn's concealment. The brain-eating insect suddenly opened its mouth in the direction of the footprints, and an unparalleled strong suction force suddenly poured out. The result was unexpected. In addition to sucking in a mouthful of silt, there was no trace of Duan Muyu at all. It's really interesting. The brain-eating insect laughed instead of being angry. If it were not for Lin Yi, a better choice, it even wanted to use Duanmuyu as its main body at this moment. In the face of its sudden force field, Duanmuyu did not panic and could calmly escape without even leaving a footprint. It must be known that this was a muddy land where one's feet would sink into the mud. The difficulty of this was extraordinary. Unfortunately, Duanmuyu did not manage to escape its grasp. The brain-eating bug's eyes flashed with red light again, and the invisible force field suddenly became several times stronger. Second layer pressure. Duanmuyu could no longer maintain her stealth state and immediately revealed herself. Before she could react further, the brain-eating insect had already landed right on top of her head. The venomous stinger pierced down at lightning speed. Duanmuyu had no time to react at all. At the critical moment, Lin Yi appeared in front of Duanmuyu at the same time and pushed him away. However, he could not dodge in time and his neck was pierced by the brain-eating insect's stinger from behind. It was a shocking scene. Duanmuyu's eyes immediately turned red with anxiety. Although her relationship with Lin Yi was far from being on the same side, they were at least trustworthy friends. Moreover, she was a person who valued friendship. Now that she saw Lin Yi dying for her, how could she not be anxious? I didn't expect him to be an infatuated person. But this is also good, it saves me a lot of trouble. The brain-eating bug was overjoyed when it saw this. It was most afraid that Lin Yi would escape again. If that happened, it did not know how much effort it would have to put in. It did not have such good patience. Just now, it pretended to deal with Duanmuyu to restrain Lin Yi. It did not expect Lin Yi to walk into its trap. This was really a pleasant surprise. Its stinger inherited the innate skill of the venomous queen bee. It was one of the world's few poisons, especially when it pierced through a vital point like the neck. Not to mention a mere human, even with its vitality, it would not be able to survive such a fierce attack. As a result, Lin Yi's head, which was clearly hanging down, showed a strange smile. His figure flashed and suddenly jumped on the brain-eating bug's face. He then stuffed one hand into the other's mouth, leaving behind a true chi pill firebomb that was compressed to the limit. Boom. The brain-eating bug's face was still full of shock. It had not even figured out how the other party broke free from its poisonous stinger, and the true chi pill firebomb had already exploded in its mouth. Don't look at how the two true chi pill firebombs last time could not hurt its hair, it only could not break the surface defense of its body. No matter how strong it was, its body should not be indestructible, right? The brain-eating bug was blown up on the spot. It immediately spat out black smoke and flew backward. It swayed for a long time and could not stand firm. Although it was unrealistic to kill it in a second, it must have been seriously injured. Are you okay? Duanmuyu looked at the intact Lin Yi and was stunned. His neck had obviously been pierced by the other party's stinger, so how could this guy be fine? I am a primordial spirit. What is the use of this kind of physical attack on me? Lin Yi grinned. At that moment, his neck had already been transformed into primordial spirit in advance. The other party's stinger did not even stab a single hair on him. He was just pretending to numb the other party. That's true. Duanmuyu could not help but choke. Because Lin Yi's primordial spirit was no different from ordinary people. Even if they knew that he was a primordial spirit, everyone would unconsciously ignore this point. The brain-eating bug, who did not know the details, was even more likely to fall for it. While the two of them were talking, the brain-eating bug on the opposite side had already recovered. Its entire mouth was charred black from the explosion, making it look rather comical and pathetic, but the pressure it brought to the two of them did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even stronger. Lin Yi sighed in his heart. The brain-eating bug is a brain-eating bug. Last time, the red-scaled snake was killed on the spot by this attack, but now it is just a little embarrassed. It seems that it is far from the point of injury. It is really troublesome. Who? The brain-eating bug did not become angry. Instead, it calmly spat out 3 mouthfuls of black smoke, then it stared at Lin Yi and said, "You can even ignore such a fatal attack. I really did not misjudge you. Who else can my main body but you? So, you really want to blackmail me?" Lin Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that after such a trick, the other party would become angry and give him an opportunity to take advantage of. Who would have thought that it would be such a reaction? Of course. The brain-eating bug laughed, and with a flap of its wings, it descended from the sky again. Its target was Lin Yi. Be careful and hide. Lin Yi took the time to tell Duanmuyu and immediately went to meet it head-on. Duanmuyu did not dare to neglect and quickly used silent falling leaves to hide to the side. At the same time, she was still holding a green leaf in her hand, ready to use falling leaves in autumn again at any time. She could not intervene in a battle of this level. It would be good enough if she could save her life and not drag Lin Yi down. Chapter 5294. Relying on its powerful body, the brain-eating insect was not afraid of any of Lin Yi's means. It did not hesitate to attack with its steel claw. Last time, it relied on this steel claw to explode the real Chi Pill firebomb, and this time was no exception. However, Lin Yi obviously would not be stupid enough to really confront it head-on. With the strength of the opponent's body, not to mention his Yuanshin body that was only at the Foundation Establishment Great Perfection, even if he was at the Profound Ascension stage, he might not be able to gain the slightest advantage. If he really did so, he would only be courting death. Accompanied by a deep dragon roar, a wave of 5 elements killing intent that seemed to have materialized shot out of his hand, meeting the other party's steel claws first. The result was unsurprising. In an instant, the other party grabbed it, leaving not even dregs behind. It was a classic case of striking a rock with an egg. Hee, is that all you have? The brain-eating insect sneered. In its opinion, this method was much weaker than the real Chi Pill firebomb just now. Although the real Chi Pill firebomb was simple and crude, its power could not be underestimated. If it was stuffed into its mouth, it could still cause some damage. As for this seemingly exquisite 5 elements murderous aura, it was nothing in front of it. Before it finished speaking, another 5 elements murderous aura had already attacked in front of it. The brain-eating insect suddenly became even more contemptuous. Once again, it lazily extended its steel claw, and at the same time taunted, "This power is not even enough to tickle me. Even if you do it 1,000 times or 10,000 times, it will still be the same, a waste of energy." However, this time, above the 5 elements murderous aura, there was an additional layer of dense 8 trigrams patterns. Compared to the previous 5 elements murderous aura, it was many times more mysterious and profound. It was like a real 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon. Not only did the brain-eating insect's steel claw fail to tear it apart, but it was bitten by it. The entire steel claw was broken in an instant, and in an instant, blood splashed all over the sky. The brain-eating bug immediately howled in pain. Even though it had been careless, its combat instincts were not just for show. Before its brain could react, its venomous stinger had already stabbed back. However, before it could stab, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon had already let out another dragon roar and whipped it away with its tail. It crashed heavily into the mud below, unable to extricate itself. This scene happened too quickly. Not to mention the brain-eating bug that was stunned, even Duanmuyu was dumbfounded by what he saw. It was clearly the same 5 elements murderous aura, but it couldn't even withstand a single blow just now. How did it become so powerful all of a sudden? What was even more shocking was where did Lin Yi go? Duanmuyu was confused, but the brain-eating bug was not stupid. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. Its brain worked very fast, and it looked at the 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon in the sky with great shock. "You're Lin Yi?" The 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon did not speak, but it revealed an extremely human-like expression. Clearly the brain-eating bug had guessed correctly. Was Lin Yi? How is this possible? Duanmuyu completely did not know what to say. She knew that Lin Yi was a primordial spirit, but primordial spirits were primordial spirits. As far as she knew, primordial spirits could only transform into the appearance of their original body. It was impossible to transform into other forms. She could not say that Lin Yi's original body was actually a flood dragon, right? Of course, Lin Yi was not a flood dragon. The reason why he could become what he was now was because of her, Duanmuyu. Originally, with Lin Yi's current low realm of Foundation Establishment Great Perfection, it was far from enough to perform a big killing move like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Until this time, when he had an epiphany, although his realm was still the same, his strength was very different because he had comprehended spring rejuvenation. Of course, what he comprehended was not the original version of spring rejuvenation. It was neither to restore vital energy nor heal oneself, but it was related to the primordial spirit. The human body had a self-protection mechanism, and the primordial spirit was the same. In theory, when it suffered a heavy enough injury, the primordial spirit would not directly collapse, but it would enter a self-dormant state like the body. That was to say, 70% of one's strength could be used at most, and the remaining 30% was used as a last resort for self-protection. There was a very strong valve between the two, and normally even if one wanted to use it, one could not. Yiling Sect's spring rejuvenation could open the valve of the physical body after the physical body was injured, and then restore to the peak state in a short period of time. However, this state was similar to the final radiance of the setting sun, so there were great sequelae. Now, after 3 days of epiphany, Lin Yi had successfully found the valve that locked the primordial spirit. Once the valve was opened, the strength of the primordial spirit could directly skyrocket by more than 30% or even more. Lin Yi's strength had already reached the limit of Foundation Establishment Great Perfection, and after it skyrocketed by 30%, he immediately became a gold core stage master. Even if it was only temporary, the extra strength was not fake. Of course, with such a huge gap in strength between him and the brain-eating insect, not to mention a temporary gold core, even a real gold core would be useless. At most, the power of the vital energy pill firebomb would be stronger, but it would still have limited effect on the brain-eating insect. Needless to say, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was not included. In terms of level, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was far above the gold core stage. After all, this was a move that was invincible even in the nascent soul stage. It was just that Lin Yi's realm was too low, and at the same time he encountered a freak like the brain-eating insect, so he seemed so powerless. However, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was different. Its level was much higher than the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Against the brain-eating insect, the level of the move was far more crushing than the actual strength of the brain-eating insect against Lin Yi. To put it bluntly, once the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was released, it was enough to completely reverse the difference in strength between the two. However, even if Lin Yi's strength had reached the temporary gold core stage, it was not enough to perform a profound martial skill like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Therefore he thought of a way. Relying on the convenience of his primordial spirit, he integrated his entire primordial spirit into it. In this way, not only did he successfully form the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura, but he also created a living 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon. You can actually transform into a dragon? Is this your real body? The brain-eating insect was completely shocked. Looking at the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon circling back and forth in the sky, it was full of fear. Looking at the entire spirit beast world, the dragon race had always been synonymous with being powerful and invincible. Even the flood dragon was the same. Although the brain-eating insect was gifted, it could not help but feel fear in the face of the dragon race. This was an instinct, a fear that came from the depths of its soul, and it could not be suppressed no matter how hard it tried. Why don't you guess? The 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon suddenly spoke, and it was Lin Yi's voice. Chapter 5295. Hehe, this is a good name. Okay, this will be my flood dragon form. Lin Yi readily accepted the advice and no longer talked nonsense with this guy. He immediately flew down toward the brain-eating insect. It should be known that there was a time limit for him to maintain the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form. He did not have to worry about the consumption of true qi, but the consumption of divine sense could not be made up. Therefore he estimated that the time limit of a stick of incense was the limit. If he could not kill the brain-eating insect within this time, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, with Lin Yi's extremely pragmatic style, if it were not for the first time being in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form, and he was not too proficient in controlling it, he would not even give the opponent the time to talk nonsense. He would definitely beat it to death without saying a word. He would kill, injure, and cripple it. The rest could be dealt with later. Hehe, you want to play close combat with me? I am the ancestor of close combat. Do you really think I will be afraid of you? The brain-eating insect was so angry that it laughed. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss, but if it was close combat, there was no better spirit beast in the world. It was now the ultimate killing weapon of various spirit beasts. Even if Lin Yi transformed into a flood dragon, what could he do? Before the voice died away, the snake body of the brain-eating insect surged. It originally only had 2 steel claws and one was bitten off by Lin Yi. As a result, it forcibly grew 6 steel claws. At first glance, it almost looked like a centipede. Lin Yi ignored it. At this moment he was in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon. Even his own temperament seemed to be affected, and he seemed to be a lot more indifferent than usual. Previously, when he looked at the brain-eating insect, he felt that this guy was shocking and very difficult to deal with, but now that he had transformed into the flood dragon form, he clearly looked down on the brain-eating insect. It was a kind of indescribable contempt. It was like a high-level spirit beast facing a low-level spirit beast. No matter how the other party called out, it would not really take it to heart. The reason was that it was not qualified. Go to hell. The brain-eating bug was instantly infuriated. This kind of gaze that looked at its prey had always been exclusive to it. When had it ever been looked at like this by others? The brain-eating bug frantically waved its steel claws and pounced forward. At least on the surface, its powerful body did indeed give it the upper hand, but unfortunately reality was extremely cruel. Whether it was its steel claws, tail stinger, or wings, it did not give it the slightest advantage. Instead, in less than a second, it was smashed down by Lin Yi with a sweep of its tail. Once again it sank deep into the mud, unable to extricate itself. The brain-eating bug refused to give up. It was at a disadvantage before because it was caught off guard, and now it was at a disadvantage because it did not figure out the opponent's strategy. Again. As a result, this time, it suffered even more serious injuries. Not only did it break another steel claw, but even its highly dangerous poisonous stinger was broken. The poison on it had no effect on Lin Yi at all. It was purely a decoration. Crushing. It was a complete one-sided suppression. Duan Muyu was completely speechless as he looked at this crazy scene. The brain-eating bug refused to give up again and again, but in the end, it was tortured by the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon that Lin Yi had transformed into. In the end, 3.5 of its 8 steel claws were broken, and only the last one was on the verge of collapse. Its poisonous stinger was gone, and one of the wings on its back was broken. Its whole body was covered with scars and bruises. It was a miserable sight. Duan Muyu even began to pity the brain-eating bug. It was clearly a tyrannical and invincible existence, but in the end, it encountered Lin Yi, a heaven-defying existence that could not be measured by common sense. The torturer became the torturer. Did this guy not look at the almanac when he went out? The brain-eating bug indeed did not look at the almanac. In this ancient trial ground, it was originally an existence that was above tens of thousands of people. This kind of feeling of not looking at the almanac when going out would only appear on others but never on it. Today was really an accident. It was a tragic sight, but the brain-eating bug still refused to give up and struggled to fly up. Its vitality was extremely tenacious. It can fly with one wing? What a talent! Lin Yi could not help but give it a thumbs up, but he did not show the slightest mercy. With a gulp, he obliterated its only remaining steel claw along with its wing. The brain-eating bug once again fell into the quagmire. Previously, it was majestic and domineering, but this time, it had completely turned into a mudfish. A fallen phoenix was inferior to a chicken. Impossible. 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 The brain-eating bug was still struggling frantically in the mud, but both of its wings had been broken and it could no longer fly. Close combat was the ability it was most proud of. Looking at the entire ancient trial ground, it could be called an invincible existence. After all, even the Lord did not use this method, but it did not expect to fall in the hands of Lin Yi today. Moreover, it was killed in the way that it was best at, in such a brutal melee. Is there a need to be so disappointed after losing to a dragon? Just how confident are you? Lin Yi could not help but be amused. That being said, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon actually had such a powerful melee ability. This was something that even he did not expect. He could not help but sigh. The dragon clan was indeed an invincible existence in the spirit beast world. This racial talent was simply ruthless. Of course, being able to form such a one-sided crushing was not entirely because of the strength of the dragon. Another important reason was that this was not a pure physical body, but a semi-divine body that was formed by the fusion of primordial spirit and spiritual energy. Every claw and every bite seemed to be a simple physical attack, but the main body was the extremely profound killing intent of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. In the face of the brain-eating bug's pure melee, it was naturally advantageous, so it was not surprising that it was crushed. My body is invincible. Even the dragon clan cannot be my opponent. Absolutely impossible. The brain-eating bug was still hypnotizing itself. Except for a few spirit beasts with a long lineage, the dragon clan was a mountain in the heart of every spirit beast. Most of them were only willing to bow down to them, but the brain-eating bug did not think so. Even if it could not surpass the dragon clan, it should at least be one of the very few, at least it thought so. However, today Lin Yi used the bloody facts to shatter its fantasy. Even an illusionary dragon could crush it like this, let alone a real dragon clan? After all, the dragon was only a close relative of the dragon clan and the snake race. It was far from being a real dragon. Chapter 5296. The tide is rising. At this moment, Duan Muyu suddenly shouted from below. It was a pleasant surprise that Lin Yi could crush the brain-eating bug so easily, but she didn't forget about the important matter at hand. The tide had begun to rise, and they hadn't even had time to pick the spiritual grass yet. However, when she shouted, the first to react was not Lin Yi but the brain-eating insect. Although it had been tortured into a miserable loach and seemed to be on the verge of collapse, the brain-eating insect still could not change its fierce and cunning nature. After hearing Duan Muyu's voice, it quickly drilled out of the mud. It really could not do anything to Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, but it could easily capture Duanmuyu. As long as there was a hostage in its hands, it would not be defeated, and it still had the capital to bargain. Duanmuyu was shocked and quickly used the falling leaves of autumn to hide. However, before she had time to escape, the inexplicable aura that appeared before suddenly descended again, and the pressure was much stronger and more violent than before. Trio. Duanmuyu instantly revealed herself, and at this moment the brain-eating insect was only one step away from her. Seeing that her body was about to be caught by the other party, it was too late for her to escape. At this moment, a dragon claw with the 8 trigrams pattern fell from the sky. The brain-eating insect was grabbed by the claw and then slammed into the mud. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free. "Are you okay?" Lin Yi glanced at Duanmuyu. To be precise, the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon glanced at Duanmuyu. "No, I'm fine." Although she knew that the other party was Lin Yi, being stared at by a dragon at such a close distance, Duanmuyu subconsciously felt a little flustered. At the same time, she also felt a little excited. This experience was unprecedented. After all, it was a dragon, a legendary existence. "It's good that you're okay." Before Lin Yi's voice fell, although the brain-eating insect's head was grabbed by him, the snake's body madly wrapped around him, and it was hysterical and powerful. After being whipped twice by it, even Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, could not bear it. The 8 trigrams pattern on his body suddenly dimmed a lot and began to show signs of deviation and dissipation. Not good. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the time limit was up, and he couldn't maintain his dragon form any longer. He quickly gathered all his remaining chi into the dragon claw, and with a sudden burst, the hard skull of the brain-eating worm exploded like a watermelon, turning into a pile of thick dirty water in the mud, and the stench of it assaulted his nose. At the same time, the flood dragon form of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flashed and disappeared. Lin Yi quickly returned to the appearance of a primordial spirit. His face was pale and he was clearly a little weak. "How are you?" Duanmuyu quickly held him up. Although she did not know the specific situation, she could roughly guess that it was most likely related to the essence of rejuvenating dead leaves that she had revealed to Lin Yi before. The reason why Lin Yi suddenly transformed into a flood dragon was probably because of this essence. Even if it was not the same thing as rejuvenating dead trees, similar methods always had similar side effects. After using it, it was inevitable that he would be weak for a period of time. "I'm fine. With the holy water bead, it won't be a big deal." Lin Yi forced a smile. The side effect of rejuvenating dead leaves was a very long period of weakness. It could be as short as 3 months or as long as a year and a half. Duanmuyu was able to recover so quickly, in addition to her own high talent, it was mainly because she did not use the complete version of rejuvenating dead leaves. What Lin Yi was using now was the mutated version of rejuvenating dead leaves. The side effects were not so troublesome, but still should not be underestimated. After all, the consumption was too great. Strictly speaking, because it was almost a one-sided crushing of the brain-eating worm just now, Lin Yi was not really injured. It was just pure consumption. However, the problem was that this consumption was not ordinary consumption, but the consumption after opening the last self-protection valve of the primordial spirit. This was serious. When Lin Yi's primordial spirit was overdrawn to this extent, it was not much better than being injured. Fortunately, the holy water bead could come in handy. Although this thing could not replenish his divine sense energy, it could at least stabilize his primordial spirit. Otherwise, at this moment, Lin Yi would not be able to retain his consciousness at all, and would have long laid down and entered a state of self-hibernation. While relying on the holy water bead to stabilize his primordial spirit, he absorbed the last remaining divine sense energy of the star ink charcoal. Lin Yi knew that he had to restore his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, a disaster would befall him if any accidents happened. Duanmuyu saw this and did not say anything else. She turned around and said to Lin Yi, "Get up. You're carrying me?" Lin Yi grinned and added subconsciously, "I'm a man." "Nonsense, I know you're a man. It's urgent, so what's wrong with carrying you? You've carried me before, so we're even," Duanmuyu urged. She did not take the barrier between men and women as seriously as ordinary girls. Otherwise, when she was carried by Lin Yi in her underwear, she would have been too ashamed to face anyone. How could she act with Lin Yi so openly now? Since even Duanmuyu did not mind, Lin Yi naturally did not care. Moreover, the tide had already risen, and he did not have the energy to move by himself for a while. This was the only choice he had. Lin Yi immediately climbed onto Duanmuyu's back. Although she was a tough woman, he could still smell a refreshing fragrance from her neck. Perhaps it was because she had been in contact with Yi all year round in Yiling's sect, but this fragrance was very different from that of ordinary women. Rather than saying it was a body fragrance, it was better to say that it was a kind of agarwood fragrance, which actually made him feel refreshed and refreshed. Behave yourself, don't breathe into my neck. Duan Muyu frowned and spat. I didn't do it on purpose. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He had overexerted himself, so it was natural for him to pant. How could he deliberately hold his breath at this time? Then don't breathe into my neck. Also, why are you so light? Duan Muyu muttered. She thought that a big man like Lin Yi would at least weigh more than 140 kilograms. She did not expect him to be so light on her back. If Lin Yi had not wrapped his arms around her neck, she was afraid that a gust of wind would blow Lin Yi away. I'm a spirit body, so of course I'm much lighter than you. Lin Yi smiled bitterly again. Normally he would not be so light, but now he had consumed too much energy. It was already very difficult for him to maintain the appearance of his spirit body. How could he care about whether it was solid or not? Chapter 5297. However, before she leaned over to cut it, Lin Yi on her back suddenly said, "Be careful." What? Duan Muyu was shocked, and then she saw a huge loach sweeping out from the mud pile. It was the brain-eating bug whose head was just crushed by Lin Yi. This guy was still alive. A centipede dies but does not fall down, not to mention the brain-eating bug's heaven-defying vitality. Lin Yi even suspected that it had swallowed the brain of some earthworm-type spirit beast. Even if the head was gone, the remaining body could still survive and become a new independent individual. I underestimated the enemy. Lin Yi could not help but sigh. If he had dealt with the body just now, there would not be so many problems. Unfortunately, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon form had reached its limit. If he had forcibly maintained it, he might have killed himself. He could only cancel it in advance, but he did not expect it to still leave a hidden danger. Unfortunately, it was too late to react now. Lin Yi's current state could not be said to be completely weak, but for a short period of time he really did not have any strength to speak of. The only way to save his life was to transform into a spirit and leave it to fate. However, that was the last resort. Although the spirit form would not be harmed most of the time, once it encountered a method similar to alchemic fire that restrained the spirit, it would immediately be doomed. Lin Yi would not dare to do this even if he was in his peak state, let alone now that he was so weak that he could not withstand a single blow. Maybe he would not even need to be specifically targeted. A strong wind would directly destroy his spirit. After all, the brain-eating bug was a brain-eating bug. Although it had been abused beyond recognition, this near-death sneak attack was still very powerful. Even if it was not even half of its peak state, it was enough to deal with the average gold core stage master. At this moment, Lin Yi even vaguely heard the excited cry of the brain-eating bug. As long as its sneak attack was successful, it could counterattack and then activate its brain-eating talent. Unfortunately, it forgot one thing. Although Duan Muyu was just an inconspicuous foundation establishment stage master, this woman's means were not as weak as her strength level. Boom. An iron leaf blocked the brain-eating insect's sneak attack at the last moment. The strength of the iron leaf was so strong that it actually forced the insect back. One leaf like a mountain. However, the opponent's attack was too strong, and Duan Muyu was also sent flying. Even so, she did not forget to take care of Lin Yi behind her. She forcibly flipped her body over before she fell into the pile of mud. Lin Yi was on top of her and she was on the bottom. She fell face first into the mud, and her face was covered in mud. Why bother? Lin Yi was slightly touched. In fact, there was no need for Duan Muyu to do this. He could jump away before he landed, but that would more or less damage his essence soul. Pooh! Duan Muyu spat out a mouthful of mud, which was poured into her nose. She spat it out without caring about her image and said casually, "It's okay. It's just a mouthful of mud. It's not a big deal." "You really are a tough woman," Lin Yi said sincerely. "Manly woman? What do you mean?" Duan Muyu frowned. "Miss is really a strong woman." Lin Yi changed the way he put it. Duan Muyu laughed when she heard this and did not take it to heart. Instead, she frowned and guarded against the brain-eating bug, which was dead but not dead. The mountain-like leaf just now was her strongest performance, but she did not expect that she still could not defeat a brain-eating bug that was on the verge of death. The gap between them was really shocking. Not only that, the most troublesome thing was that the brain-eating insect had completely turned into a loach at this moment. It quietly drilled into the thick mud, and even divine sense could not detect it. Silt could restrain the perception of divine sense to a great extent. Lin Yi had already experienced this when he was on Sky State Island. Back then he relied on this to avoid being locked on by Shishan Old Master's divine sense. Even if the two types of silt could not be compared, the effect was similar. Moreover, Duan Muyu's level of divine sense wasn't that strong. It was normal for him to not be able to find the brain-eating bug. If Lin Yi was not so weak now, with his powerful divine sense he might be able to lock on to the brain-eating insect. Unfortunately, this was a completely false proposition. He could only stabilize his essence soul by relying on the holy water pearl. Forcibly releasing his divine sense to search for the brain-eating insect was tantamount to self-harm or even courting death. Let's go. Lin Yi sighed. At this time the river was filling up bit by bit, and it was almost above his calves. The ominous feeling in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. His intuition told him that if he did not quickly return to the shore, he was afraid that something big would really happen. But Duan Muyu also knew that things were not good. Now she did not know where the brain-eating insect was hiding, but one thing was certain. If she continued to collect the divine sense grass, the other party would definitely attack again. She had just used 2 falling leaves in the autumn and 1 mountain-like leaf in succession, which consumed a lot of her chi. She might not be able to withstand another attack. Withdrawing and retreating was the wisest thing to do. However, the divine sense grass was right in front of her. Giving it up would be a waste of God's gift, and it might become a lifelong regret. Where there's life, there's hope. This divine sense grass is growing here and it won't run away. When I recover, I'll come back again. I just need to wait for 1 more day. Lin Yi comforted her. These words were a bit self-deceiving. The divine sense grass did grow here, and of course it could not run away, but was the brain-eating insect not interested in it? Maybe after they left, it would directly swallow it in 1 bite? Okay. Duan Muyu finally defeated her impulse with reason. After making up her mind, she carried Lin Yi on her back and retreated to the shore without hesitation. The two of them thought that the brain-eating worm would jump out to stop them, but there was no movement from the mud pile. They did not know if it had escaped or was still hiding in the mud and watching. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a figure on the distant shore quickly approached the two of them. After seeing the other party's appearance, Duan Muyu and Lin Yi's hearts thumped at the same time. The person who came was Xue Jianfeng. No one thought that they would actually meet this guy at this time and place. Oh hey, the two of you got together so quickly. Aren't you afraid of offending public decency in broad daylight? The two of you are really open, really romantic. Xue Jianfeng looked at Lin Yi and Duan Muyu with a mocking look. You better watch your mouth. Duan Muyu suddenly glared. Although she was a tough woman, it did not mean that she did not value a woman's reputation. If she allowed Xue Jianfeng to talk nonsense, she and Lin Yi would not be able to clear their names even if they jumped into the Yellow River. Chapter 5298. What do you know? Duan Muyu was completely furious. If it were not for the other party's gold core stage strength and the fact that she was carrying a weak Lin Yi on her back, she would have already slapped him. Okay, then I'll take it that I don't understand. But I really don't understand. Are you a tomboy too hungry and thirsty? You actually squeezed the martial granduncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island into this state. Are you going to die of ejaculation? That's great. As the saying goes, dying under a peony flower is also romantic. Although you, a tomboy, are not a peony flower, you still have some beauty. It's a blessing to die on a woman's belly. I can't be envious. Xue Jianfeng made sarcastic remarks and scrupulously, completely forgetting that his life was just saved by Lin Yi a few days ago. His despicable nature was completely revealed. You. Duan Muyu was furious, but she was interrupted by Lin Yi. He glanced at Xue Jianfeng and said faintly, What are you doing here? He, needless to say, of course, it's for the divine knowledge grass. Xue Jianfeng laughed loudly, his eyes staring straight at the divine knowledge grass that had been submerged by a little river not far away. You know about the divine knowledge grass? Duan Muyu was surprised. Of course I know. Otherwise, why do you think I took the trouble to come here? If I can't find the divine knowledge grass, this once-in-a-lifetime ancient trial is just a fart. Xue Jianfeng said proudly. Although there were very few people in the small ancient world who knew about the divine knowledge grass, his father was after all the deputy sect leader of the Snow Sword sect. He was also one of the big shots in the public, so it was not surprising that he knew some secrets. So you have been hiding on the shore and watching since just now? Lin Yi suddenly said in a deep voice. Yes, all of you are so fierce, how would I dare to come up rashly? Xue Jianfeng laughed. In fact, he did not know that Lin Yi and Duan Muyu were here at first, nor did he know that the two of them had found the spiritual consciousness grass. He was purely attracted by the brain-eating insect passing by in the sky. After that, he saw the confrontation between Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect from beginning to end and did not miss a single detail. To be honest, Shui Jianfeng was really shocked by the fierce strength of the two just now. He could not help but rejoice that he did not show himself rashly. Otherwise, even if he was an expert in the great perfection of the Gold Core realm, whether it was the brain-eating bug or the dragon Lin Yi, he would only be one-sidedly trampled. That would be terrible. Fortunately, he was wise enough to choose to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Moreover, God was also taking care of him in the dark. He actually created a result where both sides were defeated, allowing him to reap the benefits. Now, the brain-eating insect had been beaten half to death, and Lin Yi also looked like he was about to die. As for the remaining Duanmuyu, Shui Jianfeng did not put him in his eyes at all. He was an expert in the great perfection of the Gold Core realm. It was fine if he was afraid of a freak like Lin Yi, but could it be that he could not even deal with a trivial Duanmuyu? So, the spiritual consciousness grass is now in your pocket. Lin Yi's tone at the moment did not have the slightest emotion, and there was no hint of sadness or regret. It was completely an objective statement of fact. Duanmuyu was very unwilling, but what Lin Yi said was right. This time Shui Jianfeng picked up a big bargain, and the spiritual consciousness grass would really be missed by him. At this point he had no choice but to bow his head. You let me win, you let me win. Shui Jianfeng cupped his hands insincerely. Seeing that the two of them were sensible enough not to stop him, he laughed proudly and walked towards the spiritual consciousness grass. With this thing he could become the strongest Golden Core Realm master. At that time, even existences like Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect could only tremble in fear under his feet. Just thinking about that scene was very beautiful. Unexpectedly, just as he leaned over to pick the spiritual consciousness grass, the brain-eating insect, which was no different from a loach, actually came out of the mud again, wrapped in the mud, menacingly. Oh, is this guy the guardian spirit beast of the spiritual consciousness grass? Shui Jianfeng could not help but feel a little surprised. Normally, a spirit beast that was injured to this extent would have already escaped without a trace. Even if it stayed, it would at most ambush strong crossbow archers like Lin Yi and Duanmuyu. He was a dignified Golden Core Realm master. Where did it get such courage? Although he was surprised, Shui Jianfeng's reaction was not slow at all. From the beginning to the end he did not take it lightly at all. He had already noticed the brain-eating insect's action the first time, and before the other party could hit him, he had already struck first. Sword falls ninth heaven. Blood splattered everywhere, and the brain-eating insect, which was already a mess, was seriously injured again. With its super strong body, if it was at its peak, Sword Fall's ninth heaven might not be able to break its defense. Unfortunately, at this moment, its degree of weakness was not much better than Lin Yi's. Immediately, half of its body was cut off by Shui Jianfeng, and it fell into the mud without any movement. Hee, it's so weak and it still dares to come out to die. A beast will always be a beast, brainless. Shui Jianfeng was very satisfied with his results. He turned his head and saw that Duanmuyu was about to return to the shore with Lin Yi on his back. He suddenly felt a little regretful that no one appreciated such an awe-inspiring scene. Looking at the spiritual consciousness grass that was submerged in the water was already over his waist. If he did not pick it now, it would be troublesome. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly went up to cut it off from the root, and then picked up the spiritual consciousness grass. However, in the process of bending down to pick up the spiritual consciousness grass, his whole body was inevitably immersed in the water. This time it was not good. Shui Jianfeng's expression changed greatly, and with a strange cry, he rushed out of the water with all his strength. He did not hesitate to use traceless snow steps, desperately escaping to the shore. Traceless snow steps was not only a movement martial skill that doubled the speed, but it also had a miraculous effect on this kind of water surface. Every step was supported by ice and snow so he would not sink into the water, and his speed was very fast. What's the situation? Duanmuyu was shocked. Before she could react to what was going on, Shui Jianfeng, who was far behind her, and Lin Yi had already rushed to the front. Run! Lin Yi hurriedly urged. At this time, the most shocking thing was not Shui Jianfeng's strange reaction, but the state of the entire spiritual consciousness river. For the past 2 days, the speed of the rising tide was similar to the speed of the ebbing tide, and there was nothing particularly abnormal. But now, the rising tide was like the yellow river bursting its banks, and it could not be stopped, forcibly rolling up a huge wave. Once they were swept up by the huge wave, the consequences would be unimaginable. The situation was critical, so Duanmuyu immediately increased her speed to the limit. The monstrous wave was extremely fast, but fortunately the two were not far from the shore. As long as they could escape to the shore in time, they should be able to escape this disaster. Chapter 53:37. You want me to prove it myself? Linny smiled at the word. It sounded reasonable. If he couldn't prove his identity with solid evidence, then the other party would be right in front of him. It's totally unwarranted. Isn't the parallel art of green cloud evidence? Grandmaster, aren't the mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills you just gave them evidence? Those are the ironclad evidence. What's the point of flipping through a few old registers? Everyone knows that the disciple register and the sect records are incomplete. How can that be considered evidence? Xianijia said angrily. Killing the donkey after it's no use. Nothing is incomprehensible. Lin Yi's face was nonchalant. He'd expected this day to come, and he didn't feel any anger towards it. His mentality was basically the same as being bitten by an ant. If he was really unhappy, he'd just reach out and crush it to death. Why would he get angry over it? Of course, there was not such a big gap in strength. However, in terms of body level, people like Qin Dongqing were really just an ant in his eyes. Grandmaster, he's not joking. He's coming with people soon. You'd better think of a way. Seeing Lin Yi's expression, Xianijia became anxious. I'll wait for him to come. I'm trapped here and can't get out. What's the point of thinking? Lin Yi was very optimistic. Xianijia was speechless. He felt that he had bet on the wrong person. Although the situation was indeed difficult to deal with, he should at least think of a way to deal with it. What's the point of throwing caution to the wind? Xianijia stamped his feet anxiously. However, Lin Yi was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Xianijia had no choice but to leave in a hurry. Calculating the time, Qin Dongqing would be coming with people soon. If they saw him snitching on Lin Yi, the first one to die would not be Lin Yi but Xianijia. Not long after, a group of people arrived at the back cliff in a grandiose manner. The person in the lead was naturally Qin Dongqing. Behind him, in addition to a group of gold core stage elders, there was also a group of black-clothed disciples in special clothing. They were the experts of the law enforcement hall. Lin Yi, the investigation team has confirmed that you are not the Archean martial uncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Tell me, what is your ulterior motive for sneaking into the Green Cloud sect of the North Island by pretending to be the martial uncle? Qin Dongqing said aggressively. He couldn't help but look at Lingshan and Ziyu a couple more times as he said that. He'd been waiting for this day for a long time. Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at him calmly and said faintly, Since you said it can't be told, then what else can I say? So, you admit that you pretended to be martial granduncle? Qin Dongqing sneered. Why would I admit it? Isn't this all up to you, Vice Head Qin? You're the one who initiated the investigation, and the people involved are all your people. From start to finish, it's all up to you. So as long as you're happy. Lin Yi said with a smile that wasn't a smile. Qin Dongqing paused. Lin Yi's reaction was far beyond his expectations. Even Lingshan and the others beside Lin Yi didn't seem worried at all, just watching the show. Watching the show. Did these people think this was a joke? As a Jianghu scammer, it's rare to be able to stay calm after being exposed. Even if it's just on the surface. Qin Dongqing smiled confidently and didn't waste any more time. He ordered, Enforcers, listen up. Take down this Jianghu scammer who pretends to be our martial granduncle. If he resists, kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, a group of law enforcers immediately surrounded Lin Yi's group. The Golden Core stage elders who came with Qin Dongqing also each guarded a position. Because of the One Step to Heaven matrix, they did not have to worry about Lin Yi escaping. However, in order to avoid unnecessary casualties, they would also join forces if necessary. A battle was about to break out. Xianijia, who was following behind, had his heart in his throat. There was nothing he could do in this situation. Not to mention helping Lin Yi, he didn't even dare to stand up and say a word. All he could do was to watch the scene unfold before his eyes. Are you sure you want to arrest me? Lin Yi didn't even look at the crowd. He just stared at Qin Dongqing calmly. Of course. Qin Dongqing looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. This time, not only were the masters of the law enforcement hall here, but also more than half of the Gold Core masters were gathered. Unless Lin Yi was a nascent soul-old monster, he wouldn't be able to survive. Okay, then let's start cleaning up the sect. Lin Yi nodded. So you've accepted your fate? Qin Dongqing was a little surprised. He thought that Lin Yi would put up a last-ditch struggle, but he didn't expect him to accept his fate so easily. Accept my fate? Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. He said meaningfully, It's not appropriate to use this word on me, because the person who needs to be cleaned up is not me. With that, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared on top of Qin Dongqing's head. Without giving him any chance to react, his whole spirit was instantly grabbed and then locked into the space of the jade pendant. The whole process took less than half a second. The crowd didn't even realize what happened. They saw Qin Dongqing suddenly collapse to the ground, motionless, as if his soul had been taken away. Leader Qin. Leader Qin. A few elders in the gold core stage who were close to him quickly surrounded him. However, no matter how they shouted, it was futile. Qin Dongqing had lost his spirit, and his body had become a vegetable. This time, everyone was scared silly, including the elders in the gold core stage. All of them hurriedly stepped back. Each of them looked at Lin Yi in horror. They didn't know what method Lin Yi used just now, but one thing was certain. Qin Dongqing's appearance was definitely the work of Lin Yi. Originally, in their minds, Lin Yi, the Grand Uncle Master, didn't have much weight. After all, on the surface he was just a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage. Who would have thought that such a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage could actually easily defeat Qin Dongqing? Although the strength of Qin Dongqing, the deputy head, was far from outstanding, he was still a master in the middle stage of the gold elixir realm. Looking at the inner sect, there were only a handful of people who could really beat him. Apart from the Taishang elder Qinjiu, even the strongest master in the gold elixir realm, Hong Zijuan head Hong, could not possibly defeat Qin Dongqing so easily. Lin Yi's move simply subverted everyone's understanding. Does anyone else want to try? Lin Yi smiled and slowly glanced at the crowd. Everyone who was swept by him was desperately retreating, for fear that they would accidentally follow in Qin Dongqing's footsteps. Chapter 53-38. Many of them were under Qin Dongqing's command. No matter how strong Lin Yi was, they would fight with Lin Yi without hesitation if Qin Dongqing gave the order. However, the problem was that they didn't even know if their leader, Qin Dongqing, was dead or alive. How could they fight without a leader? Especially Lin Yi's soul-hooking hand, it was something they had never heard or seen before. Humans were always afraid of the unknown, even the masters of Gold Core stage were no exception. At this time Xianijia, who was also shocked, was the first to react. He cleared his throat and said, "Everyone listen to me. You've all seen the original version of the Green Cloud Calming Secrets. I believe I don't have to say whether it's true or not. Not long ago, Deputy Head Qin took the other original version of the mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills from Martial Granduncle. If I'm not mistaken, he should have taken them to Highest Elder. If it's true or not, I believe he would have announced it in public, but he didn't mention it now. What does this mean?" The crowd couldn't help but be silent. In fact, they didn't need Xianijia to say it. They all knew whether it was true or not. However, they had to follow Qin Dongqing. The fact is very clear. If the Martial Granduncle who gave us so many original mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills is still a fake, I think there's nothing in this world that's real. Xianijia said in a low voice. He needed a lot of courage to say these words in public. Because once Qin Dongqing woke up or the news spread to Highest Elder, he would definitely not end well. However, Lin Yi's miraculous performance gave him enough confidence. Xianijia had always been a cautious person, but when it was time to bet, he would have the courage to put everything on the line. His words made everyone speechless. It was not that they didn't dare to refute, but they really didn't dare to refute in front of Lin Yi. Qin Dongqing was their example. It was too risky. Everyone disperse. Xianijia said at last. Everyone looked at each other and finally carried Qin Dongqing away silently. In terms of strength and status, Xianijia was far from being the one with the highest authority. However, he was the one who had the most right to speak at this moment. After all, he had chosen the right side. After coming out of Ascending Cliff, several Gold Core stage seniors of the Chen family looked at each other and carried Qin Dongqing to the top of the mountain without saying a word. No one knew the details of Lin Yi. Now the only one who could end this situation was Highest Elder. When the crowd carried Qin Dongqing to the top of the mountain, Qinjiu was still in the house, studying the mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills that he had just written. He was in high spirits at this moment. He found that it was just as he had expected. Although the two could not directly improve in a level in a short time, it could greatly improve his understanding of mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills. Adlin could. Was Highest E had Qingyi. Sensing that there was movement outside, Qinjiu did not raise his head. He frowned and said, "I have said that you can handle the things below by yourself. You don't have to report everything to me." The crowd could not help but look at each other. They had actually broken the rules by coming up without Highest Elder's permission. It was just that the current situation was special, so they had to do so. At this time, after listening to Qinjiu's words, they suddenly felt a little awkward. Were they leaving? Or not leaving? Just when everyone was hesitating, Qinjiu finally realized something was wrong. A figure immediately flashed out of the house. The next moment, it appeared in front of Qin Dongqing, whose life or death was unknown. After giving Qin Dongqing a careful examination, Qinjiu suddenly turned pale with fright. He was a dignified nascent soul stage-old monster, but he could not see what happened to Qin Dongqing. He could only vaguely sense that Qin Dongqing seemed to have no primordial spirit. However, how could a good person not have a primordial spirit? What the hell is going on? Tell me word by word. Don't leave out a word. Qinjiu's face was extremely ugly. He could guess that this must be the work of Lin Yi, but before this, he had never thought that Lin Yi actually had such a means. After listening to the description of these gold core stage senior executives, Qinjiu's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He said a lot of useless nonsense. These people didn't know what happened to Qin Dongqing at all. Because it happened so suddenly, they couldn't even accurately perceive the appearance of the soul-hooking hand. There was only one sentence to sum it up. Qin Dongqing was glanced at by Lin Yi and then he lay down. A gold core stage expert was just glanced at by someone and became this half-dead state. You actually dare to say this kind of nonsense? If that Lin Yi is so terrible and so heaven-defying, will he be trapped by a mere one-step to heaven array? Qinjiu was infuriated. These people were trying to push the blame onto Lin Yi, making him a god. What a bunch of trash. Supreme Elder, please calm down. The gold core stage senior executives quickly knelt down, one by one, as if they were walking on thin ice. Although he was angry, Qinjiu did not lose his composure. Although the description of everyone was a mess, at least one thing could be summed up. The means used by Lin Yi had exceeded the understanding of these gold core stage masters. In other words, the other party was not simply a primordial spirit of the Foundation establishment great perfection. He had really underestimated him before. After Qinjiu calmed down, he looked at the unconscious Qin Dongqing on the ground and could not help but fall into deep thought. As a Yuanying realm old monster who stood at the top of the small Jianghu in primitive times, Qinjiu was a first-class existence in terms of strength and vision. However, in the face of the current situation, he was helpless. He did not even know what kind of evil means Qin Dongqing was in. How could he save him? If it was someone else, a vegetable was a vegetable and Qinjiu would not care about it at all. But Qin Dongqing was different. He was the successor of the Qin family of the North Island that he had painstakingly cultivated. The talent had already withered. If Qin Dongqing was involved, the future of the Qin family of the North Island would be really worrying. Tell me, what should we do about this? Qinjiu glanced at the senior executives of the gold core stage who were kneeling on the ground. As soon as these words came out, everyone could not help but look at each other, and they suddenly became more and more shocked. Did this mean that even the Supreme Elder could not save Qin Dongqing? In my humble opinion, the one who started the trouble should untie it. A middle-aged man with a jade-like face said carefully. This person's name was Lu Pingan, and his strength was at the late stage of Gold Core. Among the senior executives of the Gold Core stage, he was Qin Dongqing's most powerful helper. In addition, Lu Pingan had another special identity. He was Qinjiu's pro-disciple. If not, he would not dare to speak in front of Qinjiu. Go on. Qinjiu glanced at Lu Pingan and said faintly. Yes. Lu Pingan hesitated and said what he thought. Chapter 53-39. I think that no matter what kind of powerful existence Lin Yi is, since he is known as the Taigu Uncle Master of Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, he will never dare to fall out with us easily. Otherwise, no matter whether his identity is true or false, he will become the mortal enemy of our sect. I believe he knows this very well. Lu Pingan's words were not self-deception. After all, after the disappearance of the chief Hong Zijuan, the Qin family faction had now become the core force of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island. Once they fell out with the Qin family faction, it was equivalent to starting a war with the entire Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, and no one could afford the consequences. Isn't this already falling out? Qinjiu glanced at him. Yes, but it's not completely falling out. Although Deputy Chief Chen's state is very worrying, he is not dead after all, isn't he? Lu Pingan's tone was respectful. You mean that he left himself some leeway? Qinjiu nodded slightly. He was a little overwhelmed by anger just now. Now that he calmed down and thought about it carefully, it really made sense. Since Lin Yi had the means to make Qin Dongqing half dead, it would be easier for him to kill Qin Dongqing if he wanted to. However, he did not do so, and the meaning was self-evident. Yes, if I'm not wrong, he did this to pass a message to you, master. Lu Pingan said. What message? Qinjiu asked. He wants to talk to you. Lu Pingan said respectfully. He didn't understand the specific situation just now, but now that he came back to his senses, he had already seen it clearly. Obviously, Lin Yi was using Qin Dongqing as bait to force Qinjiu, the Taishang elder, to show up in person. If it went well, Qin Dongqing should still be saved. If it didn't go well, then Qin Dongqing naturally couldn't be saved. Interesting, then do you think I should talk to him? Qinjiu looked at Lu Pingan meaningfully. This. Lu Pingan hesitated and then said firmly, in my opinion we shouldn't talk. Don't talk? Then Dongqing can't be saved? Qinjiu's gaze suddenly became sharp, almost piercing Lu Pingan's mind. He was suspecting the other party's intentions. It was true that Lu Pingan was one of his few pro-disciples, but in his mind, Lu Pingan was far from being comparable to Qin Dongqing. Even pro-disciples were just outsiders, while Qin Dongqing carried almost all the hopes of the Qin family in the North Island. How could they compare? With Qin Dongqing around, disciples like Lu Pingan, no matter how strong and outstanding they were destined to only be supporting characters. However, if Qin Dongqing died, it would be a completely different story for them. There was no second Qin Dongqing in the Qin family of the North Island. Disheartened, Qinjiu was likely to find a qualified successor among his disciples, and the most promising one was Lu Pingan. In the immemorial underworld, the concept of a clan was greater than that of a master and a disciple. This was different from the Heaven Stage Island, and it was similar to the concept of the secular world. Master, please calm down. Disciples' sincerity towards you and Vice Head Qin can be seen by the heavens and earth. It's just that considering the big picture you really can't do it yourself. That would only let Lin Yi succeed. Lu Pingan said quickly. Qinjiu was silent for a moment, squinting at Lu Pingan. In order to show that he had no disloyalty, Lu Pingan could only bite the bullet and choose to look at him. Even if his back was sweating profusely, he did not dare to look away. Finally, Qinjiu's gaze softened. Stand up and talk. Yes. Lu Pingan finally breathed a sigh of relief, and other high-level gold core cultivators who came up together also stood up. However, they were all glared at by Qinjiu, who sent them away with a single word. Tell me what you think. Qinjiu said lightly. In this disciple's opinion, once you show up in person, there will be no room for negotiation. If you and Lin Yi don't come to an agreement and fall out in front of each other, the first to suffer will be Deputy Head Qin. If you don't fall out with him in person, then the news will inevitably spread, making people think that you have personally confirmed his identity as the immemorial Uncle Master. At that time, if you want to reverse the case and deal with him, there will be no justification. Lu Pingan analyzed. But if I don't show up, isn't it Dongqing who will suffer? Qinjiu frowned. In any case, he must protect Qin Dongqing. So, this disciple's opinion is that we can talk to him, but Master can't show up in person. We should send another person to talk to him so that no matter what the result is, there is still room for advance and retreat. It is not too late to make a decision after testing the other party's attitude. Lu Pingan suggested. Qinjiu pondered for a moment and finally decided. Well, then I will send you to talk to him and find a way to find out his bottom line. Remember, no matter what, you can't hurt Dongqing's life. Yes, Master. Lu Pingan was overjoyed. He was willing to take the risk to suggest this so that he could get this chance. No matter what the result was, as long as he performed well, he would be able to occupy a more important position in Qinjiu's heart. If Qin Dongqing really couldn't be saved in the end, then Lu Pingan's chance would come. Qinjiu sighed softly as he watched Lu Pingan leave. He looked at the unconscious Qin Dongqing on the ground. Too bad he's an outsider. They arrived at the sky-reaching cliff. Xianijia had already been sent out by Lin Yi to gather people's support. There was only him, Lingshan, and the others in the formation. Ziyu's eyes went wide when she saw Lu Pingan's figure. Lin Yi bro, you really are a genius. What kind of divine foresight is this? As long as the Grand Elder isn't an idiot, he'll probably send someone to talk to me. The only difference is who. Alright, you guys go back to practicing. Don't bother with this bullshit. Lin Yi waved them off with a smile. Disciple Lu Pingan greets Grand Elder. Lu Pingan bowed solemnly. Oh? So you guys admit that I'm the Grand Elder now? Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. You must be joking, Grand Elder. Whether or not your identity is real isn't confirmed yet, but from your disciple's standpoint, as long as there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that you're real, I will treat you as the real Grand Elder. I won't dare disrespect you at all, Lu Pingan said. Ha, you sure know how to talk. Lin Yi sized him up. What business do you have with me? I'm here for Vice Head Qin, Lu Pingan said carefully. Chapter 5340. Deputy Sect Leader Chen acted impulsively and offended Martial Granduncle. This matter has been known by Grand Elder. Grand Elder is extremely angry and has decided to punish Deputy Sect Leader Chen personally. However, now Sect Leader Hong has not returned, and the affairs of the sect are complicated and cannot be left without someone in charge. I hope Martial Granduncle can be magnanimous and let Deputy Sect Leader Chen go for the sake of the sect and let him apologize to you personally. What do you think? While speaking, Lu Pingan carefully stared at every expression of Lin Yi, for fear of missing any useful information. This is Grand Elder's idea? Lin Yi squinted at him and said, Yes. Lu Pingan nodded. If it was his own idea, he believed that the other party would not bother to talk with him at all because it was meaningless. As a result, Lin Yi's reaction surprised him. Since it is his idea, why doesn't he come to talk with me himself? Lu Pingan was choked speechless for a while. This guy did not play his cards according to reason. Normally, at this point he should be very clear that he was just a mouthpiece. Wasn't it good to leave some leeway for both sides? Did he have to meet the king as soon as he came up? If he really met the king as soon as he came up, Lin Yi might not necessarily get any benefits. What if Grand Elder fell out with him on the spot? Martial Granduncle, in this disciple's opinion, you shouldn't be in a hurry to meet with the Grand Elder. Before the two of you reach a certain tacit understanding, it's more appropriate for this disciple to run errands for you, right? Lu Pingan composed himself and said seriously. If the two sides wanted to sit down and talk, they at least had to confirm that both sides had the intention to negotiate first. Otherwise, when they met, they would directly flip the table. Then there would be no negotiation. Lin Yi glanced at him, a smile that wasn't quite a smile on his face. So what you're saying is, I'll talk to you first and you'll tell the Grand Elder the conditions, and then he'll decide if he wants to accept it or not, and then you come here to talk terms with me. Lu Pingan opened his mouth wanting to correct his words, but nodded in the end. That was what he meant. Correcting the words would only make it sound better, but it wouldn't change the essence of the situation at all. He'd already thought it through too. It didn't matter how beautiful his words were when dealing with people like Lin Yi. Lin Yi didn't play by the rules at all. Aren't you guys misunderstanding something? Lin Yi said with a smile. What? Lu Pingan was stunned. In the current situation, I'm not asking you for help, but you are asking me for help, aren't you? Lin Yi grinned leisurely. This. Lu Pingan frowned and said in a deep voice, Indeed, Deputy Sect Leader Chen's state is very worrying. Grand Supreme Elder hopes that Martial Granduncle can be magnanimous and let Deputy Sect Leader Chen go. But then again, from Martial Granduncle's point of view, I'm afraid it's better not to let anything happen to Deputy Sect Leader Chen, right? Haha, from my point of view it's just cleaning up the sect. You think too much, Lin Yi said indifferently. If it weren't for the mission that Qinjiu had given him, Lu Pingan really wouldn't want to waste his breath here. This guy didn't have the slightest awareness or sincerity to negotiate. He was completely stubborn and stubborn. What the hell could he possibly achieve from this? Do you really want to fall out with the entire Green Cloud sect of the North Island? Lu Pingan was forced to make it clear. This kind of word should not appear in a negotiation. When it appeared, it was basically not far from the collapse of the negotiation. Guess. Lin Yi's answer was so irresponsible that it made people vomit blood. Lu Pingan was about to go crazy, but he could only bite the bullet and say, I guess you won't because it's not good for you and the secular disciples who came with you. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for them, shouldn't you? Could it be that the Grand Elder is already planning to target them? Lin Yi, on the other hand, was surprised. He said with a smile that wasn't a smile, the Grand Elder is a nascent soul master after all. I didn't expect you to have such a unique way of doing things. Saying it was unique was actually despicable and shameless. This. Lu Pingan couldn't help but choke. Even if it was really Qinjiu's intention, he couldn't be the one to take the blame. He quickly said, Don't get me wrong, Grand Elder doesn't mean this and so do we. We just have to consider everything carefully, don't we? Since you don't mean this, then what are you talking about? I was alarmed for a false alarm. I thought Grand Elder was going to attack them, Lin Yi said angrily. Lu Pingan really wanted to slap his face with a false alarm. The words had been very clear and it was obvious that it was so. There was really no one who could pretend not to understand it. Couldn't they negotiate happily? What are you still doing here? Hurry up and convey my meaning to Grand Elder. Lin Yi urged. Lu Pingan was dumbfounded again. They hadn't talked about anything yet. From the perspective of negotiation, it was not even a warm-up. How could it end? Speaking of which, what exactly did you mean? What up? I don't have time to waste with you. Next time, remember clearly, if you really want to talk, let Grand Elder do it himself. Otherwise, I won't receive you. Lin Yi said straightforwardly. At this point, even if Lu Pingan was thick-skinned, he couldn't stay any longer. He could only leave embarrassedly. Back at the top of the mountain, after listening to Lu Pingan's dejected report, Qinjiu's gloomy face suddenly became even uglier. This old man asked you to go to test Lin Yi's bottom line and attitude. What did you find out? This disciple is ashamed. Lu Pingan's face was full of shame and anger. In fact, he couldn't be blamed for not doing his job well. It was really Lin Yi's way of doing things was too wild. From the beginning to the end, there was an unsettling pattern. What should he do? Then tell me yourself. What should we do next? Do you really want this old man to do it personally? Qinjiu snorted coldly. That definitely won't work. Until the last step, master, you can't easily go out. Otherwise you will really be led by the nose by him. Lu Pingan shook his head and said in a low voice, although this disciple is dejected this time, thinking about it carefully, it can't be said that I didn't gain anything. At least, I can be sure that he doesn't really want to shed all pretense of cordiality with us. Otherwise, when this disciple asked him directly, he wouldn't have avoided answering. This has long been expected. Qinjiu frowned, thinking that it was impossible for Lin Yi to fall out with them even if he wanted to. If he did, then he would stay at Ascending Heaven Cliff for the rest of his life. Chapter 53:41. Yes, there's another point. Although Lin Yi doesn't want to talk to me directly, it doesn't mean that he has to force you to talk to him in person. After all, it's not only us who need leeway, it's the same for him. Lu Pingan analyzed. Then, Qinjiu signaled him to continue. I think that Lin Yi must have a request and he definitely wants to talk to us, but he doesn't want to talk to me like this. First, he thinks it's too passive, and second, he thinks it's too embarrassing. Maybe he's looking for a mouthpiece to talk to, Lu Pingan said. Who? Qinjiu asked. Xianijia. He was the only one who could talk to Lin Yi and win Lin Yi's trust among all the high-level gold core cultivators in Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Okay, then you go to him. Qinjiu's eyes flashed with a hint of fierceness. After this incident, it was obvious that Xianijia would be a dead man. When Lu Pingan came to him, Xianijia was still trying to win over other high-level gold core cultivators. He knew that it was a critical period for him to win the hearts and minds of the people. One more supporter meant one more momentum and one more chance of winning. Xianijia's blood turned cold when he saw Lu Pingan, Qinjiu's direct disciple. His first thought was that the matter was exposed and Highest Elder was going to punish him. When he understood what Lu Pingan meant, he couldn't help but be stunned. Judging from Lu Pingan's words, Highest Elder was going to negotiate with Lin Yi on an equal footing, and Lu Pingan and himself were the representatives of the two parties? Xianijia certainly didn't dare to agree to this kind of thing without permission. After understanding Lu Pingan's meaning, he quickly ran to Sky Cliff to ask Lin Yi. Since they want to talk, let's talk. We won't lose anything anyway, Lin Yi agreed casually. Then, how do we talk? Xianijia said weakly. Can't you wrangle? Lin Yi glanced at him. Wrangle? Xianijia stared blankly and said, Grandmaster, we should have a goal in our negotiation. Is wrangling with each other our goal? That's right. Wrangling is our goal. He can talk however he wants. All you have to do is one thing. Don't object or agree. In short, it's wrangling. Once you've wrangled yourself until you faint, you'll have succeeded, Lin Yi said. Why? Xianijia did not understand what Lin Yi meant at the moment. Since it was just wrangling for the sake of wrangling, what was the point? There are two reasons. First, it is Qin Dongqing who is half dead, not our people, so they should be the ones who are anxious. We have no reason to be anxious at all. When it comes to negotiations, it has always been the one who is anxious who suffers. Just wait and see. After wrangling for a long time, they will definitely lose their cool. That will be our chance. Lin Yi advised. Yes. Xianijia nodded and asked, what about the second one? The second is you, Lin Yi said looking at him. Me? Xianijia was puzzled. Let me ask you. Have you had any success in winning people's hearts these days? Lin Yi asked. Very little. Xianijia was embarrassed. It was not that he did not work hard, but his strength and status were too ordinary. Usually, no one paid attention to him among the gold core stage higher-ups. At this critical moment he did not have much appeal at all. Even if they were dissatisfied with the Qin family's faction, they would only laugh and say that he was overestimating himself after listening to his suggestion. Very few of them took it seriously. It was actually better now. Due to the deterrence brought by Lin Yi's display of power, the other gold core stage higher-ups no longer looked down on Xianijia like before. After all, in their eyes, even if Lin Yi was not comparable to the highest elder, a nascent soul stage old monster, he was definitely not someone that the gold core stage experts could compete with. However, it was unrealistic to say that he could be easily won over. So this negotiation is an opportunity to increase our influence, Lin Yi pointed out. Xianijia finally understood when he heard this. He patted his head and said, I understand now. Granduncle, you mean that this negotiation should not only be delayed, but it should be delayed to the point that everyone knows about it. In this way we can form a concept in the sect that you and the highest elder are equal in status. As your negotiation representative, I can also increase my status and influence. Yes, but there's another meaning. Everyone knows that the Green Cloud sect in the North Island is divided into the local faction and the Qin family faction. Now, the highest elder of both parties is the representative of the Qin family faction. So, who do you think is the representative of the local faction? Lin Yi said with a smile. Of course it's you, Granduncle. Xianijia's eyes lit up. The reason why he couldn't rope in the senior management and disciples of the gold core stage of other local factions was that they didn't believe that he could shoulder the burden of the local faction. Now Lin Yi stood out and made a rallying call. Not only did he easily get rid of Qin Dongqing, but he also forced the highest elder to sit down and negotiate patiently. This was something that even Hong Zijuan, the head of the sect, couldn't do. In this way, once the idea of being an equal was deeply rooted in people's hearts, it was impossible for Lin Yi not to be the leader of the local faction. Because all the senior management and disciples of the gold core stage of the local faction would gather spontaneously. Once the momentum was formed, it would be unstoppable. So, why don't you go and wrangle with him? Lin Yi shrugged. Understood. Xianijia immediately went with confidence. What happened next was just as Lin Yi expected. Although Xianijia usually looked honest and sincere, his brain was actually very active. He was able to argue with Lu Pingan with great eloquence and was not at a disadvantage at all. Lu Pingan almost went crazy. He thought he could relax a little without facing Lin Yi directly, but he didn't expect such a guy to come. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary pot of warm water, but after a long time of contact, he knew that this guy could never be boiled. He was no less difficult to deal with than Lin Yi. In the end, there was only one word: there was no way out. But he couldn't turn against him openly. After all, in this negotiation alone, they were the passive and weak party. Moreover, it was not that the other party didn't cooperate. Instead, it should be said that they were very cooperative. They just kept talking and wasting time. The other party was determined to fight a protracted war. What could he do? If it weren't for Qin Dongqing, Qin Jiu would have turned against him long ago. But now, he could only grit his teeth and suppress his anger, instructing Lu Pingan to continue to grind with Xianijia. But as time went on, Lin Yi's image and status in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island really changed. Chapter 5342. Initially, Lin Yi, the primordial Grand Elder who popped out of nowhere, was just a topic of discussion at most. Now he was the second most important person after Grand Elder Qinjiu. People's hearts were always so subtle. An outsider like Lin Yi, logically speaking, should not be associated with the local faction. But now he was about to become the flag bearer of the local faction. How could anyone explain this? Of course, Xianijia could be said to have played a huge role in this process. Not only did he drag Lu Pingan back and forth, but he was also vigorously promoting Lin Yi's position and drawing the local faction's higher-ups and disciples to their side. Otherwise, these people might not have gathered so quickly. Someone had to add fuel to the fire from behind. On the other hand, Lin Yi did not care about the messy things happening in the outside world. Other than guiding Lingshan and the others in their training, the only thing he did every day was to train himself. He relied on the spirit grass root to enhance his primordial spirit and strengthen the soul hooking hand. These two were his top priorities at the moment. On the other hand, Lung Lung, who had returned to the Snow Sword School, ran into trouble. Lung Lung was placed under house arrest. That's right, as one of the disciples with the most outstanding performance in the secular world and the primordial trials, Lung Lung was placed under house arrest on the second day she returned to the Snow Sword School. The reason was that she did not follow the sect's orders during the training period. According to the father and son, Xue Liping and Xue Jianfeng, they did everything possible to determine that Lung Lung's previous behavior was a betrayal of the sect. If that was the case, it would not be as simple as house arrest. She would be sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts in public. However, the higher-ups of the Elder Council, including the sect master Hong Qingyuan, were not idiots. They could see Lung Lung's huge potential even with their toes. They would not do something like destroying their own pillar of support. Of course, other than Lung Lung's huge potential, the other two people's efforts could not go unnoticed. One was her master, Su Xiaodong, and the other was Bing Wuqing. If one were to say that Su Xiaodong was the lowest-ranked elder candidate and had no right to speak, then Bing Wuqing, who had stood up alongside him, was someone that no one could ignore. After all, after going around the secular world and the primeval trials, this young elder candidate was now an expert with gold core perfection. In the entire Snow Sword School, other than the Great Elder, who was the only nascent soul-old monster, the strongest was the golden core perfection. Before this, there was only one golden core perfection expert, and that was the sect leader Hong Qingyuan. And now, the Snow Sword faction suddenly had two more golden core perfection experts. One was Bing Wuqing, the other was Xue Jianfeng, and the other was Lung Lung, who was at Foundation Establishment Perfection. When Hong Qingyuan and the rest saw these people for the first time, they really felt like they had been smashed by a pie. A mere training in the secular world had actually brought back a bunch of pillars. This was not just a blessing in disguise, but a raging fire that was about to burn them to ashes. However, for Hong Qingyuan and the other top executives who had the right to speak in the sect, the sudden emergence of two experts in the peak of the gold core realm was a real trouble. There was a very real problem. If a newcomer appeared, what would the old people do? The immemorial martial world had always been a very realistic world, where one's strength determined one's status. Those with golden core great perfection were already existences that stood above tens of thousands of people in the Snow Sword faction, so their status naturally could not be careless. Even if they could not directly make Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng the same rank as the sect leader, they should at least be above the others, right? Otherwise it would not match their strength. However, even if Vice Sect Master Xue Liping agreed, would the other 5 elders, including Qi Qianqiu, agree? Speaking of which, Xue Liping had always been restless as the Vice Sect Master. It was only because he was at loggerheads with Great Elder Qi Qianqiu that Hong Qingyuan, as the Sect Master, had been able to control the situation. Now that there was suddenly his son, Xue Jianfeng, who was above tens of thousands of people, joining hands, how could he control the situation? Fortunately, there was still Bing Wuqing. Hong Qingyuan was a little worried that Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were on the same side. He did not expect them to fight as soon as they came back, and the cause was Lung Lung. Xue Jianfeng tried every possible way to kill Lung Lung, but Bing Wuqing, who had never had any relationship with Lung Lung, stood out for the first time. Her attitude was very tough, and anyone who dared to touch Lung Lung had to be prepared to face her wrath. Although it was strange, Hong Qingyuan and the others were obviously happy to see it happen. Not only could they protect Lung Lung, a seedling with great potential, but more importantly, they had an excellent candidate to keep Xue Jianfeng in check. In the past, there was Great Elder Qi Qianqiu to keep Vice Sect Master Xue Liping in check. Although there were 2 more golden core perfection experts now, they also kept each other in check, making it convenient for Hong Qingyuan to continue controlling the situation. In contrast, when Xue Jianfeng heard Bing Wuqing's stance, he was stunned on the spot. During the primeval trials, Bing Wuqing had helped Lung Lung out of trouble, which had already puzzled him. Now she had actually gone from bad to worse, and was willing to shed all pretense of cordiality for Lung Lung. This was completely beyond his expectations. This was almost equivalent to openly standing on Lin Yi's side. What the hell was Bing Wuqing up to? In the end, in the face of Bing Wuqing's unreasonable and tough stance, and in the face of Hong Qingyuan and Qi Qianqiu's cooperation, Xue Jianfeng and his father Xue Liping could only choose to give in. After a long time of wrangling, they finally came up with a result that was neither painful nor itchy: house arrest. This time, Lung Lung was prepared to go into closed-door training. After she had stabilized her realm, she would start preparing to break through to Golden Core. The so-called house arrest could be said to be neither painful nor itchy to her, and was basically equivalent to no punishment. After the meeting, Xue Jianfeng deliberately blocked Bing Wuqing's way. There was a problem that he had to clarify. "Get out of my way." Bing Wuqing walked away expressionlessly. "Wait." Xue Jianfeng forcibly blocked her way. After the other higher-ups of the sect had all left, he lowered his voice and said, "What the hell are you doing? Do I need to explain to you?" Bing Wuqing glanced at him. "Of course. Don't forget that we're on the same side. It's fine if you don't help me, but you've been shielding Lung Lung over and over again. Have you ever thought about the consequences of this?" Xue Jianfeng said angrily. "What consequences could there be?" Bing Wuqing looked indifferent. Shui Jianfeng was about to explode from anger. He said angrily, "Shielding Lung Lung is equivalent to shielding Lin Yi. You're betraying the core." "But why did I hear that the higher-ups told us not to provoke Lin Yi? In comparison, it's more appropriate to put the label of betrayal on you. At least I didn't do something as petty as trapping and killing Lin Yi, am I right?" Bing Wuqing retorted. Chapter 53-43. You. Shui Jianfeng was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was full of bitterness at the mention of this matter. In order to seal Bing Wuqing's mouth, he was forced to share half of the consciousness grass with her. In the end, before he could even get out of the primordial trial grounds, before he could even warm up the remaining half of the consciousness grass, and before he could even feel the magical effects of the consciousness refinement, it was snatched away by Lin Yi unreasonably. As a result, the consciousness grass that he had painstakingly obtained ended up in Bing Wuqing's hands, while he himself had nothing. Just thinking about it made him so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. "Is there anything else?" Bing Wuqing glanced at him and said lightly, "If there's nothing else, please move aside. I'm going back to cultivate in seclusion. The consciousness grass can't be kept for too long or its effects will be reduced." Shui Jianfeng felt a sweetness in his throat. This time he was so angry that he really wanted to vomit blood. Bing Wuqing left leisurely and Shui Jianfeng could only grit his teeth. She was obviously trying to anger him. What could he do? "Humph, don't let me find any evidence of your betrayal, or you'll be the first to suffer." Shui Jianfeng secretly gritted his teeth. He now felt that there was something fishy about Bing Wuqing. If the first time she sheltered Lung Leng in the primordial trial grounds was a little abnormal, then the signs of this abnormality were becoming more and more obvious. He was almost certain that Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi had some kind of unspeakable relationship, but he lacked evidence for the time being. Without decisive evidence, even if Shui Jianfeng suspected, he wouldn't dare to report to the bespectacled doctor. Otherwise, if Bing Wuqing made a false accusation and revealed the fact that he killed Lin Yi, he would be in even more trouble. After the meeting, Lung Lung was very cooperative and took the initiative to accept house arrest. Of course, in reality she was cultivating in seclusion. In addition, Bing Wuqing saw that Lung Lung's punishment had been settled, and she had completed the task that Lin Yi had given her, so she couldn't wait to cultivate in seclusion. After all, for him, not only did he want to use the half of the divine knowledge grass to refine his divine sense and become the strongest gold core stage master in the legends, but he also had a more important purpose. Don't forget, Lin Yi gave him a condensed nascent golden pill. What Bing Wuqing didn't expect was that Shui Jianfeng's quietness was just a facade. After less than half a month, Shui Jianfeng had reverted to his old ways. But this time he didn't attack Cold Lung directly, but had other intentions. The 15th of every month was the regular meeting day for all the gold core cultivators of the Snow Sword School. All the big and small matters of the school would be discussed and dealt with on this day. Apart from this, unless it was a special situation, the Elders' Conference would not be specially convened. As usual, Sect Master Hong Qingyuan took the main seat, but the two seats beside him were in dispute. The previous meeting was a welcoming ceremony, and those who attended were not only Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng, but also Cold Lung, who had achieved foundation building Great Circle, and special seats were specially arranged for them. This was understandable, but now that it was a regular meeting, everyone's seat was very particular. Everyone knew that the closer one's seat was to Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, the higher their position was. Therefore, it had always been Vice Sect Master Shui Liping and Qi Qianqiu with the 5 great elders sitting on the left and right. To put it bluntly, Shui Liping on the left and Qi Qianqiu on the right. This was the usual rule. But now it couldn't be done. If it was still the same as before, then where would Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng sit? Taking a step back, Bing Wuqing was in seclusion now, so there was no need to consider it for the time being. But Shui Jianfeng was still here. As expected, the moment Sect Master Hong Qingyuan sat down, Shui Jianfeng sat on his right. At the same time, his father, Shui Liping, sat on Hong Qingyuan's left. The father and son had directly occupied the two most prominent seats. Seeing this, the faces of the 5 great elders, including Qi Qianqiu, darkened. Usually, the 5 of them were not completely of one mind, but at this time they were definitely on the same side. After all, if they really let Shui Jianfeng and his father cook the rice, it would not only be Great Elder Qi Qianqiu's position that would be affected, but the other 4 great elders would also suffer. This was something they absolutely could not tolerate. Shui Jianfeng, what is the meaning of this? Qi Qianqiu frowned and said in a low voice. He did not sit, and neither did the other 4 great elders. As for the remaining ordinary gold core cultivators, they did not dare to sit. The entire meeting hall was filled with a group of people. Other than Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, only Shui Jianfeng and his father were seated. Oh, nothing, it's just a meeting. Don't just stand there, Great Elder Qi, quickly sit. Shui Jianfeng pretended to be polite and pulled out the chair beside him, indicating for Qi Qianqiu to take a seat. You're sitting in the wrong seat, Qi Qianqiu said bluntly. Is that so? Shui Jianfeng looked to his left and right and said with a puzzled expression, I don't think so. Doesn't our Snow Sword faction always arrange the ranking according to our strength? Aside from sect leader Hong, I seem to be the only expert in Golden Core realm here. I'm still young, so don't lie to me, Great Elder Qi. Qi Qianqiu and the others were speechless for a long time, but they could not refute him. Let alone the Snow Sword faction, even in the entire immemorial Jianghu, strength reigned supreme. There was no doubt about this. However, the problem was that this was not a primitive society. The phrase strength reigns supreme was reflected in all aspects and methods, and would never be shouted out loud. Otherwise, how would they be different from barbarians who did not know any etiquette? So what if you're in Gold Core Paragon? Who told you that Gold Core Paragon can definitely sit in the second seat of the Elders Association? Shui Jianfeng, don't be too arrogant. The second elder snorted angrily. Oh, then I'll have to humbly ask for guidance. If having the strength of Gold Core Paragon is not enough, then how can I sit in this position? Shui Jianfeng raised his eyebrows. If you want to sit in this position, of course you have to have the corresponding status. The other elders said in unison. That's easy. For a young and strong Gold Core Paragon like me, it's only reasonable that I should be entrusted with heavy responsibilities, right? Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of talent? Shui Jianfeng shamelessly chuckled. Everyone's eyes twitched when they heard this. Although it was reasonable, coming from Shui Jianfeng's own mouth, it was really shameless to a certain level. This guy's skin was simply as thick as a city wall. Then how can we not waste talent? Qi Qianqiu asked without batting an eyelid. Chapter 53-44. Of course we have to arrange a position that matches my Golden Core Perfection strength. Sect Leader Hong, what kind of position do you think we should arrange for me? Shui Jianfeng turned his head to look at Hong Qingyuan. All of a sudden, everyone's focus shifted to Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, who had been silent all this while. At this time he was still habitually tapping his finger on the table. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, This is not a small problem. We need to discuss it properly. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly. He spoke as if he was serious, but it was the same as not saying anything. This couldn't be blamed on Hong Qingyuan. From his point of view, there was no other way. After all, no matter what, a new generation expert like Shui Jianfeng had to shoulder a heavy responsibility. If he couldn't make the best use of the Golden Core Perfection experts that other sects yearned for, then it would be a dereliction of his duty as the sect leader. But out of consideration for controlling the overall situation, Hong Qingyuan couldn't possibly let Shui Jianfeng, this rising star, overtake the host. Otherwise, with Shui Jianfeng and his father Shui Liping's character, things would definitely get out of hand in the future, and that would be a huge problem. Sect leader Hong means that this is today's important topic? Qi Qianqiu and the others looked at each other. That's right. Everyone sit down first. There's no need to rush over the position. Let's all express our opinions and discuss it to a conclusion. I think there's no need to fight over it anymore. What does everyone think? Hong Qingyuan suggested. Okay. Qi Qianqiu didn't argue and led the elders to their seats. Who will speak first? Hong Qingyuan's eyes swept across the crowd. Only he, the sect leader, had the final say in this kind of matter. However, the more it was so, the more he couldn't reveal his opinion. Only by remaining calm and letting everyone express their opinions would he be able to grasp the most initiative. Qi Qianqiu and the others looked at each other and remained silent. Because they didn't inform each other beforehand, they didn't dare to speak before they understood the pros and cons. Then I'll say a few words first. Shui Liping smiled, then said, As the saying goes, don't avoid relatives. Although Feng is my son, he's already a Golden Core Perfection expert. I think we should arrange a corresponding important position for him. Otherwise, if word gets out, it will be hard to convince the masses. We might even be laughed at by outsiders. That's not appropriate. Vice Sect Master Shui, why don't you clarify what kind of important position you think we should give him? Qi Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he asked. As an expert second only to the Grand Elder, I feel that he should at least be the second in command. I didn't say that he would be the sect leader. After all, he's still young and inexperienced. He won't be able to control the overall situation for the time being, Shui Liping pointed out. These words caused Hong Qingyuan's eyelids to twitch. His expression remained unchanged, but he couldn't help but want to curse in his heart. If he can't control the situation now, does that mean he wants to control the situation in the future? It turned out that this pair of father and son didn't want to be the second in command at all, but were plotting for his position as the sect leader. When Qi Qianxiu and the others heard this, although they frowned, they were secretly laughing in their hearts. This pair of father and son were really too arrogant. Weren't they clearly pushing Hong Qingyuan to their side? Second position? Taking it literally, the position below the sect leader is naturally the vice sect leader. Does vice sect leader Shui intend to abdicate and give it to his son? The third elder grinned. Then I have no objections. Although there's no such thing as a son inheriting the father's position in our snow sword school, your family situation is special. With such a good son, I feel that it's barely feasible to have him replace you as the vice sect leader. The fifth elder expressed his opinion. Seconded. The fourth elder nodded. I agree as well. The second elder nodded as well. Since everyone has the same opinion, then I have no objections. Qi Qianxiu nodded as well. With the current situation, it was already unrealistic to not let Shui Jianfeng take the position. Since that was the case, he might as well let him replace his father Shui Liping. In any case, he was already used to fighting with the vice sect leader. It didn't matter even if the father was replaced by the son. Everyone seems to have misunderstood. As the vice sect leader, I've always been conscientious. Even if I don't have any merits, I've still put in hard work. Besides, I've never said that I want to abdicate, right? Shui Liping sneered. Also, let me add something. My father, as the vice sect leader, doesn't seem to be the number 2 figure. Grand Elder Qi, haven't you always boasted that you're superior to my father? From what you're saying, you're eyeing my Grand Elder position? Qi Qianxiu couldn't help but laugh. Shui Jianfeng, although you're young, you've still grown up in the sect. Don't you know how the Grand Elder position came about? It's not self-bestowed. The Grand Elder is the same as the sect leader. It's a public election by the Elders' Council. At the same time, it has to be personally acknowledged by the Grand Elder. Do you think you can become the Grand Elder just because you want to? The second elder snorted disdainfully. That's right. Other than strength, the Grand Elder's most important is his contributions to the sect and his deep qualifications. Which of these two do you think you're qualified for? The other elders echoed. Shui Jianfeng was stunned. Shui Jianfeng was stunned when he heard that. Although those words were unpleasant to the ears, he really had no way of refuting them. Aside from his strength as a gold core great perfection cultivator, he had nothing else. There was no need to talk about his qualifications, and if one were to talk about his contributions to the sect, Qi Qianxiu was a brother who had risked his life for the previous sect master, who was also the current great elder. Back then, he had even contributed so much to the sect that no one in the entire Snowsword sect could compare to him. Everyone, you've misunderstood. I've never thought of becoming the Grand Elder, Shui Jianfeng could only say. Then what exactly do you want to do? Everyone looked at each other. Vice sect leader, but add 2 words in front of it. Managing, Shui Jianfeng said directly. Managing vice sect leader? Everyone was stunned. Then their expressions changed. Qi Qianxiu, the Grand Elder, could rely on his qualifications to slightly suppress the vice sect leader. They were basically on equal footing. However, the managing vice sect leader, as the name suggested, was clearly above the vice sect leader. Naturally, it would be above the Grand Elder as well. That was the true number 2 figure in the Elders' Council. In other words, you're going to have a managing vice sect leader out of nowhere? Qi Qianxiu looked at the calm Hong Qingyuan and said, Sect leader Hong, do you think there's a need for that? That's right. Is there a need for that? Hong Qingyuan did not answer him directly. Instead, he went with the flow and looked at Shui Jianfeng. Chapter 53-45. Of course there is. As the name suggests, the managing deputy sect master has to share the burden of the sect master. Think about it, sect master Hong not only has to take care of the sect's affairs, but you also have to serve the supreme elder at the same time. If there is any big matter in the Jianghu, you have to personally deal with the other clans and sections. There are too many things and the burden is too heavy. Therefore, it is very necessary to have a managing deputy sect master. What does sect master Hong think? Everyone looked at Hong Qingyuan. At this point, it wouldn't be right if he, as the sect master, didn't express his opinion. Tap, tap, tap. Hong Qingyuan tapped on the table again and again. After whetting everyone's appetite, he suddenly grinned. Since that's the case, then let's have a deputy sect master. I'll have to rely on you in the future. What? Chi Chenxiu and the others were shocked. It was obvious that the deputy sect master wanted to split the sect master's authority. Compared to them, the elders, Hong Qingyuan, the sect master, would suffer the most. They thought that Hong Qingyuan would refute the deputy sect master's words, but who would have thought that he would agree so easily? What was going on? Shui Jianfeng and his father Shui Liping were also surprised. The two of them had even prepared a set of words to deal with the other party's refusal, but they didn't expect Hong Qingyuan to be so tactful and agree without saying anything. Then many thanks to Sect Master Hong. Shui Jianfeng nodded slightly, already assuming the posture of the deputy sect master. When he looked at Chi Chenxiu and the others again, his gaze was filled with a sense of superiority. This newly promoted second in command of the Elders Association was very quick to get into character. Sect Master Hong, this is no small matter. Shouldn't it be better to report it to the Supreme Elder? Chi Chenxiu said with a frown. He didn't know what Hong Qingyuan was thinking, but this matter was clearly not a good thing for him and the other elders. With his deep friendship with the Supreme Elder, he believed that the Supreme Elder wouldn't allow Shui Jianfeng to crawl on the necks of the other elders for no reason. About that, Hong Qingyuan pointed at the table and said ambiguously, the deputy sect master's matter is indeed very important, but the Supreme Elder has been in seclusion recently. I don't dare to disturb him. What do the others think? I don't think that's necessary. According to the tradition of our Snow Sword School, only the sect master and the Great Elder need to be confirmed by the Great Elder. Everything else can be decided by our Elders Association. If we have to bother the Great Elder for every little thing, what's the point of having us? Shui Liping was the first to step forward to object. I don't think it's necessary. That's what I'm thinking as well. The Great Elder's seclusion concerns the future of our entire Snow Sword School. How can I disturb him for a small matter like mine? If anyone insists on going, I suggest that they personally go find the Great Elder and see what the outcome is, Shui Jianfeng said to Chi Chenxiu and the other elders with ill intentions. Everyone fell silent. They could only look at Hong Qingyuan. Communicating with the Supreme Elder was a privilege only the sect master had. Unless there was a special situation, others couldn't skip ranks to report it. Not to mention, disturbing the Supreme Elder's seclusion was a matter of great importance. Most people didn't have the courage to do so. Hong Qingyuan pondered for a moment, then finally made his decision. How about this? Logically speaking, this matter does indeed need to be reported to the Supreme Elder, but it's not important enough to be reported to him alone. So, I'll report it when I pay a visit to the Supreme Elder next time. Before that, the Deputy Sect Master's matter is decided. Sect Master is wise. Shui Jianfeng and Shui Liping looked at each other and smiled. Chi Chenxiu and the others could only shake their heads helplessly. Since Hong Qingyuan had already made his decision, it was futile no matter how much they objected. After all, the Sect Master had the final say. Moreover, Shui Jianfeng and Shui Liping also had the right to speak. So, they could only resign themselves to fate. All right. Since the Sect Master thinks so highly of me, I, Shui Jianfeng, will not pass on this responsibility. As the saying goes, a new official must make 3 changes. As the Deputy Sect Master, this is the first time I'm officially participating in the Elders' Council. I can't disappoint everyone. Shui Jianfeng paused for a moment. Then, his gaze fell on a woman sitting in the last row. It was Cold's master, Su Xiaodong. Being stared at like that, Su Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat. The last time Shui Jianfeng launched an attack, it was Bing Wuqing who stopped it. Now that Bing Wuqing was still in closed-door training, Shui Jianfeng had now become the Deputy Sect Master, who was second only to one. If he were to launch an attack in front of everyone again, what could she use to fight against him? As expected, Shui Jianfeng's next sentence was aimed at Cold again. As the Deputy Sect Master, my first topic is to discuss Cold's matter with everyone again. Cold, what else is there? The last meeting has already reached a conclusion. Don't tell me you want to overturn it? Su Xiaodong quickly objected. What's your position? Do you have the right to speak now? Shui Jianfeng glanced at her disdainfully. Su Xiaodong was so angry that her face turned red. She could not say a word for a long time. Indeed, in terms of their positions, she was only a candidate elder, while the other party was the dignified Deputy Sect Master. They were not on the same level at all. At this moment, Hong Qingyuan came to the rescue and said, "It's all right. Speak freely." However, Cold's matter has already been settled. There's really no need to continue to keep a close eye on it. He had already taken a big step back by approving the appointment of the Deputy Sect Master. If he were to continue to tolerate and make concessions on Cold's matter, he would be lacking a bottom line. In the eyes of others like Qi Qianxiu, they might think that he had secretly reached a tacit agreement with Xue Jianfeng and Xue Liping. That would cause dissension and dissension. That was not a situation he wanted to see. Deputy Sect Master, it's true that a new official has to make changes. However, aren't you being too persistent by repeatedly setting fire to the same place? The third elder sneered. The rest of Qi Qianxiu and the others also had a playful look on their faces. Everyone, you've misunderstood. Although I'm still talking about Cold, I'm not talking about her disobeying orders during her training. I'm talking about another serious crime of hers, leaking the sect's mantra to outsiders. Xue Jianfeng said with certainty. What? As soon as these words came out, everyone including Su Xiaodong was shocked. Disobeying the sect's orders could be a light or a serious crime. A simple confinement would be enough. However, if it was really as Xue Jianfeng said, that Cold had leaked the sect's mantra to outsiders, then the crime would be really serious. This was practically an act of betrayal. Chapter 53-46. Do you have any evidence? Hong Qingyuan hurriedly asked in a deep voice. Many people know about this matter. During the primeval trials, Lin Yi and his subordinates had accurately locked onto the vital points of our Snow Sword faction's various techniques. This is not a coincidence. Even if you use your toes to think, someone must have revealed our Snow Sword faction's mental cultivation method and martial techniques to them. Without a doubt, this person can only be Lung Lung, who has always been very close to Lin Yi. There is no other possibility, Xue Jianfeng said with conviction. The atmosphere in the meeting hall instantly became much more solemn. From the sect leader Hong Qingyuan to the ordinary gold core stage elders, everyone unconsciously frowned and collectively fell into silence. This is only your one-sided statement, Su Xiaodong retorted. She had never heard Lung Lung mention this matter, so she did not know the specific situation. When she suddenly heard Xue Jianfeng's words, her heart was already in a mess. She just instinctively believed that her disciple would not betray the sect. That was all. My one-sided statement? I have a real witness for what I said. Our sect's disciple Luo Shaxing is the victim. Do you want to ask him to come over and be the witness? Xue Jianfeng's face was filled with confidence. Other than him, there was no one else who knew about this matter. Luo Shaxing and the other Snow Sword faction disciples who had participated in the secular world's training would certainly follow his lead. Of course, this matter would be decided by what he said. You. Su Xiaodong immediately felt a little guilty. She believed that Lung Lung was innocent, but the other party had even brought out a witness. They were preparing to directly make this an ironclad case. This matter cannot be underestimated. Since there is a witness, then let's call him over and ask him face to face. This will be good for everyone, Hong Qingyuan immediately decided. All right. Xue Jianfeng approved of this move and immediately sent someone to find Luo Shaxing. Luo Shaxing was frightened to the point that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly when faced with the questions of these big shots. He stuttered as he recounted the situation of the primeval trials. At this moment he didn't dare to lie in the slightest. In fact, Xue Jianfeng didn't need him to deliberately lie. With him here, Luo Shaxing only needed to report truthfully and not speak any superfluous words. After listening to Luo Shaxing's report, Hong Qingyuan and the others looked at each other, and their expressions became more and more solemn. It was obvious that Luo Shaxing did not lie. Otherwise it would not have escaped their eyes at all. It was because of this that they were so solemn. From the looks of it, Lung Lung's crime of revealing the sect's heart technique was almost certain. There's nothing to say now, right? Xue Jianfeng looked at everyone proudly. At the same time he didn't forget to take care of Su Xiaodong. Usually he wouldn't put such an inconspicuous substitute elder in his eyes, but who asked him to be Lung Lung's master? Su Xiaodong was speechless. She wanted to refute, but she didn't know how to refute. After all, they had even brought out a witness and her words carried little weight. How could she refute? Great elder, what do you think? Hong Qingyuan looked at Qi Qianxiu. Qi Qianxiu glanced at Xue Jianfeng and said slowly, It sounds serious, but in my opinion we can't rush to a conclusion now. No matter what, we still have to confront Lung Lung face to face. What do you think, sect leader? Yes, that's what I think too. Hong Qingyuan nodded. Although the sect had 2 more experts in the Golden Core realm, no one would complain about having too many talented disciples with unlimited potential. A super genius like Lung Lung, no matter which sect she was placed in, even in the top 4 clans and sects of the entire primeval underworld, would definitely be a treasure that they could only wish for. Unless it was absolutely necessary, otherwise why would they destroy themselves? Confront? Xue Jianfeng frowned. He knew very well that once Lung Lung was called over, it would definitely be a back-and-forth wrangling. Just as he was about to think of an excuse to reject it, Su Xiaodong on the other side was the first to become restless. "No way." Su Xiaodong quickly shouted. "Why not?" Hong Qingyuan and Qi Qianqiu looked at each other. Lung Lung is currently in closed-door training to break through to the Golden Core realm. Once she's interrupted, the consequences will be unimaginable. Su Xiaodong said anxiously. She's already breaking through to the Golden Core realm so soon? Everyone was shocked to hear this. In just a short year, she had soared from the early stage of foundation building all the way to the foundation building perfected. This in itself was already a very remarkable miracle. From the perspective of any normal person, Lung Lung would have to settle down for a few years in her current position, and only start to prepare after her realm was completely stabilized. How could she break through to the Golden Core realm so soon? Where did she get such confidence and confidence? Shui Jianfeng's eyes lit up when he heard this. As a Gold Core perfected realm cultivator, he had long looked down on Lung Lung. However, since it was the critical period for Lung Lung to break through to the Golden Core realm, then there was something to be done. As everyone knew, the breakthrough of any stage in isolation was very particular about doing it in one go. It was even more so when it came to breaking through to the Golden Core realm, especially for a genius disciple like Lung Lung who had an unparalleled talent. One should know that the most important thing for a so-called genius was to have indomitable confidence and pride. Because of this confidence and pride, they could often dig out their talent to the fullest, and become an existence that ordinary disciples could only look up to. However, this was also a double-edged sword. Once they encountered a setback at an important juncture, after the confidence and pride that they had all along been dealt a blow, these so-called geniuses would most likely be unable to recover from the setback, or even vanish into the masses. There were too many such precedents in the small Jianghu in the ancient times, too many to mention. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if they could not kill the genius Lung Lung, even if they could only interrupt Lung Lung's breakthrough rhythm, causing her to be stuck at the Golden Core realm bottleneck for a few more years or decades, it would still be a pleasant surprise. So what if she's breaking through to the Golden Core realm? She can ignore the summons of the Elders Guild just because she's breaking through to the Golden Core realm. She can even ignore the crime of betraying the sect. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Shui Jianfeng immediately sneered with slanted eyes. But Su Xiaodong still wanted to argue. But my ass, if the emperor breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people. Lung Lung is just an ordinary disciple, but she's giving special treatment. Then does our Snow Sword sect still have any rules to speak of? Shui Jianfeng glared and said righteously. Sect leader, great elder, it's still uncertain whether Lung Lung has leaked our sect's mental cultivation method to outsiders. Now is the most critical time for her to break through to the Golden Core realm. Everyone knows that once the first attempt fails, the difficulty of the second attempt will increase exponentially. If we forcefully interrupt it at this time, it's almost like killing a super genius. For the sake of the sect, please be careful. Su Xiaodong could only plead with the two of them. It's going to be 515 soon. I hope I can continue to break through to the 515 red envelope list. On the 15th of May, the red envelope reign will be able to give back to the readers and promote the works. Being together is also love. I'll definitely do my best. Chapter 5347. Here's today's update, and at the same time, I'm pulling votes for the Chidian 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes and the votes will also be given some coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. I think. Qi Qianqiu hesitated for a moment and said somewhat unbearably, why don't we postpone it? It's not too late to confront her face to face after she breaks through to the Gold Core stage. What do you think, Sect Master? In the end, before Hong Qingyuan could express his opinion, Shui Jianfeng had already taken the lead and slammed the table, saying unscrupulously, Great Elder, I think you're really too old and muddle-headed, aren't you? If someone makes a mistake, we must immediately convict them as a warning to others. This is not a child's play. This is a matter of principle, and it concerns the survival of our entire Snow Sword sect. Do you think that a matter of principle can be discounted and negotiated? Qi Qianqiu's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Even Hong Qingyuan had never dared to speak to him in such a tone, let alone a mere young junior. However, although Shui Jianfeng's words were unpleasant to hear, every word was reasonable and he really couldn't refute it for a while. Everyone's eyes then focused on Hong Qingyuan again. At this time it was up to him, the sect master, to make a decision. Hong Qingyuan was very embarrassed. This problem was even more difficult for him than letting Shui Jianfeng be the executive deputy sect master just now. He knew very well that it was unrealistic for him to forcibly suppress the matter of the executive deputy sect master. After all, the other party was a gold core perfection expert with a promising future at such a young age. Instead of blindly suppressing him, it was better to go with the flow. At worst, he could help Bing Wuqing next and let the two of them balance each other. However, regarding Lung Lung's matter, he couldn't go with the flow. That was very likely to destroy a future pillar. However, Shui Jianfeng was stubbornly clinging onto the matter, and even claimed the righteous cause. As the sect master, he couldn't ignore it. What should he do? Tap, tap, tap. Hong Qingyuan tapped the table. His expression was unfathomable. No one could tell what he was thinking. After a long time, he slowly said, "The executive vice sect leader's words are reasonable." That one sentence made Su Xiaodong feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Shui Jianfeng and his father Shui Liping's lips curled up. However, before they could laugh out loud, Hong Qingyuan immediately added, "However, the matter of leaking our sect's mental cultivation method is still not conclusive after all. Cold is at most a suspect. She can't be considered guilty yet. Therefore, we still have to consider for her and postpone the face-to-face confrontation." "That's not appropriate, is it?" Shui Jianfeng's face darkened immediately. He snorted and said, "Let's not talk about the fact that this matter should be dealt with as soon as possible to warn others. At the very least, this is my first proposal as the executive vice sect leader. Is the authority of the executive vice sect leader just for show?" Qi Qianxiu and the other elders grinned at the same time. In their eyes, Shui Jianfeng's position as the executive vice sect leader was controversial. He really thought he was a big shot. However, Hong Qingyuan could only appease him. The position of the executive vice sect leader is very important. Of course, it's not just for show. We can't be too arbitrary. What if I insist? Shui Jianfeng turned hostile like flipping a book. Just now he was smiling at Hong Qingyuan, but now he was aggressive. Looking at his posture, if the other party didn't agree, he might turn hostile right away. This guy really has a dog's character. Hong Qingyuan was so angry that he cursed in his heart. Although the other party's strength as a great perfection gold core was extraordinary, it was unrealistic to say that it could scare him, the dignified sect leader. However, considering the overall situation, he couldn't turn hostile like Shui Jianfeng so easily. Hong Qingyuan didn't feel it before, but at this moment he really regretted it. Normally, when one reached the level of great perfection gold core, one must be a mature and experienced figure. In his opinion, even if Shui Jianfeng wasn't as steady and decent as Qi Qianxiu, he should at least be at the level of his father, Shui Liping. He shouldn't turn hostile right away. Who would have thought that he was such a dog? Little did he know that if Shui Jianfeng was alone, even if this guy had the strength of great perfection gold core, he might not dare to be so unscrupulous. But now he had the central, and unfathomable and powerful backing, and he didn't put Hong Qingyuan and the others in his eyes at all. With his usual character, of course he would turn hostile right away. Why would he care so much? In Shui Jianfeng's eyes, with the central pulling the strings behind the scenes, the whole Snow Sword sect would fall into his control sooner or later. Hong Qingyuan and the others were just bones in the grave. If they were sensible, he could give them a nominal high-level position. If not, none of them would have a good end. The atmosphere in the conference hall suddenly became extremely tense and oppressive again. Hong Qingyuan's face was gloomy and uncertain. In the face of the aggressive Shui Jianfeng, he was forced to take a small step back. Otherwise, if they really fought face-to-face, the whole situation would be messed up. Well, since the executive deputy head insists, I'll have to trouble Elder Su to send a message to Cold. Under the premise that it won't affect her too much, let her come out for a confrontation and clarify. Hong Qingyuan said. Su Xiaodong hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and agreed. This was a choice forced by helplessness. There was no other way. If she was asked to send a message to Cold, she would naturally be careful. At most, she would give a gentle reminder, but would not forcefully interrupt. In this way, the damage to Cold would not be so great. If it were someone else, it would be a big trouble. No. Shui Jianfeng stood out directly to stop them. He snorted and said, "She is Cold's master. Who knows what she will do in this? What if she takes the opportunity to collude with Cold? Let me do it. If you want to stop me, you can try to stop me." As soon as he said that, everyone was stunned. Shui Jianfeng's unreasonable level was far beyond everyone's expectations. For a moment, no one dared to stop him. In terms of strength, the only one present who could compete with Shui Jianfeng was Hong Qingyuan. However, since Shui Jianfeng had already said so as the sect leader, how could Hong Qingyuan dare to take the risk? If they really turned hostile and started a fight, the entire Snow Sword sect would be in chaos. However, if they did not stop him, Shui Jianfeng would definitely not give up this excellent opportunity to attack Cold. A good super genius might be destroyed in his hands. If Cold was found to be innocent, it would be too late for regrets. While they were in a dilemma, a delicate figure stood in front of Shui Jianfeng without hesitation. It was Su Xiaodong. Do you want to die? Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Although Su Xiaodong was Lung Lung's master, he was only the lowest-ranked alternate elder in terms of status. In terms of strength, he was only at the early gold core stage. What did he have to stop him? It's going to be 515 soon. I hope to continue to charge into the 515 red packet ranking. On the 15th of May, the red packet reign will reward the readers and promote the works. Every piece is love. I'll definitely do my best. Chapter 53-48. Here's today's update, and at the same time, I'd like to solicit votes for the Qidian 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will also be given some coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. Su Xiaodong did not speak. She knew that it was useless for her to say anything at this time. She could only express her determination with actions. For Lung Lung's sake, she would not give in even if she was beaten to death. Okay, I'll fulfill your wish. A brutal killing intent suddenly surged out of Shui Jianfeng's body. This scene really shocked everyone present. Even Hong Qingyuan and Qi Qianxiu's expressions changed. This guy must be crazy. Could it be that he really dared to kill people in this conference hall? Compared to the shock of everyone, Su Xiaodong bore the brunt of it at this moment. Facing the oppression of a great perfection Gold Core Realm master at close range, she, who was in the early stage of the Gold Core Realm, was in a precarious situation. Once the opponent made a move, it would not take a second move to kill her. However, Su Xiaodong still did not give in. Shui Jianfeng could not help but laugh. He immediately unsheathed his long sword and stabbed it straight at Su Xiaodong's throat. The sword was so fast that Su Xiaodong had no time to dodge it. Hong Qingyuan and the others were too far away. At this time, even if they wanted to help, it was unrealistic. In everyone's eyes, she was now a dead person. For a moment, everyone's eyes changed again and again when they looked at Shui Jianfeng. Previously they thought this guy was just arrogant, but now they felt a real tremor from their bones. Killing people because of a disagreement, this guy was simply a demon. At this time, no one paid attention to Su Xiaodong anymore. She had been shrouded by the shadow of death. No one could save her from Shui Jianfeng's sword because Hong Qingyuan, who had this ability, had given up trying. As a result, Shui Jianfeng's sword stopped abruptly midway. Everyone was stunned at the same time. Everyone was a little incredulous. Could it be that this guy had found his conscience? But then they suddenly realized that Shui Jianfeng's face was extremely ugly at this time. It did not look like he had found his conscience and stopped voluntarily. In fact, his long sword was not stopped by him at all. It was blocked by a thin layer of ice out of thin air. Yes, it was just a thin layer of ice. At first glance, it looked like a layer of ice that could be pierced with a finger, but it actually blocked Shui Jianfeng's long sword. Who is it? Shui Jianfeng was almost roaring these 4 words. One must know that he was prepared to kill Su Xiaodong in front of everyone to establish his prestige. Therefore, he didn't hold back at all in his previous attack except for not using his trump card. However, his attack was still blocked by a thin layer of ice. How could he endure this? Me. A calm voice came from outside the door. Then a figure walked in, causing everyone's eyelids to twitch. The temperature of the entire meeting hall instantly dropped. The person was Bing Wuxia. Aren't you in seclusion? Shui Jianfeng was dumbfounded. The reason why he had deliberately chosen this time to make trouble was not only because today was the regular meeting of the Elder Council, but also because Bing Wuxia was in closed-door cultivation. At this time, no one could stop him. Otherwise, no matter how strong he was, it would be a waste of effort. He could scare people like Hong Qingyuan, but how could he scare Bing Wuxia? I'm out for a walk when I'm happy. What can you do about it? Bing Wuxia glanced at him expressionlessly. Then she looked at Su Xiaodong. Seeing that he wasn't injured, she turned back and continued, "You seem to be very awe-inspiring to kill someone in front of all the higher-ups of the Elder Council." Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but choke. Logically speaking, he and Bing Wuxia were experts of the same level and had the same background. There was no reason for him to be afraid of her. However, in fact, Bing Wuxia's strength had always been deeply ingrained in his heart. Instinctively, he didn't think he could defeat her, especially when his attack just now was superb. He had no confidence in front of Bing Wuqing. Suddenly Shui Jianfeng's expression changed. He looked at Bing Wuqing with shock and anger in his eyes. The scene just now made him think of an extremely embarrassing but logical possibility. During this period of time she had completely digested and absorbed the divine sense grass. Now she was the strongest expert in the gold core stage. Although it had only been half a month, there was very little information about the divine sense grass. No one knew how long it would take to absorb half a stalk of divine sense grass. Half a month was completely possible. Otherwise the scene just now couldn't be explained at all. They were both experts in the great perfection of the gold core stage. How could she block his attack so easily? The strongest expert in the gold core stage. This was the only reasonable explanation. What? You just pulled out your sword and killed people. Now you've become mute and can't speak? Bing Wuqing walked forward and sat down in the empty seat next to Hong Qingyuan, ignoring everyone's reaction. From the beginning to the end, her attitude toward Shui Jianfeng was not so much contempt, but disregard. It seemed that she didn't take him seriously at all. The feeling of being ignored immediately enraged Shui Jianfeng. He gritted his teeth and growled in a low voice, "That's my seat." "Your seat?" Bing Wuqing was stunned. She turned to look at Hong Qingyuan and said, "Does he have a special position? He even has a special seat?" "It was just approved today. He's the new executive deputy leader," Hong Qingyuan explained. He was as surprised as everyone else. He thought to himself that Bing Wuqing was really Shui Jianfeng's nemesis. Last time she made Shui Jianfeng speechless. This time, when Shui Jianfeng flew into a rage, he was forcefully suppressed by her again. Was amazing. Executive deputy leader? What the hell is that? Bing Wuqing was a little confused. Shui Jianfeng had made up this term for himself. Before this, there was no such position in the Snow Sword sect. She had never even heard of it. Humph, the executive deputy leader is second only to the sect leader. He's the second most important person in the entire Elder Council. You can't just sit in this position casually. Bing Wuqing, don't be too arrogant. Shui Jianfeng snorted coldly. Hong Qingyuan and the others had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Arrogant? How could you have the nerve to say such a thing? Is that so? Bing Wuqing didn't comment. She continued to look at Hong Qingyuan and said, "Can I ask who was the one who suggested that he be the executive deputy leader?" Everyone looked at Shui Jianfeng. No one said a word, but their eyes said it all. "You suggested it yourself?" Even Bing Wuqing, who was usually expressionless, couldn't help but feel a little strange. She complained, "You made yourself the executive deputy leader? How shameless are you?" "I deserve it. What can you do about it?" Shui Jianfeng snorted angrily. He walked to the front and curled his lips. "Get out of my way. It's going to be 515 soon. I hope to continue to hit the 515 red envelope list. On May 15th, the red envelope rain will reward the readers and promote the work. Love to. I'll do my best." Chapter 5349. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, garnering votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes and the votes will be rewarded with coins. Begging for everyone's support and appreciation. Deserving of it? Bing Wuqing's expression became more and more strange. She looked at Hong Qingyuan and the others and said, "He's a fool and you guys are playing along with him. When did you guys become so playful?" Everyone broke out in a cold sweat. Although Bing Wuqing's words weren't very respectful, the truth was that they had been kidnapped by Shui Jianfeng and forced to acknowledge him as the managing deputy sect leader. After all, Shui Jianfeng was a golden core perfected cultivator. "What did you say?" Shui Jianfeng was completely enraged. He was afraid of her strength, but it didn't mean that he only dared to act like a coward in front of her. If he was really cornered, he would also turn hostile. "Sneaking around behind my back and baring your teeth at me. Where did you get your confidence from?" When she said this, Bing Wuqing didn't even look at Shui Jianfeng. The disdain was almost obvious on her face. When Shui Jianfeng heard this, he was instantly enraged. However, when he thought that the other party was very likely to be the strongest Aurus core expert in the legends, he didn't dare to act rashly. After all, he hadn't been overwhelmed by anger yet. He could only suppress his anger and clench his teeth as he said, "From what you're saying, could it be that you want to snatch the position of deputy sect master from my hands?" Bing Wuqing snorted and said disdainfully, "I'm not interested in such a stupid position." Bing Wuqing, don't go too far. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that he couldn't beat her, Shui Jianfeng would have killed this dead-faced bastard with a sword. Wait, don't be impatient both of you. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, Hong Qingyuan quickly stepped forward to mediate. If he really let Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng fight like this, although he could sit on the sidelines and watch them fight, then the situation would be completely out of control. If two Golden Core perfected experts really fought, even he wouldn't be able to stop them easily. After all, he was the sect leader. Hong Qingyuan's words were more or less effective. Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng stopped fighting. Her gaze then landed on him. With the two of your superb strength, it is reasonable for you to bear heavy responsibilities. Now that Jian Feng is already the deputy sect leader, Wu Qing should also arrange a position of equal strength to show fairness. Originally, because Wu Qing was in seclusion, I was going to postpone the discussion on this matter. Now that Wu Qing has come out of seclusion, how about we settle it together today? Hong Qingyuan said. He had been regretting it ever since Xue Jianfeng had flipped out. Now Bing Wuqing had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and interfered. Even though Xue Jianfeng was also somewhat condescending, it was a good thing for him. It was just nice for him to keep Xue Jianfeng in check, lest Xue Jianfeng become unruly and out of control. Equally matched positions? Bing Wuqing raised her brows slightly. The managing vice sect leader is second only to the sect leader. He is undoubtedly the number 2 figure in the Elder Guild. There's no such thing as an equal position. Xue Jianfeng was extremely displeased when he heard that. The title of managing vice sect leader was not something that he had come up with on a whim. He had racked his brains for it so that he could surpass Bing Wuqing and be on par with her. Wouldn't he have wasted all his efforts? Positions are all created by people. Before today, I had never heard of any managing vice sect leader. Isn't it still here now? Qi Qianqiu sneered. He, as the great elder, was supposed to be the second in command. Now, not only did the managing vice sect leader appear out of nowhere, even Bing Wuqing was about to climb over his head. He felt really upset. But then again, it was not that he was blind to the bigger picture. In this situation, he was definitely on Bing Wuqing's side. After all, it was better to have someone to keep her in check than not. Then tell me, what other position can be on par with the managing vice sect leader? Xue Jianfeng said disdainfully. Well? Qi Qianqiu pondered for a moment, then said, since there's already a managing vice sect leader, why don't we have a first vice sect leader? First vice sect leader? Xue Jianfeng frowned. He scolded, Great Elder, have you gone senile? The managing vice sect leader is already the number 1 vice sect leader. What first vice sect leader? That's not the same. The managing vice sect leader is the number 1 vice sect leader. Who said that both positions must be held concurrently? The second elder chuckled. The other elders who had the right to speak also chimed in. Since there was already a managing vice sect leader, they did not mind having another first vice sect leader. It would be perfect for Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng to fight amongst themselves. They were more than happy to sit on the sidelines and reap the spoils later. Preposterous. Xue Jianfeng was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He hated Bing Wuqing again. If it were not for her, he would have succeeded in killing people to establish his dominance. These old farts would not have dared to pick a fight with him. What do you think? Hong Qingyuan looked at Bing Wuqing. At this point, Xue Jianfeng's attitude was obviously irrelevant. With all of them pushing for it, as long as Bing Wuqing herself agreed, the first vice sect leader position was already set in stone. Even if Xue Jianfeng and his father Xue Liping joined forces, they would not be able to stop it. Is it appropriate for something like this to happen without me, the managing vice sect leader's approval? Xue Jianfeng was still making his final struggle. In the end, Bing Wuqing glanced at him indifferently and said disdainfully, It's none of your business. Now that I'm too lazy to attack you, you'd better get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. What a big tone. I'd like to see it for myself. Xue Jianfeng said as he suddenly drew his sword again. Without hesitation, he soared into the sky and launched a powerful attack from above. His sword fell from the 9 heavens. Everyone, including Hong Qingyuan, turned pale with fright. This guy was really a lunatic. Not only did he attack Su Xiaodong just now, but now he even dared to attack Bing Wuqing, who was also a Golden Core perfected cultivator. Moreover, he used such a trump card right from the start. The entire meeting hall was instantly in chaos. Everyone's first reaction was to dodge and retreat subconsciously. After all, swords had no eyes. Although they were all Golden Core experts, once they were hit by the aftermath of a Golden Core perfected cultivator's attack, it would be fatal. However, it turned out that they had been overthinking things. There were no aftershocks, nor were there any innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. In the face of Xue Jianfeng's powerful attack, Bing Wuqing used only one move to easily end the battle. It was her signature move, the Merciless Ice Stance. In the past, although the Merciless Ice Stance had also exerted great pressure on others, it was ultimately just pressure. When faced with experts of the same level, it could at most have a limited effect. However, the scene that was unfolding in front of everyone's eyes right now had completely overturned all their previous understanding. Chapter 5350. Bing Wuqing had only unleashed the Merciless Ice Force, and Xue Jianfeng's entire body was covered in a thin layer of ice. He did not even manage to fully unleash the sword Descends Nine Heavens, and just like that, he fell stiffly from midair like a lifelike ice sculpture. For a moment, everyone was dumbfounded. After a moment, Xue Liping suddenly reacted with a shout and rushed up to help the ice sculpture up. He asked in a terrified tone, "Feng, are you all right?" This. Hong Qingyuan opened his mouth, but could not utter a proper sentence. Judging from Xue Jianfeng's power just now, he could tell that even if Xue Jianfeng's power was not as steady and experienced as his, he was definitely not weak among those in the Golden Core Great Completion. Yet, such a powerful existence was actually taken care of by Bing Wuqing so easily, without even batting an eye. Was she still human? It didn't make sense. Bing Wuqing was just a Golden Core perfected cultivator after all. How could there be such a huge gap between the same level? After a long while, the thin layer of ice on the surface of Xue Jianfeng finally broke. His face was pale and he hunched his body in an extremely sorry state. Panting heavily, he stammered, "Most powerful golden stage." As soon as he said that, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone, including Hong Qingyuan, looked at Bing Wuqing with even more respect. Could she really be the legendary most powerful Golden Core expert? It wasn't impossible. Although neither Bing Wuqing nor Xue Jianfeng mentioned anything about the Divine Knowledge Grass, with their strength, it would be easy for them to participate in the primeval trial. It wasn't impossible for them to find the legendary Divine Knowledge Grass. And the overwhelming strength that Bing Wuqing displayed just now could only be explained by the fact that she was the strongest Golden Core expert. In the face of the subconscious reverence from the crowd, Bing Wuqing didn't care. She curled her lips slightly and said, "Who told me that she was the strongest Golden Core expert? Wasn't she?" Xue Jianfeng, who had finally managed to catch his breath, was stunned when he heard that. He assumed that since the other party had come out of seclusion, she must have used the other half of the Divine Knowledge Grass, which meant that she was naturally the strongest Golden Core expert. Was there anything wrong with that? Bing Wuqing smiled, which was rare, but it was a mocking sneer. "Why don't you feel it again?" "Feel what?" Before Xue Jianfeng could react, Bing Wuqing raised her hand slightly and unleashed her merciless ice force once again. A thin layer of ice instantly covered him again. However, with the previous example, Xue Jianfeng's reaction was extremely fast this time. He immediately unleashed his strongest protective layer of qi without any regard for the price. Even though he would inevitably be in a somewhat sorry state, he wouldn't be turned into a human-shaped ice sculpture without any resistance. After all, he was an expert in the peak of the Gold Core realm. Otherwise it would be too embarrassing. Only so. Xue Jianfeng pretended to be calm and wanted to mock him. However, before he could finish his words, his entire body suddenly trembled. His knees went soft and he knelt down on the spot. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. No one would have thought that this guy would actually kneel in public. What the hell was he doing? Of course, Xue Jianfeng didn't kneel willingly. At this moment, his expression was incomparably sinister and conflicted, because what was trapping him wasn't just the thin layer of ice on the surface. It was the insides of his two legs that had been frozen. He had no choice but to kneel. That wasn't what shocked him the most. What really shocked him was that the merciless ice force that he sensed earlier was not the power of an expert in the Golden Core realm. It was clearly a level higher, an existence that was completely above the Golden Core realm. It was a nascent soul realm old monster. Nascent soul realm old monster? How could you be a nascent soul realm old monster? Xue Jianfeng was practically going crazy. He couldn't react the first time because the other party hadn't used her full strength. But now Bing Wuqing had used her full strength. His two legs were frozen to this extent and were almost crippled. If he still couldn't react in time, he would be too slow. What? Nascent soul realm old monster? Everyone present, including Hong Qingyuan, was collectively shocked. Each of them looked at Bing Wuqing in disbelief. Just now, the range of the merciless ice force was controlled to be extremely small. Therefore, although they were very close to it, they didn't feel its power at all. They just assumed that it was the strongest Golden Core realm. Who would have thought that it was actually a nascent soul realm old monster? But how was this possible? The birth of any expert in the nascent soul realm. That was a huge matter that would affect the entire structure of the small immemorial underworld. And in the entire small immemorial underworld, although there weren't as many experts in the Golden Core realm as there were dogs everywhere, the overall number was not small. Basically, any sect or clan of a high level would have a few or even a dozen of them. Snow Sword faction was considered very rare. If it were the top 4 sects and clans, they wouldn't even be able to count them with one hand. There were no less than 3 digits of experts in the Golden Core realm, and every single one of them had been scheming to break through to the nascent soul realm. But how many of them had succeeded in the end? The reality was that in the last 20 years, the number of experts in the small immemorial underworld who had recently advanced to the nascent soul realm was 0. Not a single one. Condensing the nascent soul sounded like a simple task, but the difficulty involved was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Just the nascent condensation golden core, which could only be obtained by luck, was enough to make everyone flinch. Even if they were lucky enough to obtain it, the entire breakthrough process would take at least a few years. How could it be so fast? Half a month ago she was still in the Golden Core realm, but now she had become a nascent soul realm old monster the moment she came out. What kind of heavenly book was this? But then again, if it had been someone else they would not have believed it. But when it came to Bing Wuqing, Hong Qingyuan and the others really could not be sure. It was not just Bing Wuqing but also Shui Jianfeng and Lung Lung. They could not see through these people. It had only been slightly more than a year since she started her training in the secular world, yet Lung Lung had soared from the early stage of foundation building all the way to the foundation building perfected. This was unprecedented in the history of the small immemorial underworld. But compared to the other two it was still acceptable. Someone had provided her with elixirs and she was naturally talented, so this could be explained. But Bing Wuqing had directly soared from the early stage of Golden Core realm to the Golden Core realm perfected. How could this be explained? One had to know that the Golden Core realm and the foundation building realm were two completely different concepts. Even if it was possible to achieve this by swallowing elixirs, where could so many golden cores and golden cores come from? Not even the entire small immemorial underworld had so many, right? That was not all. What made everyone even more speechless was Shui Jianfeng. This fellow had directly gone from the foundation building perfected to the Golden Core realm perfected. This was practically a breakthrough. Chapter 53-51. If one could succeed in reaching the Gold Core realm by simply taking a stroll in the secular world, then what was the primordial underworld? Most importantly, it was guaranteed to reach Gold Core consummation within a year. Was there any justice in this? Bing Wuqing wouldn't say these things and neither would Shui Jianfeng. Even if Hong Qingyuan and the others were itching to know, they could only hold it in and not press them. After all, they were both Gold Core consummation experts. Only nascent soul realm experts were qualified to interrogate them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. In the end, they hadn't even figured out the matter of Gold Core consummation, and suddenly a nascent soul realm expert appeared. Was she crazy? However, the crowd's first reaction wasn't to believe her. Instead, they thought that Shui Jianfeng might have been scared out of his wits. He assumed that she was a nascent soul realm expert because he had been completely defeated by her. After all, it wasn't shameful for a Gold Core consummation expert to be defeated by a nascent soul realm expert. In the end, Bing Wuqing's next words made everyone completely dumbfounded. You only found out now? No one has such a slow reaction. The crowd gasped one after another. Everyone's mouth, including Hong Qingyuan's, opened so wide that a duck's egg could be stuffed inside. The same thing was written all over their faces. She really was a nascent soul realm expert. Hearing this affirmative answer, Shui Jianfeng's already pained expression became even more pained. He couldn't hold himself up anymore and collapsed to the ground, howling in pain. If she was just the strongest Gold Core cultivator, even if he wasn't as strong as her, he could still fight. But now she had suddenly become a nascent soul realm expert. What could he do? He would never have guessed that the main purpose of Bing Wuqing's seclusion for half a month was not to get the half-consciousness grass from him, but to get the supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pill from Lin Yi. In half a month, not only did she use up the half-consciousness grass, but she also used the supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pill to condense her nascent soul. Most importantly, she actually succeeded. Bing Wuqing's achievements in the primordial underworld could only be described as unprecedented. Even from Lin Yi's point of view, Bing Wuqing's innate talent was extremely important. Bing Wuqing's existence even reminded him of Lung Rufin, the little brother he had just taken in on Heaven Stage Island. Lung Rufin was the signature figure of the East Continent's Soaring Cloud Academy. There was no doubt that he was extremely talented. Of course, Lung Rufin was an expert of the mysterious ascension stage, and the strength of the two of them was far from being comparable. But in terms of talent alone, Lin Yi felt that Bing Wuqing was at the same level as him. This was almost the highest level, or else he wouldn't have invested so many elixirs on Bing Wuqing for no reason. Although Lin Yi had the divine pesticide cauldron, as long as he had enough elixirs, he could have as many top-grade elixirs as he wanted. However, the landlord did not have any surplus food. If he really found a piece of trash and randomly threw elixirs at him, he would be struck by lightning. Sometimes Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder if he could defeat freaks like Lung Rufin and Bing Wuqing if he didn't have so many heaven-defying cheats. This was probably a huge suspense. Feng. Shui Liping was completely dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He quickly rushed over and picked up Shui Jianfeng, who was in pain. In the past he, as the vice sect leader, was definitely an incredible figure. But now that Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing had risen to prominence, Shui Liping suddenly became insignificant. Today's events, other than echoing his son in the beginning, he was basically in the background. No one paid attention to him at all. It was only at times like this that he was able to get some screen time, but it was only a sad scene. Bing Wuqing, what did you do to my son? This is the Elders' Council, and he is the new executive vice sect leader. Do you want to challenge the entire Elders' Council? Shui Liping questioned with a face full of grief and indignation. He didn't hesitate to put a big hat on Bing Wuqing. He wasn't too sure if the other party was really a nascent soul old monster, but he had to say it. Everyone turned to look at them when they heard this. Then two people immediately became the focus of attention. One was undoubtedly Bing Wuqing, and the other was Hong Qingyuan, who was supposed to be in charge of the situation as the sect leader. Hong Qingyuan didn't say anything. He looked at Bing Wuqing with everyone else. No one knew what he was thinking at this moment. Perhaps he was digesting Bing Wuqing's true strength, or perhaps he was thinking of corresponding countermeasures. After all, if the other party was really a nascent soul old monster, how he should deal with her was not something he could decide alone. He had to be extremely cautious. Challenge the entire Elders' Council? Bing Wuqing looked at him, then at Hong Qingyuan and the others. She asked, according to what you're saying, when he attacked Elder Su just now, he also challenged the entire Elders' Council? Shui Liping choked. Under everyone's strange gazes, his old face flushed red. He tried to defend himself. That's different. Su Xiaodong offended his superior by standing in the way. This is a serious crime. Even if he was killed by Feng Er's sword, he deserved it. Blocking the way is offending your superior? Since when did our Snow Sword sect become so strict? Is it a new rule set by vice sect leader Shui? Su Xiaodong immediately stood up and retorted. In the past she might not have had the guts to do so. But now that she had a strong person like Bing Wuqing to back her up, she could finally vent her anger. Su Xiaodong, don't push your luck. Shui Liping suppressed his anger and glared at her. I think this sentence is more suitable for you and your son. This time it was Bing Wuqing who spoke. She looked at them disdainfully and said, I'll say it here. In the future, no matter who opposes Lung, that person will be my enemy. Don't talk to me about the sect's rules. I don't care at all. Remember, the outcome of going against me is death unless you can survive under my hands. Her words made everyone break out in a cold sweat. It wasn't just Shui Liping and Shui Jianfeng, even Hong Qingyuan and the others felt their eyelids twitching. Those who didn't know better would think that they had entered a mountain bandit's lair. Her words were too unbridled. But then again, if Bing Wuqing was really a nascent soul realm old monster, he really did have the right to say such things. One had to know that the rules of any sect were set by the nascent soul realm old monsters. Standing at the top of the immemorial underworld, they naturally had the right to do so. Scram. Bing Wuqing said the last word. Shui Liping wanted to stiffen his neck and continue to be stubborn, but after Shui Jianfeng, who was in great pain, growled at him, he immediately gave in. He didn't dare to say another word and quickly retreated with Shui Jianfeng on his back. Chapter 53-52. Just a moment ago he was still flaunting his prowess as if from now on, the Elder Council would be decided by the person surnamed Shui. But now, in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he had already left with his tail between his legs. Wasn't the change in style a little too quick? No one spoke for a long time. Finally, it was Hong Qingyuan who broke the silence. That. Hong Qingyuan was just about to call Bing Wuqing by her name, but he thought that it would be overstepping his authority if she was really a nascent soul old monster. So, he could only say vaguely, please forgive me for asking, but have you really condensed your nascent soul? This was a serious matter and he couldn't afford to be careless. He had to brace himself and confirm it 100%. Otherwise he would become a laughing stock. Do you need me to show you? As Bing Wuqing spoke, she released an unprecedentedly powerful aura from her body. This was different from the merciless ice force. Strictly speaking, the merciless ice force was an offensive technique that she could control at will. Moreover, with her current level of control, she was extremely proficient in it. Apart from the person herself, no one would be able to get a clear idea of what she was capable of, which was why they were suspicious of her. But at this moment, the aura was different. It was the most intuitive feeling. Everyone immediately understood that this was definitely a genuine original Soul Realm old monster. Greetings, Grand Elder. Hong Qingyuan no longer had the slightest doubt. He hurriedly led everyone to pay their respects, not daring to show the slightest bit of neglect or disrespect. Regardless of Bing Wuqing's previous identity, and regardless of her seniority, according to the ancestral teachings, as long as there was someone in the sect who had advanced to the nascent Soul Realm, that person would automatically become the Grand Supreme Elder. Everyone, from the head of the sect to the ordinary disciples, had to pay their respects to her. Otherwise, it would be seen as deceiving her master. Bing Wuqing was not surprised by this. She nodded slightly and waved her hand. Get up, all of you. Thank you, Supreme Elder. Only then did Hong Qingyuan lead the rest of them to stand before Bing Wuqing respectfully, not daring to put on any of the usual dignified airs. Showing off in front of a nascent soul old monster was akin to courting death. This was a principle that even Shui Jianfeng knew. Since you've given Shui Jianfeng the position of deputy sect leader, shouldn't you also give me a position? Bing Wuqing asked casually. Hong Qingyuan and the others couldn't help but be stunned. He was already a Grand Elder, what position did he still need? Is there a problem? Bing Wuqing glanced at him. Please enlighten me, Grand Elder. Hong Qingyuan broke out in a cold sweat under his stare. Logically speaking, as the leader of a sect, he had dealt with many nascent soul old monsters in the past, so he shouldn't be this nervous. The key was that Bing Wuqing was definitely an anomaly. She had always had an eccentric temper, and Hong Qingyuan hadn't had many dealings with Bing Wuqing in the past. Besides, she was moody just now and he couldn't read her pulse. There's already a Grand Elder and now you're calling me Grand Elder. Aren't you messing around? Why don't we follow Shui Jianfeng's example and get an executive Grand Supreme Elder? Perhaps it was because she had just broken through and was in a good mood, but there was a rare hint of ridicule in Bing Wuqing's tone. Executive Grand Elder? Everyone's eyes widened when they heard this. What was going on? That. Hong Qingyuan hesitated for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, I'm afraid this isn't something we can decide. You know too that the Elders Guild can only discuss and decide matters of the sect below me, the sect leader. Strictly speaking, it's Shui Jianfeng's executive vice elder. It's already a little overboard for us to decide on our own, not to mention your executive Grand Supreme Elder. I'm afraid this matter has to be discussed between you and Elder Tong. We don't have the right to express our opinions. Elder Tong was the original Grand Supreme Elder of the Snow Sword faction. Didn't Elder Tong say he's in seclusion? You want me to call him out directly? Bing Wuqing frowned. Then why don't you wait a little longer for Elder Tong to come out of seclusion before talking to him in detail? Hong Qingyuan suggested carefully. I can't wait that long, Bing Wuqing replied casually. Hong Qingyuan choked instantly. He turned to look at Qi Qianxiu and the others, feeling even more conflicted than before. They'd finally gotten rid of the lawless Shui Jianfeng, and now a nascent soul old monster with an eccentric temperament had arrived. Wasn't this even harder to serve? Can't wait? Then what should they do? Hong Qingyuan was racking his brains for a reply when Bing Wuqing's next words solved his dilemma. I'm going out for a while. We'll talk about the matter of the executive Grand Supreme Elder when I come back. You're going out? Hong Qingyuan and the others were stunned. I'm going to the North Island, Bing Wuqing said dispassionately. Do you know anyone in the North Island? Hong Qingyuan asked. Interrogate me? Bing Wuqing's expression softened a little, which was rare for her. She immediately reverted to her usual expressionless face, which was intimidating. No. Your disciple wouldn't dare. Hong Qingyuan shook his head quickly and explained, Your disciple doesn't mean to be disrespectful at all. I'm just thinking that if you're going to visit other sects, your disciple should arrange for a guard of honor to accompany you as soon as possible. Once a new nascent soul realm old monster appeared in any sect, he or she would basically go out to visit other sects and show his or her face. This was to show off his or her strength, and there were many rituals involved, so he or she must not be neglected. Otherwise, even if people seemed afraid on the surface, they would privately laugh at him or her for being a nouveau riche who didn't even know the basic visiting rules. No, I'm just going to see someone. There's no need to go through all that trouble. By the way, when I'm not here, you guys look after Lung Lung. If anything happens to her before I come back, I'll hold you responsible, Bing Wuqing reminded them. Yes. Hong Qingyuan and the others were stunned. They didn't know why Bing Wuqing was taking care of Lung Lung so much, but since Bing Wuqing had said so, they had to protect Lung Lung even if they had to risk their lives. Otherwise, they would be going against the nascent soul realm old monsters. How many lives did they have? Fortunately, Shui Jianfeng had already suffered a great loss just now. The injury on his leg was normal, and he wouldn't be able to recover without a few months' time. Of course, if Hong Qingyuan and the others were really determined, it would be useless for Shui Jianfeng to act recklessly. Hong Qingyuan alone was enough to suppress him. Previously they were just wary, but now that they had Bing Wuqing to back them up, there was nothing to be afraid of. One was a golden core perfected, and the other was a nascent soul realm old monster. There was no need to consider which side to choose. Bing Wuqing nodded, and immediately asked someone to prepare a snow sword sect's best flying spirit beast. Under the gazes of Hong Qingyuan and the others, it rose into the sky and soon became a black dot that disappeared into the horizon. Our snow sword sect is finally about to usher in a new era. Qi Qianxiu sighed, half gratified and half sorrowful. Chapter 53-53. However, things were different now. With the addition of Bing Wuqing, a nascent soul expert, the snow sword faction had two nascent soul old monsters. Even if this top-notch combat force could not be compared to the 4 major sects and clans, it was undoubtedly one of the best among the 10 minor sects and clans. In the past, although the snow sword faction status was not bad, it did not have much say in the Middle Island Alliance. From now on, this rule would probably have to be changed. Yes, the patriarch spirit is here, there is hope for our snow sword faction to prosper. Hong Qingyuan looked at the horizon, his eyes shining. Even though the sudden rise of Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng was a big problem for him, as long as he could handle them well, the strength of the entire snow sword faction would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. How could Hong Qingyuan not have any ambitions to become a sect leader? He had a premonition that the time for the snow sword faction to flourish had come. After leaving the snow sword faction, Bing Wuqing drove the flying spirit beast straight to the North Island. The person she was going to see was naturally Lin Yi. Shui Jianfeng had already been crippled by him, and he had just said some harsh words in front of everyone in the elders' meeting. Before he left, he had specially reminded him. In his opinion, this was enough to complete the task that Lin Yi had given him before they parted. At least in the short term, no one in the Snow Sword faction would dare to provoke Cold, unless that person was crazy. Since Cold no longer had any worries, there was naturally no need for Bing Wuqing to stay in the Snow Sword faction. People like Shui Jianfeng might enjoy the feeling of being the highest supreme elder, but obviously Bing Wuqing was not. She had no interest in this kind of thing. Now that she had successfully broken through to the nascent soul realm, the first thing she had to do was to see Lin Yi, in addition to completing the task that Lin Yi had entrusted to her. There were 2 reasons. The first was to show her loyalty. It was all thanks to Lin Yi that he was able to become a nascent soul cultivator in such a short period of time. If it weren't for Lin Yi constantly giving him these top-quality pills, then it would simply be unimaginable. Therefore he had to express his heartfelt gratitude and show his loyalty to Lin Yi. Otherwise, if he became arrogant and thought that he was strong enough, then he wouldn't need to fear anyone anymore, then he would definitely die a miserable death. Since Lin Yi could create him, he could naturally destroy him easily as well. Bing Wuqing's heart was as clear as a mirror. Don't forget that Lin Dongfang had personally planted a spell in his body. The second reason was to ask Lin Yi about the next step of her mission. Lin Yi had spent so many top-quality pills to make him a nascent soul old monster who stood at the top of the immemorial underworld. Bing Wuqing believed that it was not as simple as asking her to protect Cold. Intuition told her that Lin Yi must have a deeper reason for doing so, and it must be related to the core. It was nothing in the past, but now that she had become a nascent soul old monster, every move she made was being watched. Bing Wuqing knew that she had to think carefully before she did anything, and most importantly, she had to figure out Lin Yi's attitude. Otherwise, if she accidentally went against Lin Yi's wishes, it would be an undeserved disaster. Apart from that, Bing Wuqing actually had another selfish motive. She knew very well that only by behaving obediently would she be able to continue obtaining supreme-grade golden nascent condensing pills from Lin Yi. Although nascent soul old monsters were already standing at the pinnacle of the immemorial martial world, to her, the early nascent soul stage was just the beginning. Following a freak like Lin Yi, Bing Wuqing never thought that the nascent soul stage was the end. In fact, whether it was Lin Yi or the core, both were enough to completely overturn her previous view of the world. To quote a saying, her future goal must be the sea of stars, and the nascent soul stage was just a starting point. But then again, going to the North Island so openly was equivalent to exposing his identity to some people, such as Shui Jianfeng, whom she had just taught a lesson to. Of course, Bing Wuqing wasn't stupid. She had already weighed the pros and cons before she did this. In fact, the fact that she was Lin Yi's follower could no longer be kept a secret from the moment she successfully condensed her nascent soul. Even if she didn't go to the North Island to meet Lin Yi, Shui Jianfeng and those people from the core could easily deduce that there was something fishy behind it. After all, the core didn't have the nature-defying technology that allowed her to condense her nascent soul so quickly. In fact, as Bing Wuqing had expected, Shui Jianfeng was the first to realize that she was an expert of the nascent soul stage. That was why he admitted defeat and retreated so decisively. One had to know that Bing Wuqing, who was in the same camp, and Bing Wuqing, who was in the opposite camp, were two completely different things to Shui Jianfeng. The former usually wouldn't do anything to him and he could still brace himself to save face, but the latter would really kill him. Shui Jianfeng was arrogant and presumptuous, but he wasn't stupid at all. After realizing this inside story, he didn't hesitate to give up on trying to be brave, because that would definitely be courting death. Feng, how's the injury on your leg? After Shui Liping carried Shui Jianfeng back to the cave abode, he looked at his son's blood-soaked legs helplessly. I won't die. Shui Jianfeng gritted his teeth and endured the intense pain. Bing Wuqing didn't kill him, but his legs were frozen. But this wasn't an ordinary freeze, it was an injury caused by the advanced version of Heartless Ice Force. It wasn't easy to treat the injury in a short period of time, and if it wasn't treated properly in time, it could easily leave indelible sequelae. His legs might even be disabled forever. This was a devastating blow to an expert of the Golden Core perfected realm who was determined to advance to the next level. This injury is no small matter. I'll call the people from the medical hall over for you, Shui Liping said after some thought. There's no need. The medical hall is filled with Qi Chenxiu's people, and now that Bing Wuqing is in power, those good-for-nothings won't do their best to treat my injuries. They might even do something behind the scenes. Shui Jianfeng reached out to stop him. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to be treated, but he didn't want to be examined. If the poisonous gas in his body was found, it would be troublesome. Then what should we do? We can't just bear it like this, can we? Shui Liping said with a frown. He had always been very concerned about this son of his. Now that Shui Jianfeng had suddenly become a Golden Core perfected realm expert, and his strength was a notch higher than his father's, he was naturally even more concerned. How about this, help me send a message to the people outside. They'll have a way to deal with this. Shui Jianfeng said, enduring the pain. People outside? You mean? Shui Liping was stunned. Chapter 53-54. The reason why the bespectacled professor thought highly of Shui Jianfeng and even came forward to fight for him to be specially trained was not only because of his talent and strength, but also because his father was the vice leader of the sect. Once he could rope him in with Shui Liping's connections, many things would be easier to handle, and it would save them a lot of trouble in the early stages of entering the immemorial underworld. Of course, Shui Jianfeng did not forget this most important task. In fact, from the first day he returned to the Snow Sword School, he had already been doing his father's work. It was just that this matter was of great importance, and he could not make up his mind until he saw how terrifying the center was. After all, this was a matter of life and death for their Shui clan. If they succeeded, then they would soar to great heights. But if they failed, then they would definitely suffer a huge loss. This was related to the future and fate of the entire clan, so Shui Liping had no choice but to be careful. Shui Jianfeng was not in a hurry. He knew that this kind of thing needed a process of acceptance. Besides, even with the center's methods, entering the immemorial underworld was not something that could be done in a day or two. During this period of time, they would at most send a small advance team over to get a feel of things. It was not the time to make a big move yet, so he was not in a hurry to get his father to choose a side. But now that things had happened so suddenly, and Bing Wuqing's sudden rise had completely disrupted their rhythm. She was a nascent soul realm old monster. In this situation, if they did not find the center to discuss this quickly, Shui Jianfeng felt like he was a rooster waiting to be slaughtered. If Bing Wuqing was unhappy, she could take his life at any time. Shui Liping hesitated for a moment with a gloomy expression, but finally stomped out and prepared to contact the center's advanced team according to Shui Jianfeng's instructions. It was not that he did not believe in the center's strength. In fact, with Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing as two living examples, he no longer had any doubts about the center's great strength. He just had not clearly weighed the pros and cons. Now that Shui Jianfeng was seriously injured, and Bing Wuqing was so overbearing, if he chose to retreat unconditionally, the other party would definitely take a mile after taking an inch. Shui Liping could see clearly that his future days would only get harder and harder. So, unless he gave up his son, Shui Jianfeng, and was willing to be a coward. Otherwise he had no other choice. Looking at Shui Liping's back as he left, the corners of Shui Jianfeng's mouth curled into a strange smile for some reason. It wasn't because his father had finally made a wise decision, but because of Bing Wuqing. Indeed, Bing Wuqing, who had suddenly become a nascent soul-old monster, was a huge threat to him. But at the same time, it also exposed the other party's background. Since he had betrayed the core, then no matter how strong he was already a dead man. Shui Jianfeng did not doubt this point at all. Although Shui Jianfeng's legs were heavily injured by the other party's merciless ice force, in reality, he couldn't help but feel excited and even elated. Bing Wuqing was a traitor. This meant that he had one less strong competitor in the fight for resources in the center. In terms of talent and strength, the others were no match for her. At the very least, he'd already become the only target that was worthy of the center's fostering, and the benefits he represented was obvious. To a certain extent, this was simply a blessing in disguise. North Island Blue Cloud Sect. Under the gaze of a crowd of disciples, a giant snow eagle descended from the sky. Everyone looked at it and started talking about it. Although all the flying spirit beasts of the ancient sects were mainly spirit birds, that was only for the ordinary elders and disciples, and some of the higher-ups with special status. The flying spirit beasts they used were often the symbolic spirit beasts of their respective sections. For example, Hong Zijuan, the leader of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, rode on a spiritual eagle. Snow Eagle was the symbolic spirit beast of the Snow Sword sect in the Middle Island. Seeing Bing Wuqing dismount from the back of the Snow Eagle, everyone looked at each other. Although the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island and the Snow Sword sect in the Middle Island were both part of the 10 small sects and families, one belonged to the North Island Alliance, while the other belonged to the Middle Island Alliance. They had almost no contact with each other, and the higher-ups of the sects rarely visited each other. What was going on today? May I ask who you are? A supervising disciple walked up and asked. Snow Sword sect. Bing Wuqing said lightly. Hearing this name, everyone was shocked. Bing Wuqing was a real celebrity in the small Jianghu of the primeval times. Back then, she was the most famous person in the Foundation establishment stage, and almost all the disciples of the primeval sects looked up to a genius. Even in this remote North Island, she was well known. But why would such an influential figure suddenly appear here? Your Excellency, what brings you to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? The supervising disciple asked, neither servile nor overbearing. I'm here to see someone. His name is Lin Yi, and he's the primeval uncle master of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Bing Wuqing spoke bluntly. Since she had come to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island publicly, there was no need for her to be secretive. Even if she publicly revealed her relationship with Lin Yi, she believed that Lin Yi wouldn't mind. Primeval uncle master? The supervising disciple was slightly stunned. He thought that since she had come from afar, she was most likely here to visit on behalf of the Snow Sword sect. He didn't expect that she was here to see Lin Yi. Is there a problem? Looking at his weird expression, Bing Wuqing frowned. This. The supervising disciple hesitated. Nowadays, Lin Yi, the so-called primeval uncle master, was a highly controversial figure to the entire Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Because he stood on the opposite side of highest elder Qinjiu, except for Xanijia and the other disciples basically stayed away from him. After all, in their opinion, going against a nascent soul realm old monster was simply courting death, and there was no possibility of winning. Go and ask for instructions. I'll wait. Bing Wuqing didn't know what happened to Lin Yi and the others, but judging from the supervising disciple's reaction, she had vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Of course, before figuring out the specific situation, she couldn't act rashly. She could only wait and see. All right. The supervising disciple didn't dare to be negligent. Even if Bing Wuqing didn't say it, he had to report this kind of thing as soon as possible. How to deal with this uninvited guest wasn't something that a mere supervising disciple should worry about. Soon after, a few high-level gold core cultivators of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island hurriedly showed up. Their leader was none other than Lu Pingan, the direct disciple of highest elder Qinjiu. Chapter 53-55. After all, he was not only powerful and experienced but more importantly, he had the solid backing of the highest elder. In this aspect, the other Gold Core stage seniors could only look up to him. Looking at this scene, Bing Wuqing became more and more suspicious, because she didn't see Xianijia. Logically speaking, Xianijia was the one who had the closest relationship with Lin Yi among all the senior members of Green Cloud sect in the North Island, and he had also dealt with her before. Logically speaking, Xianijia should be the most suitable person to receive her at this time, so why didn't he even show his face? Bing Wuqing, my little friend, you've come from afar. Please forgive us for not going out to welcome you. Lu Pingan smiled and cupped his hands in greeting, behaving extremely politely. At least from his point of view, he was already very polite. Even if Bing Wuqing was also a Golden Core expert, she was still a junior to him. Addressing her as a young friend was already a form of flattery. Little did he know that Bing Wuqing was not even in the Gold Core stage now. He wasn't giving her face at all but was trying to flatter himself. It's okay. Bing Wuqing didn't care about this at all. Her reputation meant nothing to her, and she had never considered such things. She went straight to the point and said, "Can I pay a visit to your Grandmaster Lin Yi now? May I ask if there's anything special, my little friend Bing Wuqing? Is this your personal wish, or the wish of your sect?" Lu Pingan asked tentatively. "Personal," Bing Wuqing said directly. Lu Pingan raised his eyebrows, looked at the other Gold Core stage seniors beside him, and breathed a sigh of relief. If Bing Wuqing came to visit Lin Yi on behalf of the Snow Sword sect, it would be a big problem for them. After all, it was likely that Lin Yi had a close relationship with the Snow Sword sect. If they wanted to deal with Lin Yi, they would have to consider the feelings of the Snow Sword sect. Fortunately, this was Bing Wuqing's personal matter, so there was nothing to worry about. "I'm sorry, but Grandmaster Lin Yi is currently in seclusion. I'm afraid you've made a wasted trip. Please go back." Lu Pingan immediately asked her to leave without hesitation. Seclusion? Bing Wuqing frowned even more. If she hadn't sensed something strange just now, she might have believed it. But at this moment, his intuition told him that there was definitely a problem. As an expert, especially a super genius like Bing Wuqing, her instincts had always been extremely sharp. Not bad. Grandmaster Lin Yi has been in seclusion ever since he arrived here, and no one dares to disturb him. Hence, if my young friend Bing Wuqing wishes to visit him, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for the next opportunity, Lu Pingan said with an apologetic look on his face. He looked rather sincere. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing obviously wouldn't give up so easily. He glanced at Lu Pingan and said, "Take me to the Ascending Heaven Cliff." Lu Pingan was stunned for a moment. The other party's tone really confused him. Rather than saying it was a request, it sounded more like a condescending order. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? It was understandable that a talented genius like Bing Wuqing would be a little arrogant, but the problem was that this wasn't the Snow Sword sect, but the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. She had come all the way to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island to act like a tyrant. Didn't he think about the consequences of his actions? Moreover, even if Bing Wuqing's attitude was better and she made a request in a proper manner, Lu Pingan would never agree, because the request itself was already out of line. Although the Ascending Heaven Cliff was mostly used to imprison special people, it was a place of great significance to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Apart from the high-level Golden Core cultivators, even the disciples of the sect couldn't easily approach it, let alone open it to an outsider like Bing Wuqing. Moreover, Lin Yi was currently imprisoned on the Ascending Heaven Cliff. Now was the time for the standoff, so how could Lu Pingan allow an outsider like Bing Wuqing to see him? "I'm sorry, but the Ascending Heaven Cliff is a forbidden area of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Even the disciples of the sect can't approach it casually. Your request is a little too much." If it weren't for the other party's identity, Lu Pingan would have definitely started to chase her away without hesitation. However, she was after all a genius who used to be unparalleled in the Snow Sword sect of the Middle Island. If he embarrassed her too much, it would be equivalent to humiliating the entire Snow Sword sect to a certain extent. He didn't want to cause such unnecessary trouble. The Ascending Heaven Cliff is a forbidden area? Bing Wuqing raised her eyebrows. The more the other party tried to deny it, the more suspicious she became. However, she couldn't just fall out with him before figuring out the specific situation. She glanced at Lu Pingan and said, "Does this mean you can't make the decision?" The corner of Lu Pingan's eye twitched, and an inexplicable anger rose in his heart. What kind of contemptuous look was that? She was too condescending. That's right. Lu Pingan still didn't fall out with her. Holding back his anger, he said, If you want to let people enter the Ascending Heaven Cliff Forbidden Area, you have to at least have the right to decide. However, it just so happens that our sect leader and deputy sect leader are both busy, so we can't do it for the time being. Lu Pingon was already very well-mannered to be able to say this much. If it were anyone else, even if they didn't fall out with her face to face, they would definitely leave in a huff. Bing Wuqing, you're just a new junior, why are you acting like a big boss here? What about the Grand Supreme Elder? Your Grand Supreme Elder should have the right to do so, right? Take me to him, Bing Wuqing said smoothly. What? Lu Pingon and the others were collectively dumbfounded when they heard this. They looked at each other for a moment, then said, You want to see our Grand Supreme Elder? Yes, you're not going to tell me that your Grand Supreme Elder isn't here either, are you? Bing Wuqing asked casually. The Grand Supreme Elder is here and he does have the right to do so, but he's the stabilizing force of our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. How can you, an outsider, meet him just because you say so? Do you think that your Grand Supreme Elder will agree to meet anyone who comes and asks to see your Snow Sword sect's Grand Supreme Elder? Lu Pingon's face was tinged with sarcasm, and the other Gold Core stage higher-ups also looked contemptuous. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? Asking to see the Grand Supreme Elder as soon as he opened his mouth? Did he really think that the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island belonged to his family? That depends on who it is. Bing Wuqing wasn't angry about this. People like her, who were extremely rational and pragmatic, rarely got angry with others. What was the use of getting angry? Besides, they were on a different level now, so she wouldn't get angry easily. Chapter 53-56. If you're here on behalf of the Snow Sword sect, we can still consider it. But since it's your own business, there's nothing more to say. That's all I have to say. We've already given you and your sect a lot of face. Goodbye. What if I don't go? Bing Wuqing looked indifferent. Hearing that, Lu Pingon and the others' faces darkened. Their tone changed and they said, Those who come from afar are guests. The Blue Cloud sect of the North Island is not a place without rules. But if you insist on challenging our sect's bottom line, don't blame us for being impolite. As soon as he said that, several high-level Golden Core cultivators immediately surrounded Bing Wuqing. The other disciples of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island also became nervous. Without any orders, they spontaneously surrounded her from all directions. They all knew that Bing Wuqing was a Golden Core expert. Under normal circumstances, ordinary disciples wouldn't dare to get too close to her. But this was the territory of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, and Lu Pingon and a group of even more powerful high-level Golden Core cultivators were here. Of course, they had nothing to be afraid of. After all, if a fight really broke out, they wouldn't have to do anything. At most, they would just support her. After the fight, they could brag to others that they had fought Bing Wuqing. That would be a good topic of conversation. I don't want to fight. Even though Bing Wuqing said so, her hands didn't move at all. However, the materialized merciless ice force had already seeped out of her body in an instant. The group of Golden Core experts, including Lu Pingon, didn't even have time to react before a thin layer of ice covered their bodies. As for the ordinary disciples on the periphery, they weren't affected. If such a strong, ruthless ice momentum was used on them, a large number of them would die today. That would be a massacre and there would be no room for redemption. Even so, it was enough to frighten everyone present. They didn't dare to act rashly anymore. Especially the high-level Golden Core cultivators led by Lu Pingon. Although the ice only covered the surface of their bodies, it wasn't as serious as it was against Xue Jianfeng. However, their strength could not compare to Xue Jianfeng, a Golden Core perfection expert. The strongest among them was Lu Pingon. The strongest among them, Lu Pingon, was only at the peak of the late Golden Core stage. Being covered by the ice, everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. The piercing coldness seemed to come from the depths of their souls, making them tremble in fear. Under such circumstances, they would be lucky if they didn't kneel down, let alone fight back. What do you want to do? Lu Pingon knew that he still wouldn't give up. Although he was as scared as the others, this was the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Even if Bing Wuqing was really more powerful than them. He didn't believe that Bing Wuqing would dare to make a move here. She would be making an enemy of the entire Blue Cloud clan of the North Island, or even the entire North Island Alliance. Who would have the guts to do that? I've said it just now. I want to see your Grand Supreme Elder, Bing Wuqing said impassively. You think you can see him just like that? Lu Pingon was so angry that he gritted his teeth. His current state was one of anger and humiliation. That's right, the other party's sudden move had indeed shocked him. He had initially thought that Bing Wuqing was just a junior in the early stage of the Golden Elixir realm. He had not expected her to be such an expert. He finally realized that he had underestimated his enemy. But so what if he underestimated the enemy? Did he really think that he would be able to see the Grand Elder just by showing off a bit of his strength? What did this guy think the North Island Blue Cloud sect was? Did he really think that this was a place where he could behave atrociously? Bing Wuqing glanced at him and said a few words, which was rare for her. People are generally divided into two types. Some people have foresight and some people only realize it after a while. But I found out that you're the third type. What do you mean? Lu Pingan was stunned. I didn't realize it, Bing Wuqing said impassively. Lu Pingan was speechless for a long time. They all said that Bing Wuqing was a heartless person. Why was she so vicious today? Lu Pingan was about to retort when an inexplicable and powerful aura suddenly spread out from Bing Wuqing. This time, everyone's expression changed at the same time. They were even more frightened than when they were frozen by the merciless ice momentum. This aura. She was clearly a nascent soul realm old monster. Lu Pingan almost peed his pants. The expression on his face was brilliant. He would never have thought that Bing Wuqing, a young junior, was already a nascent soul realm old monster at the top. You're really Bing Wuqing? Lu Pingan asked a stupid question subconsciously. Of course, the other party was Bing Wuqing. Even if she didn't say her name, they could still recognize her. After all, she was the leader of the younger generation back then. The higher-ups of the primeval sects would more or less pay attention to her. However, Lu Pingan couldn't believe the fact that Bing Wuqing had become a nascent soul realm old monster. After all, it was too shocking. Bing Wuqing ignored him and said directly, "Do I have the right to see your highest elder now?" Everyone looked at each other, then turned their heads stiffly to look at Lu Pingan. When they were frozen just now, they thought that they could still fight with the other party with the advantage of numbers and home advantage. But now that they found out that the other party was actually a nascent soul realm old monster, this absurd idea was immediately thrown out of Java. Against a nascent soul realm old monster, it would be difficult to win even if there were another 40 of them, let alone the 4 Golden Core experts present. With the intrinsic difference between the Golden Core and nascent soul realm, it was not something that could be made up for with numbers alone. There was only one way to deal with a nascent soul realm old monster, and that was to let the nascent soul realm old monster of their own sect fight in person. It was also because of this that the status of nascent soul realm old monsters in the primeval underworld was so high that it directly became a key indicator of a sect's status. There was nothing that could be done about it. An archaic sect with a nascent soul old monster as its overseer was indeed stronger than one without one. If they really fought, a nascent soul old monster was enough to annihilate any ordinary sect. These ordinary sects didn't have any means to fight back, so what could they do? I didn't expect your excellency to already be the highest elder of the Snow Sword sect. We've been disrespectful. Lu Pingan's expression was extremely ugly, but he had no choice but to force a smile. He smiled apologetically and said, "The highest elder is the highest representative of a sect. Since it's a matter of the highest elder, it's also a matter of the entire sect. Please wait in the guest hall, I'll go and report to my highest elder right now." After saying that, Lu Pingan did not dare to delay any further. He gestured to the other Golden Core experts to entertain Bing Wuqing, while he hurried to the top of the mountain. Chapter 53-57. These days they had been in a stalemate. Lu Pingan was in charge of the negotiation. Seeing that Qin Dongqing's breath was getting weaker day by day, Lu Pingan became more and more anxious. It could be said that he was looking forward to this personal disciple who could take on a big responsibility to bring him good news as soon as possible. Unfortunately, this time his hope was obviously going to fail again. Reporting to Master, not yet. Lu Pingan was a little embarrassed. Not only did Qinjiu have high hopes for him, but he was also ready to show his skills these days. After all, his direct opponent was Xianijia, who was almost the most unattractive person among all the high-level gold core stage cultivators in the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Whether in terms of strength, status, or shrewdness, Lu Pingan believed that he could at least leave the other party behind by 10 streets. However, he did not expect that such a sloppy and ordinary good guy would suddenly become an impervious old fox after sitting at the negotiating table. No matter what strategy he used, it would always be kicked back to his feet in the end. That was not all. The key was that Xianijia did not just kick the ball around. Every time he was reasonable and eloquent, which made Lu Pingan unable to find any room to refute. Every time he could only sigh. "Xianijia, you can't judge a book by its cover. You're too slow." Qinjiu's eyes were somewhat unfathomable. Although it was said that there was no need to be suspicious of a person, and the other party was also his most successful pro-disciple, so there was nothing to be suspicious about. However, he was naturally suspicious, and after a long time, it was inevitable that he would have doubts. Moreover, from Lu Pinggan's standpoint, there was indeed a motive in this regard. After all, if Chen Dongqing was really exhausted to death, Lu Pinggan was likely to be the biggest beneficiary. Yes, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I will speed up the negotiation and buy time for Deputy Leader Chen. Lu Pinggan was frightened by this sentence and quickly showed his loyalty. Tell me what's wrong? Qin Jiao glanced at him. At this time, although Lu Pinggan was not seriously injured, he was unprecedentedly embarrassed. Looking at the whole Green Cloud sect in the North Island, there were very few people who could threaten him, an expert at the peak of the late Gold Core stage, unless Lin Yi took action himself. Yes, Bing Wuqing from the Snow Sword sect came to visit and asked to see Lin Yi. After I refused, she changed her request. She wants to see you, master. Lu Pinggan said respectfully. Bing Wuqing. Hearing this, Qin Jiao thought for a moment and vaguely had an impression of it. He casually said, Isn't it just a young boy who just entered the Gold Core stage? Just send him away. Do you need to report such a trivial matter? That's what I thought in the beginning. But that won't do. He's a newly advanced original infant stage expert. I can't chase him away. Lu Pinggan could only smile bitterly. What? Original soul stage? Even Qin Jiao couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this. The birth of any new nascent soul old monster was a big event that could shake the entire immemorial martial arts world. Due to the great difficulty of breaking through to the nascent soul realm, it was impossible to achieve it without a few years' time. Normally they would have received news of it in advance. How could this fellow succeed without a word? Moreover, Bing Wuqing was so young. Could it be a smokescreen? Seeing Qin Jiao's doubts, Lu Ping and hurriedly said, It's true, this disciple and a few other elders have personally felt his aura. He is indeed a nascent soul expert, there is no doubt about this. Lead the way, Qin Jiao said solemnly. There was no way Lu Ping would lie to him about something like this. Since he had confirmed that the other party was a nascent soul old monster, he had to make a personal appearance. Otherwise, Lu Ping wouldn't be able to handle it alone. He wasn't qualified. Very soon, Qin Jiao appeared in front of Bing Wuqing. He stepped forward and chuckled. Everyone says that Bing Wuqing of the Snow Sword faction is a super genius that no one has ever seen before and will ever see again. I didn't quite believe it in the past, but today I have no choice but to believe it. If I remember correctly, my young friend, Wuqing, is probably the youngest nascent soul expert in the history of the immemorial martial arts world. Congratulations. You flatter me. I'm not the youngest. The legendary figure of your faction who is known as the Great Emperor should be younger than me, right? Bing Wuqing asked seriously. Qin Jiao's smile immediately became a little awkward. He had said those words of praise just to warm up a little. Who knew that the other party would be so unreasonable as to directly refute him to his face? She was indeed young. I'd like to pay a visit to the immemorial martial granduncle Lin Yi of your faction. Just now he said that he needed you, the Grand Supreme Elder, to personally make a decision. I wonder if you can fulfill this small request of mine? Bing Wuqing went straight to the point. This. On the surface he pretended to be hesitant, but in fact Qin Jiao couldn't help but start cursing in his heart. Bing Wuqing was a hothead who didn't know the rules at all. Not only did she completely ignore the established rules of visiting, but even her tone was so stiff. How did this person suddenly become a nascent soul expert? However, cursing aside, Qin Jiao couldn't show it on his face. After all, the other party was an out-and-out nascent soul expert. Compared to her, even if he was a little stronger, he didn't dare to directly fall out with her. What if both of them were injured? Moreover, even if he could kill Bing Wuqing on the spot, he would definitely be severely injured. But don't forget, other than Bing Wuqing, there was another veteran nascent soul old monster in the Snow Sword faction. If he came looking for revenge, how was he going to deal with them? In the small immemorial underworld, every nascent soul old monster was equivalent to a nuclear weapon in the secular world. They definitely couldn't be attacked easily. Otherwise, a careless move could lead to a world war that wouldn't end until one side was wiped out. For every sect involved, that would be an unbearable disaster. You're the Grand Supreme Elder, are you going to say that you don't have this authority? Bing Wuqing asked with a frown. Haha, my young friend, you must be joking. Of course I have this authority. However, it just so happens that Lin Yi is in seclusion at the Ascending Heaven Cliff right now. Even I can't rashly interrupt him. Otherwise, there might be unimaginable consequences. In my opinion, if my young friend really wants to see the immemorial martial granduncle, why don't you wait a little longer? Qinjiu tried to beat around the bush. Wait. Bing Wuqing raised her eyebrows. That's right. My young friend, you've never been to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. During this period of time, you can travel around and experience the local customs of the North Island. When the immemorial martial granduncle comes out of seclusion, I'll send someone to inform you immediately. What do you think, my young friend? Qinjiu suggested. Chapter 53-58. Broadcast, follow Qidian reading, and get the first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Students who haven't snatched red packets since the new year can now show their skills. In the eyes of an extremely pragmatic person like him, there was no such thing as sentimentality. He only cared about the pros and cons. As long as the pros outweighed the cons, he would act without hesitation. The reason why he didn't take any action now was because he hadn't figured out the situation yet, so he couldn't act rashly. After much persuasion, Bing Wuqing was finally persuaded to leave. Of course, she didn't really leave, but was just temporarily stabilized. Qinjiu even specifically asked Lu Pingan to arrange an extremely secluded residence for her, afraid that she would do something out of control if she interacted with the ordinary disciples. After all, the destructive power of an original infant stage expert was not to be underestimated. Keep a close eye on him. If he does anything, report to me immediately. Qinjiu exhorted. Initially Lin Yi was his greatest threat, but now it had become Bing Wuqing. After all, the latter was a true nascent soul expert and she was an existence that could truly threaten him. How do I keep a close eye on him? Lu Pingan's face was bitter. It would be fine if she was a golden core stage expert, but she was a original infant stage expert who could easily flatten him with one hand. How could he keep a close eye on her? You don't have to keep an eye on his every move. Just make sure that the other disciples of our sect don't come into contact with him, especially not let him get close to Sky Cliff. Qinjiu also knew that this request was a little too much, but it had to be done. He didn't know what the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi was, but neither of them was easy to deal with. If they really joined forces, even Qinjiu would have a headache. Yes. Lu Pingan could only reluctantly agree. It was not very realistic for him to keep a close eye on Bing Wuqing with his strength, but he could change his way of thinking and keep an eye on those suspicious people who might get close to Bing Wuqing, such as Xianijia. Little did he know that when he and Qinjiu were delaying Bing Wuqing, Xianijia, who got wind of the news, had already gone to Sky Cliff and told Lin Yi about Bing Wuqing's visit in full detail. Not bad. Lin Yi smiled faintly after listening. Although Bing Wuqing's quick advancement to the nascent soul realm was somewhat unexpected, he did not find it strange. After all, he was the one who had given her the supreme grade golden elixir of condensing nascent soul realm. What he meant by not bad was actually the attitude that Bing Wuqing had displayed during this trip. She was showing her loyalty. Condensing the nascent soul so quickly is only not bad? Xianijia was dumbfounded. In the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island, apart from Lin Yi, he was probably the one who knew Bing Wuqing the best. A year ago she was at the early stage of Gold Core just like him. But in the blink of an eye she had become a Yuanying realm old weirdo. How could he bear this? I mean, his attitude is not bad. Lin Yi explained. Even though he had long known that Bing Wuqing was someone who knew how to adapt to circumstances, this fellow had not become arrogant at all after she had formed her nascent soul. She was actually so obedient, which was really rare. It was obvious that all those elixirs had not been wasted. He's one of us? Xianijia's eyes widened when he heard this. He had been wondering why Bing Wuqing had to come to see Lin Yi, but now he suddenly understood. He looked at Lin Yi with even more awe. He could even tame a genius like Bing Wuqing. Granduncle was really unfathomable. That's right. Lin Yi nodded. Since Bing Wuqing had come to the North Island, there was no need to hide this kind of thing anymore. It was more meaningful to announce it openly. With such a powerful follower, not only could it greatly deter the enemies, but it could also improve their self-confidence and cohesion at the same time. It was killing two birds with one stone. Granduncle is mighty. As expected, Xianijia was very excited and sincerely admired Lin Yi. He felt lucky that he had bet on the right person. Since Lin Yi could even tame a Yuanying realm expert like Bing Wuqing, it would be a piece of cake for him to deal with Qinjiu, who was also a Yuanying realm old weirdo. He wouldn't have to be so worried in the future. Lin Yi looked indifferent. At his level, it would be too degrading for him to be excited about such a small thing. Granduncle, what should we do next? Should I contact Bing Wuqing? Xianijia asked in high spirits. Do you think you can contact her? Lin Yi glanced at him. It seems a little difficult. Xianijia felt like a bucket of cold water was poured over his head. He could easily figure out that Lu Pingan would do everything possible to prevent him from getting in touch with Bing Wuqing. Moreover, he wasn't strong enough to force his way in. It was easy to talk about contacting Bing Wuqing, but it was very difficult to actually do it. It's not urgent. Don't be impatient. Linny smiled. Although they had been in a stalemate during this period of time, strictly speaking, they had always been the ones who had the upper hand. Now that Bing Wuqing was here, it was even more so. Qinjiao should be the one anxious now, not him, so there was no need to panic at all. They could just wait and see. All right. Xianijia was a little resentful. It was rare to have someone as powerful as Bing Wuqing here. He thought it was just the right time to wrestle with Qinjiao. For a native of the small Jianghu world like him, the deterrence of a nascent soul-old monster was deep-rooted. Even though he had the upper hand in the situation before, he always felt frightened, and always felt that his side wasn't strong enough. Now that he finally had a nascent soul stage expert who was on par with him, his mood was completely different from before. Seeing this, Linny couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that Xianijia, who had always been a good guy who only knew how to protect himself, would have a belligerent side. It was really unexpected. But then again, although the situation forced him to stand on the opposite side of Qinjiao, Linny actually didn't want to make a big fuss. After all, his relationship with the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island was not fake. It would be best if it could be resolved peacefully. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Bing Wuqing had stayed in the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island for a few days. Because of Lu Pingan's deliberate arrangement, she rarely interacted with the ordinary disciples of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, and had no chance to directly contact Xianijia. But with her strength, if she really wanted to do something, Lu Pingan couldn't stop her at all. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't want to fall out with Qinjiao for the time being, Bing Wuqing would have already broken into climbing Heaven Cliff. Even if she chose not to move for the time being, it wasn't difficult for him to find out some news. After a few days, he had a general understanding of Lin Yi's situation. Judging from the current situation, although Lin Yi was trapped in climbing Heaven Cliff, he still had the upper hand in this confrontation with highest elder Qinjiao. At least Qinjiao didn't dare to do anything to him. However, Lin Yi also couldn't get out of the reaching Heaven Matrix. This was probably Qinjiao's only chance to win. Chapter 53-59. Broadcast. Follow Chidian Reading, and get the first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Students who haven't grabbed red packets since the new year can now show their skills. This result made Bing Wuqing feel a little more at ease. She had come all the way here in high spirits to show her loyalty to Lin Yi. If Lin Yi were to be killed by Qinjiao, that old man with his home advantage, that would be the end of her. However, although Lin Yi had the upper hand, it was not a solution to keep this stalemate. Bing Wuqing had already specially inquired about the One Step to Heaven Matrix, and she knew that this matrix was extremely mysterious, and even a nascent soul realm old monster might not be able to break out of it. Although Lin Yi was unfathomable and no one could figure out his background, there was one thing that was certain. At least for now, this primordial spirit of his was far from the level of the nascent soul realm, and breaking out of the matrix would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. And if he didn't have the confidence to break the formation, this little initiative was just fleeting. Since he came to the Green Cloud sect in the North Island to show his loyalty, Bing Wuqing couldn't just wait and do nothing. If he didn't even get to see Lin Yi in the end, his trip would be in vain. Breaking into the Heaven Cliff by force was the worst option. Bing Wuqing didn't consider looking for Xianijia, because she didn't know if he was on Lin Yi's side. There was only one thing she could do, and that was to look for Qinjiao. As an expert of the nascent soul stage, it wasn't difficult for Bing Wuqing to see Qinjiao. If Lu Pingan dared to refuse, he could force Qinjiao to show up with a simple threat. In fact, Lu Pingan didn't even need to be forced, because he had already asked Qinjiao to come out. After all, he wasn't a fool. After his personal experience last time, Lu Pingan knew very well that he had no room to bargain with Bing Wuqing, because they weren't at the same level. No matter what she asked, he just had to do it obediently and Qinjiao would deal with it. Otherwise, if he really made a decision and annoyed Bing Wuqing, even Qinjiao might not be able to protect him. After staying in my North Island Blue Cloud sect for a few days, are you used to it, Wuqing? Qinjiao greeted him with a smile. It doesn't matter if I'm used to it or not. I'm here to meet your primordial Grand Master, not to sightsee. Bing Wuqing didn't give them any face as usual. Hee little friend Wuqing, you really have a true temperament. You're still so straightforward with your words. Qinjiao laughed awkwardly. Nascent soul realm old monsters were the highest existences in the immemorial martial world, and there was a set of established rules and regulations when interacting with each other. Unfortunately, these things did not work on Bing Wuqing at all. To put it bluntly, the other party did not even know the rules in this regard, so what could one say about her? I'm not good with words, please forgive me, Elder Qin. But there's something I'd like to ask again. When can I go to Heaven Ascending Cliff? Bing Wuqing asked again. Didn't I say it last time? It depends on when Grandmaster Lin Yi comes out of seclusion. I don't know the exact relationship between little friend Wuqing and him, but he's the Grand Master of my primordial Blue Cloud sect after all, so I definitely have to think for his sake. I hope little friend Wuqing can forgive me for this. Qinjiu put on a show of being considerate for Lin Yi. Is that so? But why did I hear the disciples of your North Island Blue Cloud sect talking in private, saying that Elder Qin and your Grand Master Lin Yi don't seem to be on good terms? Even your Qin family's most valued deputy sect leader Qin Dongqing was beaten up by Lin Yi. Am I right? Bing Wuqing exposed him mercilessly. What? There's such a thing? Qinjiu pretended to be confused and glared at Lu Pingan, who was beside him. Previously, he thought that this personal disciple of his was quite capable and could take on great responsibilities, but in the end, he couldn't even do such a small thing. He was also a good-for-nothing. Lu Pingan smiled bitterly. These days, he had been trying to think of ways to prevent the disciples of his sect from having contact with Bing Wuqing, but he couldn't stop the disciples from talking in private. The disciples of the Qin family sect were fine, but the numerous local sects wouldn't be so obedient. With Bing Wuqing's ability, as long as someone talked about her, she would naturally know. This matter couldn't be blamed on him at all. But since Qinjiu was glaring at him, Lu Pingan could only continue. He also pretended to be confused and said, "It can't be, right? Although Grand Supreme Elder and Grand Master haven't officially met, that's because Grand Master has been busy with seclusion ever since he arrived. They haven't even seen each other, so how could there be any conflict? Then what's the matter with Deputy Sect Leader Qin?" Bing Wuqing looked at the two's expressions. "Oh, Deputy Sect Leader Qin isn't here at the moment. He's out on official business, so those discussions you've heard should be nonsense. Those disciples often talk nonsense in private. Please don't laugh at them." Lu Pingan tried to fool him. Bing Wuqing looked straight into his eyes, and Lu Pingan didn't dare to meet her eyes at all. Slowly she said, "You're lying." Huh? Lu Pingan was taken aback, but he quickly forced a smile and said, "Elder Bing, you must be joking. Everything I've said is absolutely true and I'm not hiding anything." Bing Wuqing didn't say anything. She was very sure that the other party was lying. However, since the other party refused to admit it, there was no way she could expose him face to face, unless she could find a witness to confront him or find Qin Dongqing. Unfortunately, neither of these two options were realistic. Looks like everything is clear now. It's just some disciples gossiping. You don't have to take it too seriously, my young friend Wuqing. If there's any news about Grand Master Lin Yi, we'll definitely inform you immediately. Please don't be impatient. Qinjiu finally stepped forward and said. At this point, Bing Wuqing naturally couldn't say anything more. She immediately turned and left. After Bing Wuqing left for a long time, Lu Pingan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He said worriedly, "Master, this Bing Wuqing isn't easy to fool. I'm worried that he'll stir up more trouble. The key is that he's in the nascent soul stage. I can't stop him even if I want to. What if he really does something out of line?" "What do you mean?" "Tell everyone to shut up. If anyone dares to gossip again, tell him to come and see me," Qinjiu snorted coldly. "But what about Xianijia? Theoretically, no one in the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, from the top management of the Golden Core stage to the ordinary disciples, whether they were from the Qin family's faction or the local faction, dared to disobey the order personally from Qinjiu, but Xianijia was an anomaly. This guy was obviously on Lin Yi's side. They were bound together for good or bad. How could he be frightened by Qinjiu's order? Humph, if he doesn't listen, you'll keep an eye on him." Qinjiu's eyes turned sharp. If it weren't for the fact that Qin Dongqing was caught, and if it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that Qin Dongqing wouldn't be able to be saved after falling out with Lin Yi, he would have asked someone to get rid of this reckless Xianijia long ago. Chapter 5360. Latest news. Tomorrow is 515 Qidian's anniversary celebration, the day with the most benefits. Apart from the gift bags and school bags, the 515 red packets must be searched. There's no reason not to snatch them. Set the alarm clock, yes. Lu Pingan's heart skipped a beat. He thought that he had disappointed Qinjiu again and again. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, there would be nothing left to say. However, it turned out that stopping Xianijia from getting close to Bing Wuqing was not a small matter, especially not a small matter. To be precise, it was not difficult to stop Xianijia from getting close to Bing Wuqing, but the key was what if Bing Wuqing took the initiative to look for Xianijia? Bing Wuqing hadn't thought of this before, but after hearing the rumors, even an outsider could see that Xianijia was on Lin Yi's side. In this situation, if she wanted to get in touch with Lin Yi, the best way was to go through Xianijia other than to force her way through climbing Heaven Cliff. Lu Pingan couldn't stop them at all. He didn't dare to and couldn't stop them. He could only watch Bing Wuqing and Xianijia talk, unable to do anything. After hearing the news, Qin Jiao, the Grand Supreme Elder, finally couldn't sit still anymore. He frowned and said, "What's the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi?" Just to see Lin Yi, she flew thousands of miles from Middle Island to North Island. She couldn't get rid of him no matter how many times she tried, and now she won't leave. Is there an end to this? Both he and Lu Pingan had probed the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi during their previous 2 meetings. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing's mouth was tight and she didn't reveal anything. "Master, we can't go on like this. It's too dangerous to let such an unstable factor stay here. We have to find a reason to persuade her to leave as soon as possible," Lu Pingan said with a bitter face. Facing a nascent soul cultivator like Bing Wuqing, he really didn't know what to do. He was completely led by the nose and something would happen sooner or later. "Do you think you can get rid of such a plague just because you want to?" How could Qin Jiao not want to get rid of Bing Wuqing as soon as possible? But with Bing Wuqing's attitude, if he was not allowed to see Lin Yi, how could he possibly leave? He won't stop until he reaches his goal. If he doesn't see Lin Yi, it's unrealistic to let him leave just like that. "Master, why don't we just let him go to Ascending Heaven Cliff?" Lu Pingan suggested. "Humph, you are too naive. Do you think he will leave obediently after seeing Lin Yi? With the current situation, if he really has a good relationship with Lin Yi, wouldn't he stay to help Lin Yi and make us have one more powerful enemy?" Qin Jiao scoffed at this suggestion. Release Bing Wuqing to see Lin Yi? Unless he was out of his mind, he wouldn't do something so stupid. If that happened, there would only be one outcome. It would definitely not be Bing Wuqing retreating obediently, but Lin Yi would be like a tiger that had grown wings. One Lin Yi was enough to render him helpless. If Bing Wuqing, who was in the nascent soul stage, was added to the mix, how could he handle it? "Master, actually, I don't think it's impossible," Lu Pingan said meaningfully. "Oh?" Qin Jiao frowned. But seeing that his expression was firm, he motioned for him to continue. "Master, putting Bing Wuqing aside, our negotiation with Lin Yi has already reached a stalemate. Deputy Sect Leader Chen's health condition is deteriorating day by day. We really can't drag this on any longer. We need to find a way to break out of this stalemate as soon as possible, and this Bing Wuqing just happens to be a good way to break out of this stalemate," Lu Pingan said. "Be more specific." Qin Jiao's interest was immediately piqued. "Yes, since it's a negotiation, there will always be concessions and compromises. I think we can make a concession and let Bing Wuqing see Lin Yi, but on the condition that Lin Yi can cure Deputy Sect Leader Qin," Lu Pingan said. "Do you think Lin Yi will agree?" Qin Jiao said thoughtfully. "It depends on what he has in mind. Everyone knows that you're the stabilizing force of our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Without your approval, no one can gain a foothold here. So if Lin Yi wants to gain a foothold in our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he'll have to reach a compromise with you in the end. In that case, as long as he's given a suitable way out, he'll definitely choose to concede," Lu Pingan analyzed. "But what if he has other intentions?" Qin Jiao frowned. "Since there's nothing left to say, then there's nothing more to say. No matter what, we can at least sound out the other party's attitude. In order to break out of this stalemate, we have to make the first move. What do you think, Master?" Lu Pingan suggested carefully. They were already in a passive position, and now with the addition of Bing Wuqing, there was nothing more to say. Since they had no choice but to make the first move, they might as well be straightforward and sound out the other party's stance. Qin Jiao pondered for a moment. Given Qin Dongqing's current state, it was indeed inappropriate to delay any further. In the end, he could only nod and say, "Then let's do it this way. You go and talk to them, but you have to remember that our purpose is not just to sound them out. The most important thing is to find a way to get Bing Wuqing away as soon as possible. As long as she's gone, everything else is our internal problem. We can talk about it however we want, and it's not impossible for me to meet Lin Yi in person. In other words, as long as they manage to get rid of Bing Wuqing, a huge external threat, then Lin Yi would not be able to escape from his palm no matter how capable he was in the face of a supreme elder in the nascent soul realm." "Understood." Lu Pingan immediately responded and left. Faced with Lu Pingan's concession this time, Xianijia was somewhat surprised and shocked. But after thinking about it, it made sense. After all, Bing Wuqing, a master in the nascent soul realm, had come all the way here to help. If Chen Jiao continued to insist, they would be the ones to suffer in the end. This time, of course, Xianijia would not evade it like before. Instead, he brought Lu Pingan to Linyi